Chapter 281, Zhao Lin's Suspicions. 10,000-year stalactite milk. Duan Lingtian's heart couldn't help but tremble when he heard what Zhao Lin said, but the expression on his face was still as though nothing had happened. The first thought in his heart was, how could this Zhao Lin know of 10,000-year stalactite milk? Since he'd discovered the 10,000-year stalactite milk, besides he and the two little girls, there absolutely wasn't a fourth person that knew of it. This was something that he was incomparably sure of. Of course, he was confident that it was absolutely impossible that the two little girls had leaked the news. So now there was a problem. How the heck did Zhao Lin know of it? Elder Zhao Lin, what did you say just now? What stalactite milk? Why don't I understand anything that you said? Is there some sort of misunderstanding? Duan Lingtian's expression didn't change and looked at Zhao Lin with a calm gaze, then frowned slightly with a confused expression. Duan Lingtian was extremely confident in his control of changing his expressions. He was confident that, right now, even if Zhao Lin were to carefully size him up, it would be impossible for him to see any inkling of the truth from his expression. Misunderstanding. The corners of Zhao Lin's mouth curled into a sneer and his eyes stared fixedly at Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian, needless to say, you're extremely good at acting, as if you really don't know of the 10,000-year stalactite milk, but, you can't deceive me. Elder Zhao Lin, what do you mean? What do you mean by I'm acting? Duan Lingtian frowned, and his face seemed to be enveloped in a layer of confusion, as if he was not affected by Zhao Lin's words in the slightest. What do I mean? Zhao Lin glanced deeply at Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian, the changes of your body have completely sold you out. I heard from Elder Lu Chu that when you just entered our 7-star sword sect a few days ago, your skin was bronze. But overnight, you allowed yourself to undergo a change that seemed like rebirth, and even your skin was transformed to become delicate like a baby. As he spoke up to here, Zhao Lin stopped and stared at Duan Lingtian with a burning gaze. I once saw the records relating to the 10,000-year stalactite milk in an ancient book, and the changes of your body are absolutely unable to not be related to 10,000-year stalactite milk. So, you don't have to conceal it before me, because you're utterly unable to deceive me. What Zhao Lin said caused Duan Lingtian to be shocked in his heart. Now, he finally understood why Zhao Lin would know of the 10,000-year stalactite milk, so it turned out that everything was his own fault. This Zhao Lin associated the changes on his body with the 10,000-year stalactite milk. Duan Lingtian's expression remained unfazed as he lightly smiled. Elder Zhao Lin, I think you've misunderstood. Before this, I was completely unaware of any 10,000-year stalactite milk. As for the rebirth you spoke of, it ought to be related to the cultivation method I'm cultivating. Duan Lingtian naturally wouldn't admit that he'd consumed 10,000-year stalactite milk. Do you think that you can deceive me like this? Zhao Lin stared fixedly at Duan Lingtian and the corners of his mouth curled into a disdainful sneer. Duan Lingtian calmly gazed at Zhao Lin, then slowly replied indifferently. Elder Zhao Lin, believe it if you want to. I never asked you to believe me. I only want to tell Elder Zhao Lin that Cloud Continent is extremely large, and there isn't only the 10,000-year stalactite milk that you spoke of that is able to allow one to undergo rebirth. The cultivation method, the Muscle Meridian Rebirth Scroll, is similarly able to allow one to undergo rebirth. Zhao Lin frowned, and his gaze descended onto Duan Lingtian's face. At this moment, any changes in Duan Lingtian's expression would be unable to escape his observation, and he paid particularly close attention to his eyes. Slowly, even if Zhao Lin was any more confident, his heart couldn't help but be slightly swayed. He naturally knew what Duan Lingtian said wasn't nonsense, as the size of Cloud Continent was far beyond his imagination. The 10,000-year stalactite milk was something he'd seen within an ancient book, and before that he was completely unaware of the existence of 10,000-year stalactite milk and its effects. Duan Lingtian's heart slightly jerked, as now when he saw the change in Zhao Lin's expression, he knew that Zhao Lin was swayed. His objective had been achieved. You really don't know of the 10,000-year stalactite milk? Zhao Lin looked at Duan Lingtian with a pair of eyes that flickered with a fierce gaze, and the aura of a void-prying stage martial artist pressed onto Duan Lingtian. Although this aura was absolutely nothing to Duan Lingtian, at that time Duan Lingtian intentionally trembled. He then took a deep breath before his face turned red from suffocation and spoke with a trembling voice. Elder Zhao Ling, everything I said is the truth. Zhao Lin no longer suspected Duan Lingtian when he saw him standing firmly to what he said before. So much so that even while enduring his entire imposing manner, there wasn't much of a change in Duan Lingtian's expression. He was convinced that even if Duan Lingtian was a capable actor, he absolutely would be unable to continue acting under the imposing aura of his void-prying stage cultivation. When he saw Zhao Lin's current expression, Duan Lingtian was clear in his heart that Zhao Lin had already dispersed all suspicion of him. As for why Zhao Lin would so easily dispel the suspicion on him, Duan Lingtian naturally knew the reason and couldn't help but snicker. Zhao Lin really thought that a mere first-level void-prying stage imposing aura was able to cause him to bend over. Wishful thinking. Elder Zhao Lin, if there's nothing else then I'll be taking my leave. Duan Lingtian nodded to Zhao Lin, then spoke before walking off in large strides. This time Zhao Lin didn't stop Duan Lingtian. He turned around and his gaze descended onto Duan Lingtian's leaving figure, the corners of his mouth lightly jerking up as he muttered. Muscle Meridian Rebirth Scroll, a cultivation method able to allow one to undergo rebirth. Looks like I still have to pay more attention to this Duan Lingtian. If the cultivation method is really able to have the same effect of rebirth as the 10,000-year stalactite milk. Zhao Lin's eyes abruptly lit up and within it the traces of greed and desire were mixed. Zhao Lin's gaze caused the surrounding crowd of Megrez Peak disciples to shudder in fear, and they all moved aside, deeply afraid of being targeted. Oh my god, Elder Zhao Lin actually let that pretty boy leave, could it be that he's succeeded? Didn't all of you notice Elder Zhao Lin's current gaze? I think he ought to have succeeded. That junior brother is really pitiable, in the end he was still unable to flee from Elder Zhao Lin's evil clutches. The crowd of Megrez Peak disciples whispered in discussion. Duan Lingtian naturally didn't know about all this. After he walked past Zhao Lin he'd slipped back and forth between the streams of people on Megrez Peak. Winding around for half an hour, he confirmed that it was impossible for him to be followed and once again headed towards the peak. On the way, Duan Lingtian couldn't help but let out a sigh. So close. Duan Lingtian still had a slight lingering fear in his heart when he recalled the incident earlier, he'd nearly been exposed. He never imagined that Zhao Lin had actually linked the changes in his skin to the 10,000-year stalactite milk, moreover, Zhao Lin had guessed correctly. Luckily, Zhao Lin was thoroughly bluffed by him and ought to not look for trouble with him in the short term. Whoosh! Duan Lingtian once again leapt down the cliff at the top of Megrez Peak, then passed through the clouds and mist to descend onto the tilted tree. After returning into the stalactite cave behind the passage within the cave in the cliff, Duan Lingtian withdrew a pile of materials and started inscribing the blaze inscription. The blaze inscription was an inscription that was capable of annihilating an existence at the half-step void stage. The spiritual force that was spent for merely one inscription was comparable to 3 bone corrosion inscriptions. When he inscribed the last step, Duan Lingtian's eyelids were heavy and he fell into a deep slumber. Duan Lingtian didn't know how long he slept for. In his deep slumber, he had a dream. Within the dream, he once again encountered the void stage powerhouse Sun Rui that he'd once met in the misty forest. After trampling on his honor, Su Rui attacked him, and a terrifying force swept over to envelop him. Duan Lingtian was instantly jolted awake, his body drenched in cold sweat from fear. Only after some time did he release a breath of air. It was a dream. Duan Lingtian took a deep breath and his eyes blazed coldly. Sun Rui, I'll come to the Black Fiend sect to look for you sooner or later. He'd had the same dream no less than 10 times these last few years. Duan Lingtian never expected that Sun Rui's existence would actually become his nightmare. The scenes from that year were still vivid in his mind when he recalled it now. He knew that if he wanted to remove this nightmare, then he must start with Sun Rui. Only by trampling Sun Rui beneath his feet would he be able to completely dispel this nightmare and cause it to not appear anymore. Duan Lingtian's gaze slowly descended onto one of the spatial rings on his hand. It could be vaguely seen that on a side of the spatial ring was a complicated pattern that combined into a small flame brand. This was the blaze inscription. Now that Shangquan isn't by my side, my strongest move is this blaze inscription. Duan Lingtian took a deep breath and focused his gaze. However, even this blaze inscription is unable to be of any use against a void-prying stage martial artist, like that Zhao Lin. Even though he's only a first-level void-prying stage martial artist, it's impossible for my blaze inscription to deal with him. Duan Lingtian felt pressured. Although he'd already removed Zhao Lin's suspicions, unconsciously he had the feeling that with the nature of that Zhao Lin, he wouldn't let go of the matter so easily. Never mind, this is the 7-star sword sect after all. So long as there are 7-star sword sect disciples present, he probably wouldn't dare lightly make a move against me. Duan Lingtian shook his head as he knew he was thinking too much. Zhao Lin was an outer court elder of the 7-star sword sect after all, and unless he had a legitimate reason he wouldn't dare to lightly make a move against Duan Lingtian. So hungry. In next to no time, Duan Lingtian roasted another suckling pig and gobbled it down. This was the last suckling pig that Duan Lingtian had stored. Even though there were many spatial rings in his possession, most of them were only grade 7 spirit weapons. They had limited space and were only able to contain a certain amount of suckling pigs. Looks like I have to suitably store up more food. Duan Lingtian thought inwardly. He never treated himself shabbily when it came to food, because he knew that only when he ate well would he have more strength and be able to obtain better results from less effort during cultivation. If he ate food that lacked nourishment like dry rations, there wouldn't be a shred of benefit to his body. So, when it came to food, Duan Lingtian always paid extremely great attention to it. 281 Chapter 282, Life and Death Arena Invitation. There was a wide variety of things being traded in the Megrez Peaks Trade Hall, and among them was the flesh of various wild animals and fierce beasts. Duan Lingtian arrived at the trade hall once again and spent a bit of silver to buy a large amount of wild animal meat that was frozen, filling a few of his spatial rings. Duan Lingtian walked out of the trade hall. Just when he intended to leave, he seemed to notice something and looked into the distance. On the chain bridge, two figures walked swiftly to step onto the stone platform of Megrez Peak. These two young men were similar to him in that they were both 7-star sword sect outer court disciples. Duan Lingtian wasn't unfamiliar with these two people. Enemies really are bound to meet. After he recognized these two people, the corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth curled into a cold smile. When he noticed these two people, they, who'd just walked off the Megrez Peak stone platform, noticed Duan Lingtian as well. Instantly, a trace of pleasant surprise appeared on their faces. It's him. He finally appeared. After the two young men noticed Duan Lingtian, their faces were full of excitement and wind blew past their legs as they swiftly flew over in the blink of an eye. They exerted their movement techniques to the utmost limit. Duan Lingtian didn't feel surprised when he noticed these two people flashing over towards him. He withdrew his gaze from the two people, completely disregarding them as he walked towards the mountain path on Megrez Peak. But would these two people let him leave just like that? The answer was no. Whoosh, whoosh. As if two gusts of wind blew by, the two young men obstructed Duan Lingtian's path. Duan Lingtian, still thinking of fleeing. The young man who spoke was precisely the outer court disciple that chose Duan Lingtian to enter the Megrez Peak a few days ago when Duan Lingtian entered the 7-star sword sect. He was also one of the 3 7-star sword sect disciples that Duan Lingtian ordered Shang Quan to throw out from the restaurant in Black Bamboo City over 10 days ago. Duan Lingtian remembered that this person seemed to be called Huo Xin. The day he'd arrived, on the way to Megrez Peak, Huo Xin had revealed hostility towards him at every turn, as if Huo Xin wished for nothing more than to kill him. Later on, when he went to receive his outer court disciple's attire, he was surprised to notice that Huo Xin had left. At that time, he had been suspicious of whether Huo Xin had noticed that he wasn't simple. Now it seemed like that wasn't the case, or Huo Xin wouldn't be obstructing his path now. Duan Lingtian, today, I, Yuan Wu, will properly get even with you for the enmity in the Black Bamboo City's restaurant that day. The young man beside Huo Xin looked at Duan Lingtian and his eyes emitted traces of a vicious gleam that seemed ready to swallow Duan Lingtian up. Duan Lingtian had a slight impression of this young man. It was precisely the other 7-star sword sect outer court disciple that was thrown out of the restaurant by Shang Quan. Now, besides the inner court disciple from that day, the other 2 7-star sword sect disciples from that day had gathered. Oh, how are you going to get even with me? Duan Lingtian's eyes narrowed into slits and his tone was calm as he questioned them. Humph, Yuan Wu sneered and a dense flame jumped about within his eyes. Do you dare ascend the life and death arena to battle me? Life and death arena? Duan Lingtian frowned and his face slightly sank when he heard Yuan Wu. The life and death arena was a place that only 7-star sword sect disciples with irreconcilable enmities would choose to enter to conduct a life and death battle, which didn't end until one party died. Life and death arena? Yuan Wu's voice wasn't soft, causing some of the Megrez Peak outer court disciples that passed by to hear it. They exclaimed in low voices before instantly surrounding them. Before long, the amount of Megrez Peak disciples that surrounded them grew more and more. It's senior brother Huo Xin, and the Mizar Peak's senior brother Yuan Wu. Before long, someone had recognized Huo Xin and Yuan Wu. As for Duan Lingtian, although he'd once been involved in a farce with Zhao Lin here, the people who had an impression of him were far fewer than the amount of people that had an impression of Huo Xin and Yuan Wu. You're called Yuan Wu? Duan Lingtian deeply gazed at Yuan Wu. Yuan Wu, I don't feel that the incident from that day can be considered as having any sort of enmity with you, the grudges between us are something that you all provoked. If it wasn't for you all trying to forcefully buy something from me, would I have asked my servant to throw all of you out? After all is said and done, this is all something that all of you asked for. Now, for this small matter, you want to invite me, this outer court disciple that has just entered the 7-star sword sect, to ascend to the life and death arena for a battle. Don't you think you're going too far? As he finished speaking, traces of cold lights arose within Duan Lingtian's eyes. He wasn't afraid of ascending to the life and death arena. However, this Yuan Wu wanted to ask him to ascend to the life and death arena, and wanted to kill him just for the small matter from the other day. This caused him to be unable to help from having flames of rage arise within his heart. So that's how it is. Looks like it ought to be that this junior brother got into a conflict with senior brother Yuan Wu before he entered into the sect. Forcefully purchase. If it's really like this, then senior brother Yuan Wu is really going too far. Then isn't he going even more overboard now? Senior brother Yuan Wu is a 4th level Origin Core stage martial artist, and supposedly is soon to break through to the 5th level of the Origin Core stage, asking an outer court disciple who just entered our 7-star sword sect to ascend to the life and death arena. Isn't this bullying the weak? Actually it's nothing, so long as this junior brother refuses. The spectating Megrez Peak disciples couldn't help but discuss animatedly amongst themselves. Yuan Wu frowned when he heard the discussions from the surrounding crowd and his face sank as he looked at Duan Lingtian and sneered. Small matter. Overboard. I, Yuan Wu, have lived to such an age in this lifetime, but it was still the first time I suffered such a humiliation. In my, Yuan Wu's, heart, you, Duan Lingtian, are my absolutely irreconcilable enemy, an enemy I desire to kill. As he finished speaking, Yuan Wu's tone had traces of bloodthirsty icy coldness mixed within. Duan Lingtian's face sank. Yuan Wu started laughing when he saw Duan Lingtian's expression. Of course, I know you surely don't have the guts to accept my life and death arena invitation, but let me say first that if you don't agree to my life and death arena invitation today, then in the future, I'll heavily injure you every time I see you. So long as I don't kill you or cripple you, the sect rules are unable to do anything to me. As he finished speaking, the smile on Yuan Wu's face had traces of madness mixed within. Me too. Huo Xin spoke out as well, and looked at Duan Lingtian with a cold and indifferent gaze. Duan Lingtian, what Yuan Wu said earlier is what I want to say as well. Today, if you don't dare agree to Yuan Wu's life and death arena invitation, then in the future there will be no place for you to have a foothold within Megrez Peak. As expected, the surrounding Megrez Peak disciples were stirred the moment Huo Xin spoke. Senior brother Huo Xin has a grudge with this junior brother as well. Oh my god. This junior brother only just entered our 7-star sword sect and he's already offended 2 4th-level Origin Core stage senior brothers. He's really too formidable, I have to hand it to him. The surrounding crowd of Megrez Peak disciples couldn't help but exclaim in surprise, and they looked at Duan Lingtian with gazes filled with a conflicting combination of admiration and pity. As far as they were concerned, Duan Lingtian's courage deserved compliments for daring to offend both Huo Xin and Yuan Wu. However, now that he had to endure the rage of both of them, his end could be easily imagined. It would surely be extremely miserable. Huo Xin, you want to kill me as well? Duan Lingtian took a deep breath, then looked at Huo Xin with a calm gaze as he asked with a deep voice. Of course. Huo Xin practically didn't hesitate in the slightest as he replied with a cold voice, and his tone had traces of viciousness mixed within. Duan Lingtian nodded, and the corners of his mouth curled into a cold smile. This Huo Xin and Yuan Wu were overbearing that day in the Black Bamboo City's restaurant when they helped the other 7-star sword sect inner court disciple, desiring to forcefully buy his jade-eyed heavenly mouse. Later on, he only asked Shang Quan to throw them out as a small form of punishment. He felt he'd already showed mercy. But today, these two people weren't regretful in the slightest towards the mistakes they made that day, and instead atrociously wanted to kill him. Duan Lingtian's gaze flickered, and traces of killing intent couldn't help but jump about within his eyes. Duan Lingtian, have you made a decision now? Do you want to accept my life and death arena invitation, and allow me to give you a swift death, or do you want me and Huo to slowly torture you in the future? Yuan Wu looked at Duan Lingtian with a cold and indifferent gaze. Duan Lingtian took a deep breath. Just when he was about to speak. Isn't this junior brother that brother from 2 days ago? I didn't recall it if you didn't say so, but it's really him. I heard he seems to have already obeyed Elder Zhao Lin. What, he's that pretty boy that obeyed Elder Zhao Lin? Look at his delicate skin that seems as if it would be injured with a flick of the finger, there probably isn't a second person in Arm Megrez Peak who can possess it. It ought to be him. Some of the spectating Megrez Peak disciples recognized Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian heard the discussions of these Megrez Peak disciples, and was nearly angered to death. When did he obey Zhao Lin? Moreover, Duan Lingtian noticed that after Huo Xin and Yuan Wu heard the discussion of the crowd of Megrez Peak disciples, their expressions went pale. When they looked at Duan Lingtian again, their eyes had a sense of fear and disgust. Duan Lingtian, you're really capable. I really never imagined that you'd only just arrived at Megrez Peak and you've already gotten together with Elder Zhao Lin. Even though Zhao Lin had noticed earlier that Duan Lingtian's skin had become white, but he didn't pay attention to it. Now when he heard the discussion of the crowd of Megrez Peak disciples, he couldn't help but recall the matter that was spread and gave rise to much discussion within the 7-star sword sect's Megrez Peak during these past few days. The Megrez Peak's outer court elder, Zhao Lin, had a special hobby. He'd taken a fancy towards a pretty boy disciple of Megrez Peak, and the disciple had even obeyed him. Huo Xin couldn't help but be slightly afraid in his heart when he thought of Zhao Lin. If this Duan Lingtian really had this layer of relationship with Zhao Lin, then he and Yuan Wu would probably have no means of taking revenge on Duan Lingtian. Zhao Lin, the outer court elder of Megrez Peak, was someone that they couldn't afford to offend. Duan Lingtian, you really are capable. Yuan Wu's face was gloomy as he looked at Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian frowned, then looked at the surrounding Megrez Peak disciples that were discussing animatedly, and abruptly shouted out explosively with an unsightly expression. Enough. Instantly, all the Megrez Peak disciples went silent, but their gazes when they looked at Duan Lingtian had a sense of ill feelings, then once again went into an uproar. I heard senior brother Huo Xin and senior brother Yuan Wu say earlier that this pretty boy seems to be called Duan Lingtian. What a waste of such a good name. An outer court disciple that has only just entered our 7-star sword sect dares to yell before us. Don't all of you forget that he now has the backing of Elder Zhao Lin. 282 Chapter 283, Duan Lingtian's Demand. Duan Lingtian's expression was incomparably unsightly, and wished for nothing more than to tear apart the mouths of these Megrez Peak disciples. Humph. Right at this moment, a cold snort sounded out from afar and everyone could see a middle-aged man walked over in large strides. Elder Zhao Lin, Elder Zhao Lin, The crowd of Megrez Peak disciples instantly shut their mouths when they saw Zhao Lin arriving, no longer daring to rashly discuss anything anymore. What are all of you gathered here for? Zhao Lin frowned, then swept the crowd of Megrez Peak disciples that were present with his gaze. His eyes then descended onto Duan Lingtian, and was slightly surprised before shooting his gaze onto Huo Xin and Yuan Wu who stood opposite of Duan Lingtian. In next to no time, a Megrez Peak disciples that desired to stir up trouble spoke of the sequence of events of the matter. Zhao Lin's gaze quickly descended onto Huo Xin and Yuan Wu's figures. Instantly, Huo Xin and Yuan Wu's faces went grim, and their heart were filled with nervousness. As far as they were concerned, if Duan Lingtian and Zhao Lin really had the relationship like in the rumors, then they would surely be met with misfortune today. Looks like senior brother Huo Xin and senior brother Yuan Wu are going to suffer misfortune. Elder Zhao Lin is surely going to stand up for Duan Lingtian. Most of the Megrez Peak disciples present now all had the same thoughts as Huo Xin and Yuan Wu. Yuan Wu, you intend to invite Duan Lingtian for a battle on the life and death arena? Zhao Lin's gaze descended onto Yuan Wu as he slowly asked. A trace of brilliance lit up deep within his eyes. As far as he was concerned, this was perhaps a chance to probe Duan Lingtian. He was filled with interest towards Duan Lingtian's cultivation method, the Muscle Meridian Rebirth Scroll. He wanted to know if the rebirth within the Muscle Meridian Rebirth Scroll was similar to the rebirth provided by the 10,000-year stalactite milk, and was able to increase natural talent in the martial Tao. If he was able to prove that both of them were similar, then he must obtain this cultivation method from Duan Lingtian. But, now when Yuan Wu heard Zhao Lin's question, he thought that Zhao Lin wanted to condemn him. Elder Zhao Lin, I'm in the wrong, I didn't know earlier that Duan Ling Tian is yours, What Duan Ling Tian is mine? Zhao Lin's face sank and said furiously. Could it be that you believe those fictitious rumors as well? Yuan Wu was stupefied, as he never expected Zhao Lin's reaction would be so huge. HMPH. Zhao Lin coldly swept Yuan Wu with his gaze. If you've worried about me, then you can be at ease. There's no relationship between me and Duan Ling Tian, whether he's dead or alive has nothing to do with me. If Duan Ling Tian really has an irreconcilable enmity with you, then you can continue to invite him to the life and death arena. The Megrez Peak life and death arena hasn't seen blood in years, and I really look forward to it. Swoosh. Zhao Lin's words were like a stone that gave rise to 1,000 ripples. The spectating crowd of Megrez Peak disciples were all shocked. Could it be that Elder Zhao Lin really has no relationship with Duan Ling Tian? Nonsense. Elder Zhao Lin already said so, it has nothing to do with him whether Duan Ling Tian is dead or alive. How could they possibly have a relationship? Exactly, if it was you, would you allow your lover to ascend the life and death arena to give his life away? Even though what Zhao Lin said caused Duan Ling Tian to be extremely uncomfortable, as it was like instigating Yuan Wu to invite him to battle on the life and death arena. But now that the relationship between him and Zhao Lin had been cleared up, it caused him to heave a sigh of relief as well. It didn't matter if others misunderstood him on any other matter. But this, he wasn't willing to be misunderstood. Yuan Wu's eyes lit up when he heard what Zhao Lin said, and the corners of his mouth curled into a slightly evil smile. Huo Xin, who stood beside him, had a face full of smiles as well. It looked like they could take revenge like they wished. Duan Ling Tian noticed the expressions of Yuan Wu and Huo Xin, and his eyes narrowed as the corners of his mouth curled into a cold smile. If Yuan Wu and Huo Xin were really impervious to reason, then he wouldn't show mercy. There was a ball of fire that was burning within Duan Ling Tian's heart, and would explode out at any moment. Before long, Duan Ling Tian saw Yuan Wu take 2 steps forward, and look at him. Duan Ling Tian, have you finished considering? Will you agree to battle me in the life and death arena, or will you refuse and allow me and Huo Xin to slowly torture you in the days to come? A smile of victory appeared on the corners of Yuan Wu's mouth, as if Duan Ling Tian was only a piece of meat on the chopping block. Along with Yuan Wu once again proclaiming his invitation to battle on the life and death arena to Duan Ling Tian, the gazes of the surrounding Megrez Peak disciples all descended onto Duan Ling Tian. They didn't think that Duan Ling Tian would agree. After all, Yuan Wu was a 4th-level Origin Core Stage Outer Court disciple, where Duan Ling Tian was only an Outer Court disciple that had just entered the 7-star sword sect, and seems to be around 20-year-old. As far as they were concerned, at such an age, his cultivation would at most be at the 1st level of the Origin Core stage. Zhao Lin stood at a distance, and lightly stared at Duan Ling Tian with a calm expression. Just as he'd said, whether Duan Ling Tian lived or died had nothing to do with him. What he wanted to confirm was whether the rebirth within the cultivation method Duan Ling Tian cultivated, the Muscle Meridian Rebirth Scroll, was able to increase the natural talent in the martial Dao. Duan Ling Tian. Huo Xin looked at Duan Ling Tian with a vicious expression. If you refuse, then so long as you appear in the future, I'll break all the bones on your body, then allow you to slowly heal up. In the future days, you won't have any more time to cultivate because your time will all be used to tend to your injuries. The surrounding Megrez Peak disciples felt a chill run down their spines when they heard Huo Xin. Senior brother Huo Xin is too ruthless. Looks like senior brother Huo Xin really hates Duan Ling Tian. Aren't you talking nonsense? If he didn't hate him to the utmost limit, would he invite Duan Ling Tian to battle in the life and death arena? What Huo Xin said caused the burning flames within Duan Ling Tian's heart to be unable to be suppressed any longer, and it completely exploded out. Huo Xin. Duan Ling Tian's gaze descended onto Huo Xin, and his eyes flickered with an icy cold sheen. I can agree to Yuan Wu's invitation to battle on the life and death arena, but I have a demand. What demand? Speak. Huo Xin hadn't even spoken when he heard Duan Ling Tian's words, when Yuan Wu's gaze had already lit up and he asked eagerly. As far as he was concerned, so long as Duan Ling Tian was willing to ascend to the life and death arena, and have a life and death battle with him, he would agree to any demand that wasn't too overboard. What demand? Huo Xin frowned as he asked. I hope that it's 3 people who ascend to the life and death arena today. If you're unwilling to agree, then I won't ascend TP the life and death arena. Duan Ling Tian looked at Huo Xin as spoke of his demand. 3 people. Could it be that this Duan Ling Tian wants to get help? Oi, the life and death arena, battles were ordinarily one against one. Duan Lingtian is actually shameless to the point of wanting to get help. The surrounding Megrez Peak disciples were in an uproar, as they all felt that Duan Lingtian's demand was going too far. What, you want to get help? Huo Xin sneered, and a trace of disdain appeared on the corners of his mouth. Looks like you know your own limitations, and know that it's impossible for you to be a match for Yuan Wu. Yuan Wu frowned, as he never expected that Duan Lingtian would put forth a demand that was excessive. Huo Xin, I think you've got it wrong, I don't want to get help. Duan Lingtian heard the discussions of the surrounding Megrez Peak disciples, then heard what Huo Xin said, and he knew that everyone misunderstood what he meant. You don't want to get help? Then why did you put forth such a demand? Huo Xin and Yuan Wu said at almost the exact same time, and their eyes that looked at Duan Lingtian revealed dense and ruthless coldness. HMPH. Duan Lingtian said coldly. Since your comprehension ability is so bad, I'll say it more directly, I can ascend to the life and death arena, but I don't hope to only have one opponent. I hope that I can battle both of you at the same time in the life and death arena. One person, against the two of you. A battle of life and death that doesn't end until one side dies. As Duan Lingtian finished speaking, his voice was sonorous, and filled with a majestic and powerful imposing manner. Don't you two want me to ascend to the life and death arena? Then I'll ascend to it. Moreover, not only will I, Duan Lingtian, ascend to the life and death arena, but I'll even fight the both of you alone. At the same time, battle intent and killing intent converged together within Duan Lingtian's eyes, and leapt up. The blood in his body boiled. As Duan Lingtian finishing speaking, the scene went deathly silent, terrifyingly silent. Now, even if one were to throw a needle on the floor, perhaps one could clearly hear the sound. All the Megrez Peak disciples were completely stunned. At this moment as they gazed upon Duan Lingtian's figure that stood there, a portion of the Megrez Peak disciples felt that Duan Lingtian was so lofty like a mountain, as if he transformed into an undefeatable war god that caused everyone to feel heartfelt admiration. Moreover, not to mention anything else, just the courage from Duan Lingtian daring to say this was already worthy of their admiration. Even if Duan Lingtian was killed in the life and death arena today, he would still have died a glorious death, and would be remembered in their hearts. This was an outer court disciple who'd only just entered the 7-star sword sect and dared to challenge two 4th-level origin core stage martial artists in the life and death arena. Of course, there were also a portion of Megrez Peak disciples that did not spare a glance when they heard what Duan Lingtian said. Overestimating yourself. A mere outer court disciple that just entered our 7-star sword sect dares to be so arrogant. Wanting to battle two senior brothers in the life and death arena. He's simply courting death. According to me, he probably feels that if he faces senior brother Yuan Wu alone, he won't die fast enough. I think so too. If senior brother Huo Xin and senior brother Yuan Wu attack together, this Duan Lingtian would probably die in a single move. Nearby, Zhao Lin's brows knit, and he looked at the far-away Duan Lingtian, as if he was absorbed in thought and his heart jerked. This Duan Lingtian, did he really have confidence, or was he overestimating himself? He urgently wanted to know the answer now. Ha 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 ha, Huo Xin and Yuan Wu glanced at each other with faces full of shock, then couldn't help but burst out in laughter. Duan Lingtian, are you sure you want to ascend to the life and death arena and battle the two of us together? Huo Xin suppressed his laughter with great difficulty, then looked at Duan Lingtian, his brows knit and his eyes were filled with a trace of amusement. I really hope that I'm able to battle you with Yuan Wu, as in this way, I'll be able to kill you with my own two hands to vent the hatred in my heart. 283 Chapter 284, In the Life and Death Arena. There was a total of 7 life and death arenas in the 7-star sword sect. As one of the 7 great sword peaks in the 7-star sword sect, there was a life and death arena on Megrez Peak. The Megrez Peak Life and Death Battle Arena was situated on a platform halfway down the mountain and was paved with a layer of crimson-red bricks that were like blood. With a glance, it caused one to feel a chill run down their spines. Normally, the platform where the Life and Death Arena was located would be peaceful, and very few people would come here. But today, it was completely seething with excitement. Today, someone would be ascending to the Life and Death Arena to undergo a bloody battle that would only end when one party died. Hurry up, we'll miss it if we're late. I've been on the Megrez Peak for 2 years already, and today is still the first time that I heard of someone ascending to the Life and Death Battle Arena to undergo a life and death battle. I absolutely can't miss it. Supposedly, our Megrez Peak's life and death arena hasn't seen blood in many years. On Megrez Peak, so long as it was a Megrez Peak disciple that heard of the news, no matter what they were doing at that moment, they practically all put down what they were doing and swarmed over. The life and death arena was situated on a vast platform halfway down the mountain, and it was a high platform that has been painstakingly formed from many piles. Now, the surroundings of the life and death arena were filled with Megrez Peak disciples. The gazes of all the Megrez Peak disciples descended on the three figures that stood atop the life and death arena. Why are there three people on the life and death arena? Instantly, some people had faces full of wonder as they asked curiously. In next to no time, there were people who told them of the sequence of events, and only then did they come to a sudden understanding. Their hearts were filled with shock at the same time. Their gazes unconsciously descended onto the young man on the life and death arena that was around 20 years of age, and they felt their scalps go numb. This young man was the outer court disciple that had just entered the 7-star sword sect for a few days, Duan Lingtian. That Duan Lingtian who was going to fight a battle of life and death with two 4th-level origin core stage martial artists in the life and death battle arena. Around 20 years old, even if his natural talent in the martial Dao is even more heaven-defying, he would at most be at the 2nd level of the origin core stage. Yeah, he actually dared to ascend to the life and death battle arena to battle a 4th-level origin core stage martial artist. Moreover, it's even two 4th-level origin core stage martial artists. He's virtually courting death. Are young men nowadays all so rash? Similar discussions rose and fell around the life and death arena. In the life and death arena, Duan Lingtian stood there, not moving like a mountain, with a calm expression. Even though his surroundings were completely in an uproar, he still remained unmoved and calmly stared at Huo Xin and Yuan Wu who stood opposite him. Duan Lingtian, today, I and Yuan Wu will join forces to send you to your death. In one move, I and Yuan Wu only need one move, and we'll be able to kill you. Since you gave me the chance to kill you, I'll be merciful and give you a swift death. Huo Xin looked at Duan Lingtian and the corners of his mouth curled into an evil smile. Don't worry, you won't feel pain, because you'll die in an instant. Yuan Wu's gaze had traces of cold lights as he looked at Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian, you ought to be extremely regretful in your heart now, right? You offended us just for the sake of an infant Goldfur mouse, and are about to be killed by us. Unfortunately, senior brother Fan isn't here, otherwise, I believe he would be interested in today's scene as well. The corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth curled at an angle, seeming to be smiling but wasn't smiling. Regret, perhaps, there were things that he would regret, but it was impossible for him to regret this. Even if that 7-star sword sect inner court disciple was present, he would still not be regretful in the slightest. Haha, Duan Lingtian, can you hear the discussions of these senior brothers and junior brothers? Listen, they're all saying you're overestimating yourself, and saying that you're courting death. I really don't know where you got the courage to actually dare to invite the both of us to battle in the life and death arena with you. Huo Xin laughed loudly, and his gaze swept the surroundings of the life and death arena, his laughter full of arrogance and complacence. I heard Huo Xin say that those two girls that have appearances like flowers and could be called peerless have arrived at 7-star sword sect as well. You can be at ease, once we kill you, we'll help you properly take care of them. Ha 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 ha, as Yuan Wu spoke, he started laughing as well, as if he'd already seen the scene of Duan Lingtian being killed by him and Huo Xin. Duan Lingtian's calm expressions finally changed. Every dragon has a reverse scale, touch it and one would absolutely die. His reverse scale was undoubtedly the two little girls. This Yuan Wu actually was disrespectful to his women. Yuan Wu. Duan Lingtian took a step forward, the killing intent on his body rushed into the sky, and a demonic crimson red appeared in his eyes. Duan Lingtian was furious. Completely furious. Duan Lingtian's entire body was currently completely enveloped by killing intent, as if he transformed into a bloodthirsty asura that had walked out from the depths of hell. The 7-star sword sect outer court disciple attire on his body fluttered without wind and emitted whistling sounds. What? Angry. Yuan Wu noticed Duan Lingtian's current appearance, and a smile bloomed on his face, then he said to Huo Xin who was beside him. Huo Xin, I like the hot-bodied girl among the two, you won't fight with me for her, right? Of course not. The other isn't bad either. She's delicate and touching, she suits my taste. Huo Xin licked his dry lips, and his eyes emitted traces of lust. Bang! Duan Lingtian's eyes practically completely became crimson red, and the hairband that bundled up his hair instantly broke apart. His long hair spread out and fluttered without wind, matchlessly elegant. Huo Xin, you said earlier that the two of you can kill me in a single move. Duan Lingtian's voice was filled with traces of a gloomy aura, as if it sounded out from the depths of hell, and caused the surrounding crowd of Megre's peak disciples to feel a chill run down their spines when they heard this. Exactly. I and Yuan Wu together only need a move, an instant, and it would be sufficient to kill you. After you die, I and Yuan Wu will surely take good care of the two beauties by your side, you can go in peace. Ha 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 ha. Huo Xin noticed that Duan Lingtian was enraged to the limit as well, and intentionally infuriated Duan Lingtian a step further. His felt delighted in his heart for no reason when he saw Duan Lingtian like this. Huo Xin, I'm slightly unable to wait any longer now, those beauties are probably waiting for me now. Yuan Wu laughed slyly, and cooperated with Huo Xin to provoke Duan Lingtian. Needless to say, their actions did indeed work. It caused the rage in Duan Lingtian's heart to rise to the limit. His flames of rage were soaring. One move, Duan Lingtian's crimson red eyes had a gaze that was icy cold and unfeeling, and it descended onto Huo Xin and Yuan Wu as he said with an icy cold and hoarse voice. In one move, you two will surely die. As soon as Duan Lingtian finished speaking, the noisy Megre's peak disciples that were surrounding the life and death arena went silent for a moment. His Duan Lingtian, what did he say? Kill Huo Xin and Yuan Wu in a single move. They were all struck dumb by what Duan Lingtian said. Huo Xin and Yuan Wu who were in the life and death arena were stunned as well, and Huo Xin who recovered from his shock first sneered as he said, Duan Lingtian, you're dreaming right. Kill us in a single move. It's not that I'm looking down on you, but even if you're given another 5 years, you might not be able to do it. Wishful thinking. Yuan Wu's gaze emitted a cold light, and a trace of disdain appeared on the corners of his mouth. Alright, Yuan Wu, let's begin. Huo Xin grinned, his smile full of evil, and his gaze that looked at Duan Lingtian seemed as if he was looking at a dead man. In his hand, a 3-foot-long blade appeared out of thin air. Origin energy was raging atop the 3-foot-long blade. Whoosh! Above Huo Xin, 76 ancient mammoth silhouettes condensed into form. At the same time, a 3-foot-long blade appeared in Yuan Wu's hand as well. The number of ancient mammoth silhouettes above him were exactly similar to the number of ancient mammoth silhouettes above Huo Xin, both being 76. 2 4th-level origin core stage martial artists. 2 grade 7 spirit swords. This was the strength of Huo Xin and Yuan Wu. And currently, the Megre's peak disciples surrounding the life and death arena that were struck dumb by what Duan Lingtian said, had finally recovered from their shock. When they looked at Duan Lingtian once again, their gazes were filled with disdain. This Duan Lingtian had really gone mad. Kill Huo Xin and Yuan Wu in a single move. Simply fool's talk. Huo Xin and Yuan Wu are both 4th-level origin core stage martial artists, and both have grade 7 spirit swords. Even a 5th-level origin core stage martial artist that possessed a grade 7 spirit sword wouldn't dare say that he was able to kill Huo Xin and Yuan Wu who had joined forces within a single move. Perhaps, this is him boosting his courage before death. The Megre's peak disciples surrounding the life and death arena all regarded what Duan Lingtian said earlier as beneath contempt. As far as they were concerned, Duan Lingtian was bound to be killed by Huo Xin and Yuan Wu. Zhao Lin stood there outside the life and death arena, and as he saw the scene before him, the corners of his mouth curled into a trace of disdain. This Duan Lingtian is really arrogant. Arrogance is something that requires strength. Without strength, you can only be the meat on another's chopping block, and be trampled on by another. But in next to no time, the disdain on the corners of Zhao Lin's mouth completely froze. Heaven! What did he see? No, impossible. How could this be possible? This isn't real, it absolutely isn't real. Unbelievable. The Megre's peak disciples that surrounded the life and death arena and were just mocking Duan Lingtian a moment ago, were now startled as they gazed at the sky above Duan Lingtian. What did they see? Whoosh! Above Duan Lingtian, the energy of heaven and earth roiled, and gathered to form 60 ancient mammoth silhouettes in the end. The strength of 60 ancient mammoths. This was the symbol of the 4th level of the origin core stage. Along with a 3-foot-long blade appearing within Duan Lingtian's hand, another 12 ancient mammoth silhouettes appeared above Duan Lingtian. A total strength of 72 ancient mammoths. Presently, the 3-foot-long blade that Duan Lingtian held in his hand was the grade 8 spirit sword he refined himself, and was able to amplify his strength by 20%. He didn't even use a grade 7 spirit sword. Because, as far as he was concerned, there was no need. 4th level origin core stage. Seeing the ancient mammoth silhouettes that condensed into form above Duan Lingtian, Huo Xin and Yuan Wu glanced at each other, and could both see the astonishment in each other's eyes. A 4th level origin core stage martial artist around the age of 20. For a moment, they felt their scalps go numb. What sort of monstrous and abnormal natural talent was this? 284 Chapter 285, One Move. What terrifying natural talent. This Duan Lingtian looks to be around 20 years of age, but is actually a 4th level origin core stage martial artist. In our entire 7-star sword sect's younger generation, such natural talent is something no one is able to compare to. Unbelievable, the surroundings of the life and death arena were in a complete uproar. All the Megrez Peak disciples were shocked by the cultivation that Duan Lingtian revealed. It was unknown what sort of expression they would have if they knew that Duan Lingtian was still holding back. After all, even if he didn't use a spirit weapon, Duan Lingtian was currently able to exert the strength of 71 ancient mammoths at full force, and was comparable to a 5th level origin core stage martial artist. Just like before in the primeval forest, he was only able to kill that fierce beast Savage Tiger once he revealed his full strength. Now, he intentionally only revealed a strength of 60 ancient mammoths that was comparable to a 4th level origin core stage martial artist. Perhaps, as far as Duan Lingtian was concerned, Huo Xin and Yuan Wu weren't worthy of him using his full strength. Looks like the cultivation method this Duan Lingtian cultivated does indeed have its own uniqueness, even to the extent that the rebirth provided by the cultivation method he cultivates is indeed able to increase the natural talent of a martial artist. A trace of burning desire and greed appeared in Zhao Lin's eyes. Even when Duan Lingtian had held back quite an amount of his strength now, but it was still sufficient to attract the greed within Zhao Lin's heart. However, even if this Duan Lingtian is a 4th level origin core stage martial artist, the strength he exerted by relying upon a grade 8 spirit sword is weaker than any one of Huo Xin or Yuan Wu. I hope that his cultivation method is within his spatial ring, otherwise, it's a troubling matter. As he thought up to that point, Zhao Lin frowned. According to the rules of the 7-star sword sect, the battle atop the life and death arena was something no one could obstruct. Even though he was a Megrez Peak outer court disciple, he didn't dare interfere in the battle of the life and death arena under the gazes of everyone present. Obviously, Zhao Lin didn't look favorably upon Duan Lingtian, even if Duan Lingtian revealed a cultivation that caused him to be extremely shocked. Duan Lingtian. In the life and death arena, Huo Xin suppressed the shock in his heart, then looked at Duan Lingtian with eyes that were suffused with dense killing intent. I really never imagined that you actually concealed yourself so deeply. You are actually a 4th level origin core stage martial artist. But today, you're dead for sure. The might of Duan Lingtian's natural talent in the martial Dao also caused Huo Xin to tremble with fear. Now, he was slightly rejoicing. Luckily, Duan Lingtian had ascended to the life and death arena, otherwise, with Duan Lingtian's natural talent, it probably wouldn't be long before Duan Lingtian would be able to surpass him. If that time really came, then the one who would suffer misfortune would be him. It wasn't only Huo Xin who was rejoicing, as Yuan Wu was similarly rejoicing as well, and his eyes that looked at Duan Lingtian were even gloomier and more vicious. He knew that if Duan Lingtian didn't die today, then Duan Lingtian would surely be a great future trouble. Duan Lingtian, even if you're a 4th level origin core stage martial artist, today, you'll surely die. Even though Duan Lingtian was a 4th level origin core stage martial artist, he only had a grade 8 spirit weapon, and as far as Yuan Wu was concerned, it posed no great threat to him. Moreover, he was now dealing with Duan Lingtian while joining forces with Huo Xin, and this made him feel even more strongly that there wouldn't be any suspense from killing Duan Lingtian. I've already said it, both of you will surely die in a single move. Duan Lingtian's long hair that spread out, fluttered without wind, and his crimson-red demonic eyes flickered with an awe-inspiring cold light as it descended onto Huo Xin and Yuan Wu. At this moment, besides him, it seemed that only Huo Xin and Yuan Wu remained within his world. He was a hunter. Huo Xin and Yuan Wu were his prey. Shameless boasting. Huo Xin shouted coldly, Then his figure jerked as the origin energy beneath his feet exploded out, and his entire figure seemed to have transformed into a sword that brought along a shocking imposing manner as it swept out towards Duan Lingtian. HMPH. At almost the exact same instant Huo Xin made a move, Yuan Wu moved as well, practically moving shoulder to shoulder with Huo Xin. The grade 7 spirit sword in his hand radiated a dazzling sheen, and seemed to transform into a venomous snake that bit towards Duan Lingtian. At this time, Duan Lingtian moved as well. Spirit Serpent Movement Technique. Duan Lingtian wasn't afraid in the slightest when facing Huo Xin and Yuan Wu who joined forces. He moved to intercept them head-on, and raging origin energy suffused into the grade 8 spirit sword in his hand. The origin energy lightly vibrated, and the frequency it vibrated slowly grew higher and higher. This detail was something no one was able to notice. The surroundings of the life and death arena were deathly silent as everyone held their breaths, and all their gazes descended onto the three figures that swiftly flashed atop the life and death arena. The three figures encountered each other in practically an instant. Die. Huo Xin and Yuan Wu's faces emitted madness when they saw Duan Lingtian coming over to intercept them, and the grade 7 spirit sword in their hands whistled out as it transformed into sword images that filled the sky before enveloping downwards towards Duan Lingtian, as if wanted to instantly annihilate Duan Lingtian. The corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth curled into an evil smile when faced with Huo Xin and Yuan Wu's incomparably swift sword skill that was difficult to find any flaws in. Exactly, Duan Lingtian was smiling. At this instant, including Huo Xin and Yuan Wu, all the people surrounding the entire platform that the life and death arena was located on, noticed Duan Lingtian's smile. It was difficult for them to understand, why was Duan Lingtian still able to smile at this moment? It was simply bizarre. At the instant that the corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth curled into a smile, his crimson-red eyes squinted abruptly, and the grade 8 spirit sword in his hand lightly vibrated, as if transforming into swimming dragon that was dancing about in the air. As the origin energy vibrated, it seemed it even caused circles of ripples to be formed in the air. Sword drawing arts. Duan Lingtian's sword strike didn't have any fancy style, and wasn't hesitant in the slightest. If a word was used to describe it, it would be straightforward. The sword drawing arts, the sword moved out like a bolt of lightning. Whoosh! The sword light flashed, and accurately intercepted the grade 7 spirit sword in Yuan Wu's hand that whistled over. Yuan Wu's sword was the closest to Duan Lingtian as well. Duan Lingtian's sword instantly found Yuan Wu's sword within the sword images that covered the sky, and directly fiercely smashed onto it. Clang! The grade 8 spirit sword instantly crashed onto the grade 7 spirit sword. Duan Lingtian's gaze abruptly went cold. Quake energy. The cold smile on the corners of Yuan Wu's mouth that curled up when he originally saw Duan Lingtian actually daring fight head-on with him, quickly froze, and his eyes emitted dense terror. And Yuan Wu's expression stopped at this moment forever. The grade 8 spirit sword in Duan Lingtian's hand used the overbearing quake energy to directly blast the grade 7 spirit sword in Yuan Wu's hand flying. Right when the palm on the hand Yuan Wu used to grasp his sword split open, and fresh blood dripped out. Whoosh! A sword light that one was barely able to catch a glimpse of flashed past Yuan Wu's throat. All this only happened in the blink of an eye. When everyone hadn't been able to react, the grade 8 spirit sword in Duan Lingtian's hand turned to intercept the other sword that was only inches away from him. The owner of this sword was Huo Xin. Huo Xin hadn't even had the chance to react to what had happened, when he noticed the grade 7 spirit sword in his hand be fiercely knocked away by Duan Lingtian's grade 8 spirit sword. Instantly, he felt a terrifying force of vibration transfer towards him form the grade 7 spirit sword in his hand. He didn't dare hesitate, and directly let go. Because he could perceive that if he didn't let go, his arm, even his body, would most likely quake to the point it shattered. Even after letting go, his palm still burst open, and fresh blood splattered. No, at practically an instant, when Huo Xin's thoughts hadn't even had the time to move on, he saw a strand of sword light flash towards him. His throat seemed to be forcefully choked by someone, as he wanted to make a noise but was unable to do so. In the next moment, he felt his throat go cold, and everything before his eyes blurred. At the instant before his consciousness withered, he only had one remaining thought. What the heck was that method that Duan Lingtian exerted earlier? The grade 8 spirit sword in Duan Lingtian's hand flashed, then vanished into thin air, as it was put away by him into his spatial ring. Presently, the Megrez Peak disciples with somewhat weaker strength and slightly inferior eyesight, only saw a flash before their eyes, then the throats of Huoshin and Yuanwu spouted out a line of blood that scattered down. The Megrez Peak disciples with stronger strengths were instead able to clearly see that along with a line of blood appearing on Yuanwu's throat, in practically the blink of an eye, a line of blood appeared on Huoshin's throat as well. It was difficult for them to imagine how the speed of a grade 8 spirit sword in the hands of a 4th-level origin core stage martial artist could actually be swift to this extent. How could this be possible? Zhao Lin's pupils constricted, as he looked at the scene before him with disbelief. As the one and only void-prying stage martial artist present, he naturally clearly saw every detail when Duan Lingtian attacked with his sword. Such sword speed, how could a 4th-level origin core stage martial artist possibly exert it? Moreover, he actually used the strength of 72 ancient mammoths to completely suppress Huoshin and Yuanwu's strength of 76 ancient mammoths, knocking both their swords flying. Zhao Lin's breathing became hurried. He was inexplicably excited in his heart and his eyes emitted a flowing light of greed. Looks like the Duan Lingtian's moves ought to be related to the cultivation method he cultivates, the Muscle Meridian Rebirth Scroll. Bang, bang. On the life and death arena, Yuanwu and Huoshin's bodies crashed onto the ground one after the other, emitting a heavy sound. When these two sounds entered into the ears of the Megrez Peak disciples that surrounded the life and death arena, it caused them to be as if jolted awake from their dreams and completely recovered them from their earlier shock. Subsequently, an uproar rose as expected. Oh my god! Duan Lingtian actually killed senior brother Yuanwu and senior brother Huoshin. He used a grade 8 spirit sword, and it was only the strength of 72 ancient mammoths. Senior brother Huoshin and senior brother Yuanwu used grade 7 spirit swords, and the offensive strength of any one of them was comparable to the strength of 76 ancient mammoths. How the heck did Duan Lingtian do it? This is completely not logical. Could it be that what he cultivated is an earth-rank sword skill? Earth-rank sword skill? Do you think it's possible? Who doesn't know that an earth-rank sword skill is only able to be cultivated by a void-prying stage expert that has comprehended force? He's an origin core stage martial artist, how could he cultivate an earth-rank sword skill? Senior brother Huoshin and senior brother Yuanwu's sword skills were both high-grade profound rank sword skills at the perfection stage, but even then, they still died at Duan Lingtian's hand. I'm afraid only Duan Lingtian himself knows how he killed those two senior brothers. The gazes of the Megrez Peak disciples that surrounded the life and death arena descended onto the proud and aloof figure on the life and death arena. These gaze were either dumbstruck, shocked, full of veneration or adoration. The words that Duan Lingtian spoke earlier and were ridiculed by them, couldn't help but reverberate by their ears. In a move, you two will surely die. At the beginning, no one believed it. But now, Duan Lingtian instead used his strength to prove that what he'd said wasn't nonsense. 285 Chapter 286, The Little Pythons Are Missing. Duan Lingtian stood in the life and death arena and his restless mood slowly calmed down. His rage that had boiled to the utmost limit completely calmed down when Huoshin and Yuanwu were killed by him. His head full of long hair that fluttered without the wind slowly dropped down, his crimson-red eyes slowly recovered to their normal state, and the 7-star sword sect outer court disciples' attire that fluttered on his body calmed as well. Duan Lingtian's gaze was calm as he glanced at the two corpses on the floor, as if he'd done something that was of no great importance. Duan Lingtian put away Huoshin and Yuanwu's grade 7 spirit swords and spatial rings. He frowned when he felt the gazes that locked onto him from the surroundings of the life and death arena, and then he strode off, intending to leave. Duan Lingtian. Right at this moment, Duan Lingtian's eardrums trembled, and he clearly heard a voice. Condensing origin energy into sound. An ability that only a martial artist at the 7th level of the origin core stage or above could master. When the other person's voice was transmitted by this method, only he would be able to hear it. Duan Lingtian didn't turn around, and continued to walk forward, as he was able to discern that this was Zhao Lin's voice. Duan Lingtian didn't have any good impression towards Zhao Lin and directly ignored him. In next to no time, Zhao Lin's origin energy that was condensed into sound once again entered into Duan Lingtian's ears. Duan Lingtian, share the cultivation method you're cultivating with me, I can use other things to exchange with you. Duan Lingtian's body slightly stopped when he heard what Zhao Lin said, and a wisp of disdain appeared on the corners of his mouth. Zhao Lin didn't have any good intentions, as expected. Actually wanting the cultivation method he cultivated in. Of course, he also knew that the cultivation method Zhao Lin wanted to obtain was surely the cultivation method he mentioned when bluffing Zhao Lin, the Muscle Meridian Rebirth Scroll. Actually, he didn't possess such a cultivation method at all. It was only something he casually made up when bluffing Zhao Lin. Duan Lingtian's gaze focused as he looked into the distance, and with a glance he noticed the outer court elder Zhao Lin who stood behind the crowd and was staring at him with a burning gaze. The corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth curled into a cold smile as he casually swept Zhao Lin with his gaze, then walked swiftly off the life and death arena. The Megrez Peak disciples would consciously move to open up a path wherever Duan Lingtian went. Duan Lingtian, you're really formidable. Yeah, how the heck do you cultivate? You look like you're around 20, but your strength is so strong already. Duan Lingtian, how about we be friends? The crowd of Megrez Peak disciples were incomparably zealous wherever Duan Lingtian passed. Duan Lingtian's gaze was as calm as if it wouldn't change even if Mount Tai collapsed, and he directly walked in large strides to leave the vast platform that the life and death arena was located on. Duan Lingtian, Zhao Lin's face sank. The mocking gaze that Duan Lingtian swept him with earlier was undoubtedly refusing him. Zhao Lin slightly clenched his fists, and his eyes emitted an awe-inspiring coldness. Duan Lingtian, I always get what I want. Along with Duan Lingtian's departure, the crowd of Megrez Peak disciples dispersed as well. But at the same time that they left, they didn't stop the discussions about Duan Lingtian, as the strength that Duan Lingtian revealed had completely shocked them. A 4th-level Origin Core stage martial artist at around the age of 20, relied on a Grade 8 Spirit Sword to kill 2 4th-level Origin Core stage Outer Court disciples that possessed Grade 7 Spirit Swords. And the latter even joined forces. Such an achievement in battle could be called shocking. After Duan Lingtian left the life and death arena, he wound around the windy mountain paths for a while before returning to the mountain peak. He was worried that Zhao Lin would follow him. Even though Zhao Lin was an outer court elder of Megrez Peak, Duan Lingtian was able to discern that Zhao Lin was a person that would use every means possible to obtain his goal. Now, Zhao Lin had targeted the sheer fictitious Muscle Meridian Rebirth Scroll in his possession, and would surely not let the matter go. So, he must be careful and absolutely must not allow Zhao Lin to obtain an opportunity. Duan Lingtian went along the tilted tree to once again return to the stalactite cave. Where's Little Black and Little White? Duan Lingtian had only just entered the stalactite cave when he noticed the 2 little pythons had disappeared. His face instantly went grim and his heart burned with anxiety. Even though Little Black and Little White like to play, but usually, they have never left arbitrarily, could it be that something happened? Duan Lingtian realized that it was no use of him to be anxious, and he must calm down, as only then would he be able to make the most accurate judgment. Could it be that someone came here? Duan Lingtian's heart couldn't help but jerk. In next to no time, he started searching along the floor of the stalactite cave and the cave passage. In the end, he confirmed one thing. Besides him, there wasn't a second person that had come here. Moreover, he'd noticed the traces the 2 little fellows had left behind on the cave passage. In other words, the 2 little fellows left themselves. Where did Little Black and Little White go? Could it be that they went to look for me? Duan Lingtian noticed that the traces the 2 little pythons left behind ended at the tilted tree before vanishing. Duan Lingtian returned to the peak of the mountain and searched for a while, but in the end he discovered that there weren't any traces of the little pythons on the mountain peak. In other words, the 2 little fellow didn't come to the mountain peak. Could it be that they can grow wings and fly? Duan Lingtian frowned, and before long his heart couldn't help but tremble. Or maybe, they fell from the tilted tree. Duan Lingtian took a deep breath and his mood that had only just calmed down a while ago once again became restless. Duan Lingtian left the Megrez Peak to arrive at Dubi Peak, then left the 7-star sword sect. He didn't go anywhere else, but instead went to the foot of Megrez Peak, as he wanted to confirm if the 2 little fellows had fallen down. Under the precipitous Megrez Peak, Duan Lingtian discovered the traces of the 2 little pythons after all. Duan Lingtian glanced at the precipitous cliff and he noticed that there were traces of the little pythons moving on it. In other words, the 2 little fellows had climbed down along the cliff. They really have guts. Duan Lingtian glanced at Megrez Peak that stood perfectly straight up. The precipitousness of this sword peak caused Duan Lingtian's heart to be unable to refrain from having traces of coldness arise within. I wonder where Little Black and Little White went. Duan Lingtian followed along the tracks on the ground to search all the way, and in the end he discovered that unknowingly, he'd once again arrived at the primeval forest, the dense forest where fierce beasts and demon beasts gathered in great numbers. The little python's tracks completely vanished after entering into the primeval forest, causing Duan Lingtian to have no way of finding them. What did those two little fellows come here for? Duan Lingtian shook his head, his face full of a bitter smile. Since I've come here, then I'll look around, and see if I can find them. If I find them, then I must surely teach them a lesson. So disobedient. Duan Lingtian was worried and angry towards the two mischievous little fellows. Even though the two little pythons were fierce beasts, but they were no different from family to him. Now that they'd suddenly left, to a certain extent they'd thrown Duan Lingtian's life into confusion, and for some time caused Duan Lingtian to find it difficult to adapt to it. On the way going deep into the primeval forest, Duan Lingtian encountered many fierce beasts, and they were practically cleanly swept through by Duan Lingtian. Slowly, Duan Lingtian noticed something. His quake energy wasn't all-powerful. His quake energy was only able to produce the use it ought to have when faced with opponents that had a difference of strength of within 10 ancient mammoths from him. Once the strength of his opponent was more than 10 ancient mammoths from him, his quake energy would be completely useless. For example, no matter if it the elephant rhino or the savage leopard he encountered when he entered the primeval forest earlier, or even the 7-star sword sect outer court disciples, Huo Xin and Yuan Wu, that he'd killing in the life and death arena today. Even though the strength Duan Lingtian used when dealing with them was lesser than them, but it didn't exceed the strength of 10 ancient mammoths. It was still within the scope of effect of the quake energy. In other words, relying on this current strength that was comparable to the strength of 71 ancient mammoths, the quake energy is able to affect martial artists at the 6th level of the origin core stage, but it was of no use against 7th level origin core stage martial artists. Duan Lingtian thought in his heart, and he quickly came to an understanding. A 6th level origin core stage martial artist possessed the strength of 80 ancient mammoths, and there was only a difference of the strength of 9 ancient mammoths from Duan Lingtian's current strength, thus it was within the quake energy's scope of effect. However, if a 6th level origin core stage martial artist were to utilize a grade 7 spirit weapon, his offensive strength would increase explosively. Even if I use a grade 7 spirit weapons, solely in terms of offense, I will surely be thrown off by the strength of more than 10 ancient mammoths. Duan Lingtian pondered slightly. Under these circumstances, I'm unable to use the method I used to deal with Huo Xin and Yuan Wu today, on a 6th level origin core stage martial artist. After all, the amplified strength that my opponent receives from his grade 7 spirit sword will be within the spirit sword in his hand, and if I were to use my spirit sword to go head-on with my opponent's spirit sword, the quake energy would be unable to be of any use. If I want to defeat my opponent, then I can only think of a way to seize my opponent's sword, or maybe find a suitable opportunity to force him to fight with me with bare hands. A 6th level origin core stage martial artist possessed a strength of 80 ancient mammoths, and once a grade 7 spirit sword was utilized, the offensive strength would increase explosively to a strength of more than 100 ancient mammoths. Whereas Duan Lingtian only possessed the strength of 71 ancient mammoths, even if he utilized a grade 7 spirit sword, his offensive strength would only be close to the strength of 90 ancient mammoths. In this way, the difference between the two would exceed the strength of 10 ancient mammoths. And it just happened to exceed the scope of effect of the quake energy. Truly a headache. Looks like if I really want to battle a 6th level origin core stage martial artist who possesses a grade 7 spirit sword, I still have to prepare some auxiliary inscriptions, only then would I be much safer. Duan Lingtian thought in his heart. If he didn't use an inscription and only a grade 7 spirit weapon, under the circumstances that his opponent had a grade 7 spirit sword as well, if he wanted to win then he could only launch a surprise attack or lure his opponent to abandon his opponent's spirit sword. But there was a certain amount of danger in doing so. Once his opponent wasn't deceived, he would be forced into a passive position, even to the extent he might be defeated or killed. Cultivation. I still have to properly increase my cultivation. Along with the increase in my cultivation, the might of the quake energy would increase as well. At that time, it would surely not be limited within the strength of 10 ancient mammoths. Duan Lingtian took a deep breath, and as he thought up to here, he was even more dedicated towards cultivating. Duan Lingtian searched in the primeval forest for a day and night, but didn't discover the tracks of the two little pythons and could only helplessly leave in the end. He believed that with the viability of the two little pythons, they ought to not be in any danger within the primeval forest. 286 Chapter 287, Do you dare? Duan Ling Tian returned to the Seven-Star Sword sect after leaving the primeval forest. He'd only just entered the sect and walking on the mountain path of the main peak, the Dubi Peak, when Duan Ling Tian heard two Seven-Star Sword sect outer court disciples that passed by whispering in discussion. Have you heard? A monster appeared in the Megrez Peak this time. One of the outer court disciples said to the companion beside him. I heard. Supposedly he's even a new disciple that had only just entered our Seven-Star Sword sect, at the 4th level of the Origin Core stage at an age of around 20. Such natural talent is absolutely a top-notch existence within the young generation of our Seven-Star Sword sect. The other outer court disciple nodded. He'd only just entered our Seven-Star Sword sect and had already ascended the life and death arena to kill two 4th level Origin Core stage outer court disciples, too formidable. The former praised. Duan Ling Tian's brows knit, then shook his head. He never expected that he'd only killed Huo Xin and Yuan Wu yesterday, and it had already spread all over the Seven-Star Sword sect today. On the way, Duan Ling Tian noticed that practically all the Seven-Star Sword sect disciples he encountered on the way were discussing the deed he performed from yesterday. Luckily, these Seven-Star Sword sect disciples didn't recognize him, otherwise, he would probably be looked upon like a rare animal. Duan Ling Tian once again walked past the chain bridge and returned to Megrez Peak. Duan Ling Tian had only just stepped on the Megrez Peak stone platform when he was stopped by a young man at around the age of 23 or 24. The young man had an ordinary appearance, the type that couldn't be found anymore once thrown into a crowd, but Duan Ling Tian didn't dare look down upon him. Duan Ling Tian's sharp spiritual force allowed him to realize that the cultivation of this young man was stronger than Huo Xin and Yuan Wu. Is something the matter? Duan Ling Tian frowned as he didn't know this person and didn't know why they would block him. Could it be a good friend of Huo Xin and Yuan Wu? Duan Ling Tian couldn't help but think in his heart. Duan Ling Tian, Elder Zhao Lin asked me to come look for you. If you're sensible, then hand over the thing Elder Zhao Lin wants, otherwise, you won't have a foothold in Megrez Peak any longer. The young man looked at Duan Ling Tian and said in a low voice. Even though he's head of the deed Duan Ling Tian performed yesterday, he didn't take it to heart. Yesterday, even if it was him, he would similarly be able to kill Huo Xin and Yuan Wu who had joined hands. As a 5th level Origin Core stage martial artist, he had this confidence. Duan Ling Tian came to a sudden understanding when he heard the young man. It was someone Elder Zhao Lin sent. Duan Ling Tian started laughing brilliantly. What are you laughing for? The young man's face sank, and he frowned. FK off. Duan Ling Tian's laughter was instantly restrained, and he shouted out explosively with a voice that was like a clap of thunder, causing the young man to be muddled and was unable to recover from his shock for a long time. You told me to FK off. The young man was stunned when he heard Duan Ling Tian, as if he'd encountered an inconceivable matter. Along with Duan Ling Tian's explosive shout, many Megrez Peak disciples from the direction of the trade hall noticed the commotion and surrounded them. Watching a scene was human nature. It's Duan Ling Tian. Who actually dares to offend Duan Ling Tian? Isn't this Lu Yu? How did he get at odds with Duan Ling Tian? Senior brother Lu Yu is in existence at the 5th level of the Origin Core stage. Even though Duan Ling Tian was able to kill two 4th level Origin Core stage outer court disciples, he might not be a match for senior brother Lu Yu. He actually dared to infuriate senior brother Lu Yu. I don't think so. On the life and death arena yesterday, either Huo Xin or Yuan Wu had stronger offensive strength than Duan Ling Tian, but in the end weren't they killed by Duan Ling Tian in a single move? Exactly, Duan Ling Tian's strength can't be judged by logic. I think so too. Since he dared be like this before senior brother Lu Yu, then he surely isn't afraid of senior brother Lu Yu. The crowd of Megrez Peak disciples that surrounded them had recognized Duan Ling Tian, and recognized the young man that had blocked Duan Ling Tian. Lu Yu, 5th level Origin Core stage. Duan Ling Tian looked at the young man before him and frowned as he heard the discussions of these Megrez Peak disciples. No wonder he dared block Duan Ling Tian, so it turned out that he was a 5th level Origin Core stage outer court disciple. But that Zhao Lin was really looking down on him. He thought that just a 5th level Origin Core stage outer court disciple was able to force him to hand over the cultivation method. Moreover, not to mention there was no such cultivation method in his possession. Even if there was, he still wouldn't give it to Zhao Lin. Lu Yu was originally completely infuriated by Duan Ling Tian asking him to FK off. When he heard the discussions of the surrounding Megrez Peak disciples, his expression flickered between a livid expression and a pale expression. His pair of icy cold eyes stared at Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian, I'll give you another chance. Hand over the thing I want, otherwise, you'll surely regret it. The spectating Megrez Peak disciples came to a sudden understanding when they heard Lu Yu. So it turned out that this Lu Yu wanted to seize Duan Lingtian's possession. I'll surely regret it. Duan Lingtian suddenly laughed when he heard Lu Yu's threats, and the smile on the corners of his mouth had traces of evilness mixed within. I'm really curious, how will you make me regret it? You're courting death. Lu Yu never imagined that Duan Lingtian's attitude was so unyielding, and his face sank, slightly getting angry from embarrassment. I'm courting death. Duan Lingtian took a step forward, and his fierce gaze descended onto Lu Yu, as he asked in a low voice. Since you dare say this, I presume you're extremely confident towards your own strength. Since it's like this, I, Duan Lingtian, invite you to battle me on the life and death arena. How about it? Do you dare? Do you dare? Duan Lingtian's voice was like a clap of thunder that instantly spread out. For a moment, even more Megrez Peak disciples noticed the commotion and flocked over from the direction of the trade hall. They'd also recognized Duan Lingtian and Lu Yu. Before long, they found out the sequence of events from the Megrez Peak disciples that had surrounded over much earlier. Instantly, their gazes descended onto Lu Yu, as they all wanted to know how Lu Yu would reply. After he heard Duan Lingtian's provocation, Lu Yu's face flushed red. Do you dare? What Duan Lingtian said ceaselessly reverberated within his mind. Thinking about the deed Duan Lingtian performed yesterday, and perceiving Duan Lingtian's confidence at this moment, he was slightly perturbed in his heart. If it was only an ordinary spar, so what if he agreed to it? But Duan Lingtian instead wanted him to ascend to the life and death arena now. Once a 7-star sword sect disciple ascended the life and death arena, it would also mean that they'd put their lives as the wager. He and Duan Lingtian couldn't be considered to bear any deep grudges. Moreover, he came to find Duan Lingtian today only because the Megrez Peak's elder Zhao Lin sent him here. As far as he was concerned, there was completely no necessity to throw his life in for the sake of this matter. Of course, most importantly, Duan Lingtian was too mysterious. Although he didn't go to the life and death arena to see that battle with his own 2 eyes, but he'd heard of the specific details of the battle. In merely a single move, Duan Lingtian relied on a grade 8 spirit sword to kill 2 7-star sword sect outer court disciples who possessed grade 7 spirit weapons and had the same cultivation as Duan Lingtian. Such ability caused him to be shocked. Duan Lingtian couldn't be judged by logic. So, although he was confident in his own strength, and felt that he ought to not lose to Duan Lingtian, he didn't dare agree to Duan Lingtian's life and death arena invitation. HMPH. How could Duan Lingtian not know what Lu Yu was thinking when he saw Lu Yu's expressions change between a livid expression and pale expression, and didn't reply after a long time? Duan Lingtian instantly had a disdainful expression. FK off. Lu Yu was still pondering when he abruptly heard Duan Lingtian's sudden shout. He unconsciously took a few steps backwards and was in a slightly sorry state. 5th level origin core stage. Nothing special. Duan Lingtian glanced at Lu Yu with a cold and indifferent gaze, then laughed in ridicule, not giving Lu Yu the slightest amount of face. As far as he was concerned, he and Lu Yu had no enmity against each other, and Lu Yu wanting to seize his cultivation method was only asking for insult, and wasn't worth being pitied. Only Duan Lingtian left did Lu Yu recover from his shock, and a wisp of bitterness appeared on the corners of his mouth. Earlier, he indeed was afraid. He was afraid that he would be killed by Duan Lingtian. Before his life, everything else seemed that much more unimportant. Yet Lu Yu didn't know now that it wouldn't be long before he would understand that how wise and correct his decision today was. The spectating crowd of Megrez Peak disciples booed ceaselessly. Their faces revealed a wisp of ridicule when they saw Lu Yu leaving in a sorry state. Since this Lu Yu doesn't dare agree to Duan Lingtian's life and death arena invitation, then don't act brave and go offend Duan Lingtian. Now, he's incurred the dislike of all parties. Simply asking for insult. Duan Lingtian is really formidable, scaring Lu Yu shitless with a single sentence. Of course, Duan Lingtian is the little freak of our Megrez Peak, and can't be judged by logic. Now, even if he's able to kill a 5th level origin core stage martial artist, I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest. Duan Lingtian returned to the mountain peak of Megrez Peak, and after he returned to the stalactite cave, he sat on the stone platform and calmed his heart to cultivate. 9 Dragons War Sovereign Technique, Worm Python Form. Now, the task of top priority for Duan Lingtian was to break through to the 5th level of the Origin Core stage. At that time, not only would his strength obtain a swift increase, but even the Quake energy would obtain an increase. He was extremely curious as to what extent the Quake energy would increase to once he broke through to the 5th level of the Origin Core stage. Megrez Peak, in a gorge that possessed adequate rays of light. A middle-aged man and a young man stood facing each other. Elder Zhao Lin, forgive me, you should look for another person. Lu Yu looked at Zhao Lin, a trace of bitterness appeared on the corners of his mouth, and he had a slight lingering fear. What? He refused you? Zhao Lin's eyes squinted, and contained piercingly cold lights within his gaze, as he asked in a low voice. Yes. Lu Yu nodded. You didn't teach him a lesson? Zhao Lin continued asking. Lu Yu shook his head. Why? Zhao Lin frowned. As far as he was concerned, although Duan Lingtian killed 2 4th-level Origin Core stage martial artists yesterday, Lu Yu was a 5th-level Origin Core stage martial artist after all, and ought to be able to frighten Duan Lingtian. But now it would seem that the facts weren't like this. He invited me to a battle on the life and death arena. I didn't dare gamble my life. I'm sorry, Elder Zhao Lin. A wisp of bitterness appeared on the corners of Lu Yu's mouth, then he bid his farewells before turning around and leaving. Bang! Origin energy palm prints condensed into form with the life of Zhao Lin's hand, and it whistled out smash a nearby stone table to pieces, then he said with an incomparably cold and indifferent voice. Duan Lingtian, since a 5th-level Origin Core stage martial artist can't do anything to you, then I'll go look for a 6th-level Origin Core stage martial artist. No matter what, I'll make you hand over that cultivation method. 287 Chapter 288, Burning Anxiety. Since the day the 2 little pythons left, and after Duan Lingtian returned, he'd cultivated in the stalactite cave all the time, and didn't leave the top of Megrez Peak. Of course, he was most worried that the 2 little fellows would return and be unable to find him. Luckily, he'd bought quite a lot of meat from the trade hall the other time, and it was sufficient for him to eat for a few months. Time passed quickly in the twinkling of an eye. In the blink of an eye, 2 months had passed. On the stone platform in the stalactite cave, Duan Lingtian sat cross-legged there, cultivating with a calm heart. After an unknown amount of time, suddenly, Duan Lingtian opened his eyes and a trace of a dazzling luster appeared in his eyes that had flowing lights revolving within. Only a little bit and I can break through to the 5th level of the Origin Core stage. A trace of a smile appeared on the corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth. After he returned to his senses, he couldn't help but sigh with a slight sense of loss. Those 2 little fellows wouldn't have settled down in the primeval forest, right? It's already been 2 months and they haven't returned. Looks like I should find some time to continue looking for them in the primeval forest. In next to no time, Duan Lingtian's gaze descended onto his 2 hands. Now, even though Duan Lingtian's hands were still smooth as jade like before, but they weren't as fair and delicate as before, and this was all the results of him frequently bathing under the sun on the peak of the mountain for these 2 months. His skin had finally recovered to a comparatively normal color. Now, Duan Lingtian was much more matured than before, as he'd already turned 20. It's been 2 months, I should go see those 2 little girls. Duan Lingtian's face revealed a light smile when he thought of Li Fei and Ke, then he stood up and left the stalactite cave. Before long, Duan Lingtian left the mountain peak and arrived nearby the trade hall. Duan Lingtian. Suddenly, Duan Lingtian heard an urgent cry. He glanced over, and a Megrez Peak disciple walked over from afar. Duan Lingtian frowned, and his face slightly sank. Could it be that it's again someone that Elder Zhao Lin sent? Duan Lingtian, you've finally appeared. Duan Lingtian quickly noticed that this Megrez Peak disciple seemed to not have been sent by Zhao Lin. Moreover, when the disciple saw Duan Lingtian, he seemed to heave a breath of relief. You are? Duan Lingtian had a questioning expression, as he didn't recognize this Megrez Peak disciple. This Megrez Peak disciple was a young man with a thin and weak figure, and he looked at Duan Lingtian. I'm a friend of Hu Li's. Hu Li. Duan Lingtian's gaze lit up when he heard what the young man said, and his expression eased up as he lightly smiled. Hu Li's friend is my friend. What are you called? Hu Li, one of the 2 friends he's gotten to know that day in the primeval forest. A straightforward young man. That day, the experiences in the primeval forest also made him take Hu Li as a good friend. I'm He Chun, Duan Lingtian, come with me to see Hu Li. 1 month ago, he came here to look for you. I and Hu Li were waiting for you for half a month, but you didn't appear, and he returned to Fekta Peak half a month ago. He Chun sighed, and a trace of dejection appeared on his face. Duan Lingtian's heart jerked when he saw He Chun's expression. What? Has something happened to Hu Li? At the first moment, Duan Lingtian recalled that Xiao Fei who'd been members of the same small team as him, Shi Lan, and Hu Li in the primeval forest 2 months ago. Could it be that Xiao Fei asked his old brother to take revenge on Hu Li? He Chun nodded, and a trace of melancholy and unwillingness appeared in his eyes. Take me to see Hu Li. What the heck actually happened? Duan Lingtian urged He Chun to lead the way. He asked as he walked swiftly, his face filled with anxiety. 2 months ago, in the primeval forest, Hu Li was willing to die to fight for a chance for survival for Duan Lingtian. Since that moment, he's taken Hu Li as a friend of life and death in his heart. Now, when he heard something had happened to Hu Li, he had a burning anxiety in his heart. At the same time, he urgently wanted to know what the heck happened to Hu Li. Whoosh! Right when Duan Lingtian and He Chun wanted to step onto the chain bridge, a figure that was swift like the wind obstructed before Duan Lingtian's group of 2. This was a young man around the age of 25, he had handsome and refined features, and a pair of incomparably fierce eyes. Senior brother Tang Bai, He Chun couldn't help but exclaim in surprise when he saw this young man. Meanwhile, many Megrez Peak disciples saw this scene, and surrounded over. It's Duan Lingtian, he's finally appeared, and I still thought that he was intentionally hiding because he knew senior brother Tang Bai was looking for him all over. Senior brother Tang Bai has searched for him for more than a month, he's finally appeared. The crowd of Megrez Peak disciples that surrounded over discussed animatedly. FK off. A trace of crimson red appeared in Duan Lingtian's eyes, as he stared at the young man that obstructed his path and shouted out in a cold voice. Duan Lingtian's current thoughts were all on Hu Li, and he urgently wanted to see Hu Li now, wanting to know what exactly happened to Hu Li. Formidable. Duan Lingtian is too formidable, directly asking senior brother Tang Bai to FK off. He couldn't be unaware of senior brother Tang Bai, right? Senior brother Tang Bai isn't someone that Lu Yu from 2 months ago can compare to. Senior brother Tang Bai's face has gone grim, this Duan Lingtian is surely going to suffer a great misfortune. I really wonder where he got the courage. Even if he killed 2 4th-level origin core stage martial artists, but what about it? Senior brother Tang Bai is a famous outer court disciple in our Megrez Peak, an existence at the 6th level of the origin core stage. The crowd of Megrez Peak disciples looked at Duan Lingtian with gazes filled with pity. Even though Duan Lingtian had shocked all of them 2 months ago, but as far as they were concerned, even if Duan Lingtian was any more heaven-defying, he was still only a 4th-level origin core stage martial artist, and even if he was even more heaven-defying, he would at most be equal to a 5th-level origin core stage martial artist. Faced with a 6th-level origin core stage martial artist, he would only be bashed. Tang Bai's expression went gloomy. On Megrez Peak, there hadn't been a single outer court disciple that dared be so arrogant before him. Duan Lingtian, you wouldn't be thinking that I'm like that trash, Lu Yu, right? Tang Bai looked at Duan Lingtian, and a wisp of a sneer appeared on the corners of his mouth, his eyes contained a piercingly cold light as he stared fixedly at Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian wasn't afraid in the slightest as he looked at Tang Bai and said in a low voice. You're looking for me, for the same reason as Lu Yu. Tang Bai sneered. It's good that you know, if you're sensible, then quickly hand it over. Otherwise, I'm not trash like that Lu Yu. Duan Lingtian suddenly burst out into a laugh when he heard Tang Bai, and his face was covered with a layer of coldness. Is that so? Since that's the case, I presume you ought to dare agree to my invitation to the life and death arena, right? Duan Lingtian never imagined that Zhao Lin would actually go on endlessly like this. First sending Lu Yu, then now sending another Tang Bai. However, he urgently wanted to see Hu Li now, and didn't have time to talk nonsense with Tang Bai here, so he directly brought out the life and death arena, wanting to make Tang Bai retreat after becoming aware of the difficulties. Even though Tang Bai was a 6th-level origin core stage martial artist, he wasn't afraid. You want to invite me to the life and death arena? Tang Bai was obviously stunned when he heard Duan Lingtian. Even though he heard about Duan Lingtian using the life and death arena to scare Lu Yu to retreat 2 months ago, as far as he was concerned, it was because Lu Yu was cowardly. Even if this Duan Lingtian was any more mysterious, and his method any more bizarre, but he was still only a 4th-level origin core stage martial artist. In the eyes of he, a 6th-level origin core stage martial artist, a 4th-level origin core stage martial artist was no different from an ant. If he wanted to kill Duan Lingtian, it was even easier than cutting grass. Swoosh! What Duan Lingtian said caused the spectating crowd of Megre's Peak disciples to be completely stunned. They only recovered from their shock after a long time. I didn't hear wrongly, right? This Duan Lingtian wants to invite senior brother Tang Bai to battle in the life and death arena. Is he courting death? The crowd of Megre's Peak disciples were all shocked by what Duan Lingtian said. As far as they were concerned, even if a 4th-level origin core stage martial artist's skills were any more brilliant, it would still be impossible to defeat a 6th-level origin core stage martial artist. There was a difference of an entire strength of 20 ancient mammoths amongst the two. The strength of 20 ancient mammoths was a chasm that's difficult to leap over. What? Dare to obstruct me, but don't dare to agree to my life and death arena invitation. Duan Lingtian stared at Tang Bai with a cold and indifferent gaze, and mocked. If you don't dare, then quickly FK off. I still have urgent matters to attend to, and don't have time to talk nonsense with you. What did you say? You said, I don't dare. Tang Bai was amused to laughter by Duan Lingtian, and he laughed arrogantly. Duan Lingtian, since you actually want to court death, then I'll grant your wish. I agree to ascend the life and death arena to battle you. It's up to you as we go over directly right now, or set a time. I can give you some time to arrange your funeral affairs. Tomorrow at noon, I'll fight you in the life and death arena. It won't end until one of us dies. Duan Lingtian's eyes squinted, and he had a face full of killing intent. Now, FK off. Alright, tomorrow at noon, I'll wait for you in the life and death arena. I hope that at that time, you won't be cowardly and not show up. Tang Bai stood aside, and trace of a smile appeared on the corners of his mouth. He'd achieved his objective, and his mood was incomparably at ease. As far as he was concerned, so long as he forced Duan Lingtian into a situation of life and death, he wasn't afraid that Duan Lingtian wouldn't hand over the things Elder Zhao Lin wanted. At that time, he would be able to obtain the generous rewards that Elder Zhao Lin provided. I'm worried you wouldn't dare come. Duan Lingtian, who had a burning anxiety in his heart, brought He Chun along as he walked out in large strides, and when he heard what Tang Bai said, he couldn't help but sneer as he replied. He Chun, let's go. Take me to see Hu Li. Duan Lingtian's tone was incomparably anxious and his figure flashed out to step onto the chain bridge and move towards Dubi Peak. Duan Lingtian, you're too rash. That Tang Bai is a famous outer court disciple in our Megre's Peak, an existence at the 6th level of the origin core stage. He Chun followed by Duan Lingtian's side, and had a bitter smile on his face. He never imagined that Duan Lingtian would actually invite Tang Bai to ascend to the life and death arena and conduct a bloody battle that wouldn't end until one party died. Similar to the crowd of Megre's Peak disciples, he didn't look favorably on Duan Lingtian. At the same time, the entire Megre's Peak started spreading the news of Duan Lingtian inviting Tang Bai to battle on the life and death arena tomorrow, and Tang Bai had agreed. For a time, the entire Megre's Peak was in an uproar. 2 months ago, I just happened to be in closed-door cultivation and missed that life and death arena battle. I must not miss tomorrow's battle. Truly causing one to look forward to it. One is our Megre's Peak's little freak, the other is our Megre's Peak's famous 6th level origin core stage outer court disciple. 288 Chapter 289, Creating a Stir in Fecta Peak. Right when all the Megre's Peak disciples were looking forward to the battle in the life and death arena tomorrow, Duan Lingtian and He Chun arrived at Dubi Peak and went through another chain bridge and stepped onto Fecta Peak. Fecta Peak was similar to Megre's Peak, and were both sword peaks that 7-star sword sect male disciples gathered. Here, not even one female disciple could be seen. Although Duan Lingtian could be considered as famous in the 7-star sword sect outer court, but only some of the Megre's Peak disciples had really seen him, and practically no one amongst the disciples of Fecta Peak recognized him. Under He Chun's lead, Duan Lingtian walked into a gorge that couldn't be considered as spacious. Duan Lingtian's expressions wasn't sightly now. On the way, he'd asked He Chun about Hu Li many times, but He Chun would hesitate to speak every time, seeming to find it difficult to speak. A bad premonition arose within his heart. When Duan Lingtian once again saw Hu Li, his eyes instantly transformed into crimson red. A terrifying killing intent swept out from Duan Lingtian's figure. Hu Li, who did it? Duan Lingtian's voice practically come out as he gnashed his teeth, His voice had an awe-inspiring killing intent mixed within, as if it came from the depths of hell. He Chun, who stood beside Duan Lingtian, was enveloped by Duan Lingtian's killing intent. His face went ghastly pale as he retreated a few steps in panic, then looked at Duan Lingtian with a face of terror. The killing intent that arose from Duan Lingtian's body caused him to feel heartfelt awe. It was hard for him to imagine what exactly a young man of around 20 experienced to actually be able to develop such a terrifying killing intent. Duan Lingtian's figure violently trembled. At this moment, it seemed that only Hu Li, who hobbled out of the wooden house earlier, remained in his gaze. One of Hu Li's legs had vanished without a trace now, and he now relied on one leg and a cane to walk now. Hu Li didn't have his edge from before, instead he had a disheveled face full of stubble that wasn't cleaned up, and he stood there with a drooping spirits. Even though he was alive, but he seemed to be in even more pain than if he were dead. As a martial artist, losing a leg was equivalent to losing one's future. Duan Lingtian, Hu Li saw Duan Lingtian, and a trace of vigor appeared on his ghastly pale face, and the corners of his mouth curled into a slight smile with great difficulty. A sense of bitterness was mixed within his smile. It's Xiao Fei's older brother who did it. Duan Lingtian's heart was trembled, and the accumulated flames of rage in his heart was practically about to blast his chest open. Hu Li lightly nodded. Take me to see him. Duan Lingtian's crimson-red eyes had dense killing intent suffused within, a killing intent that seemed ready to swallow Xiao Fei and his older brother up. A blood debt would be repaid in blood. Duan Lingtian. Hu Li shook his head, and a trace of helplessness appeared on his face. Don't go. If you go, then you'd have fallen into his trap. If even you suffer his revenge, then Xilan would absolutely not die in peace. As he finished speaking, Hu Li's figure trembled lightly, and a man that bled but didn't shed tears couldn't refrain 2 rows of clear tears from dropping down. A man's tears weren't easily shed, only because he hasn't met with heartbreak. Hu Li. Seeing Hu Li on the verge of collapse, He Chun walked forward a few steps and supported Hu Li. What did you say? Xilan is dead. Duan Lingtian was dumbstruck, and the voice his throat emitted became hoarse. He was completely stunned on the spot with a face full of disbelief. He Li's body twitched, and utmost hate appeared on his face. He was agitated to the point he couldn't speak. Duan Lingtian, I'll tell you. He Chun looked at Duan Lingtian and sighed. Xiao Fei's older brother Xiao Ying first severed one of Hu Li's legs, then looked for Xilan, desiring to rape Xilan, and sully her. Xilan had an unyielding temper, and would rather die than submit, so she directly leapt off Alcade Peak. Although He Chun didn't continue, but Duan Lingtian already knew the result. The Alcade Peak was one of the 7 great sword peaks of 7-star sword sect. One would die without a doubt from falling. Swoosh! Duan Lingtian's body trembled, and his face went gloomy. The outer court disciple's attire on his body whistled without wind. Xiao Ying. Duan Lingtian's eyes emitted a bloodthirsty sheen, and the flames of rage within his heart completely exploded out. After a short amount of time, the rage on his body withdrew, and flames of rage that seemed to be able to burn everything had condensed within his eyes as he said in a low voice. Hu Li, take me to the Fecta Peak's life and death arena. Fecta Peak's life and death arena. Hu Li guessed Duan Lingtian's intentions, and his face went ghastly pale. Even though he'd heard of the matter of Duan Lingtian killing 2 4th-level Origin Core Stage Outer Court disciples on the Megrez Peak's life and death arena 2 months ago, but he wasn't surprised. Because he knew that Duan Lingtian's cultivation wasn't at the 4th level of the Origin Core Stage as the rumors say, but was at the 5th level of the Origin Core Stage. To Duan Lingtian, killing 2 4th-level Origin Core Stage Outer Court disciples was easy like flipping his hand. However, Xiao Ying was different. Xiao Ying was a famous outstanding outer court disciple of Fecta Peak, with a cultivation that had stepped into the 6th level of the Origin Core Stage, and had an extremely strong strength. Supposedly, he was already charging towards the 7th level of the Origin Core Stage right now. Duan Lingtian, you've broken through to the 6th level of the Origin Core Stage. Hu Li took a deep breath and looked at Duan Lingtian. The nearby He Chun was stunned. 6th level Origin Core Stage. Wasn't Duan Lingtian a 4th level Origin Core Stage martial artist? Even if Hu Li wanted to ask of Duan Lingtian's cultivation, he ought to ask whether Duan Lingtian has broken through to the 5th level of the Origin Core Stage. Now, he only thought that Hu Li had spoken wrongly. He Chun however didn't know that Duan Lingtian's true cultivation was indeed at the 4th level of the Origin Core Stage, but because of certain reasons, he was able to exert a strength comparable to the 5th level of the Origin Core stage, and had even displayed it before Hu Li. So, in Hu Li's eyes, Duan Ling Tian was a 5th level Origin Core stage martial artist since long ago. Duan Ling Tian shook his head when faced with Hu Li's question. His current cultivation was similar to when he entered the primeval forest that time, only at the 4th level of the Origin Core stage, but was able to exert a strength comparable to the 5th level of the Origin Core stage. That won't do, Duan Ling Tian, that absolutely won't do. You aren't a match for Xiao Ying. I know you want to take revenge for me and Xi Lan, but even if Xi Lan was still alive, I believe she wouldn't let you help us take revenge now. You looking for Xiao Ying now is completely giving away your life. Hu Li had an agitated expression as he looked at Duan Ling Tian. Duan Ling Tian, listen to me. With your natural talent, surpassing Xiao Ying in the future is a matter of time. Just endure for a few more years, and once your cultivation surpasses Xiao Ying, then take revenge for me and Xi Lan. Duan Ling Tian understood that Hu Li was worried about him. Duan Ling Tian never imagined that even after being harmed by Xiao Ying to such a state, Hu Li still forcefully suppressed the hatred he had towards Xiao Ying for the sake of Duan Ling Tian's safety. He felt even worse in his heart when Hu Li did this. Hu Li though that Duan Ling Tian accepted his suggestion when he saw Duan Ling Tian going silent, and couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. At the same times, traces of bitterness appeared on the corners of Hu Li's mouth, and his eyes emitted infinite regret. Duan Ling Tian, during these days, I've always been regretful. I regret why I helped Xi Lan that day to ask you to leave Xiao Fei alive. I actually believed the word of that type of shameless vile person as well. I regret. Hu Li could imagine that if he persisted on killing Xiao Fei that day, all this might not have happened. Xi Lan wouldn't have died as well. His leg wouldn't have been crippled as well. But unfortunately, there was no medicine to treat regret in this world. The consequences that the choice that day brought upon him was something he was bound to bear himself. Duan Ling Tian lifted up his head and took a deep breath. His pair of crimson-red eyes didn't contain a trace of feelings. All that it contained was utmost icy coldness. I'm at fault in this matter as well. At that time, I shouldn't have listened to the opinions of both of you. If I acted arbitrarily and killed him, the later events wouldn't have happened. Duan Ling Tian shook his head, his voice went even hoarser, and it sounded calm but actually contained rage that was suppressed to the utmost limit. Duan Ling Tian, it has nothing to do with you, it was I and Xi Lan who were too naive and mistakenly trusted Xiao Fei. Hu Li shook his head. He was clear in his heart that Duan Ling Tian listened to his and Xi Lan's opinions that day because Duan Ling Tian respected them. When all is said and done, this matter was something that he and Xi Lan's mistake caused. You, rest properly. Duan Ling Tian nodded to Hu Li, then turned around to leave the gorge. Hu Li originally thought Duan Ling Tian was returning to Megrez Peak, but it wasn't long before an uproar arose outside the gorge, causing a bad premonition to arise in his heart. He Chun, let's go out and take a look. When Hu Li walked out of the gorge under the support of He Chun, and heard the discussions from outside, his face went ghastly pale. Quickly go to the life and death arena. That Megrez Peak's Duan Ling Tian have come and has spread word of challenging our Fecta Peak's senior brother Xiao Ying. Duan Ling Tian, the little freak that's around 20, and relied on a cultivation at the 4th level of the Origin Core stage to kill 2 4th level Origin Core stage outer court disciples 2 months ago. Exactly. Quickly go over. If we're late, there won't be any good spots left. The Fecta Peak disciples headed towards the direction of the Fecta Peak's life and death arena in an incomparably hasty manner. Duan Ling Tian, why didn't you listen to my advice? Hu Li's face was covered in melancholy and regret. I shouldn't have let Duan Ling Tian know about the matter of me and Xi Lan. Never had Hu Li imagined that Duan Ling Tian would actually be so rash. Hu Li, even if Duan Ling Tian listened to your advice, he might not be able to live past tomorrow. He Chun who stood beside Hu Li had a bitter smile on his face. He Chun, what do you mean by this? Hu Li frowned, and stared at He Chun with a burning gaze. He Chun sighed and told Hu Li of the matter of Duan Ling Tian inviting another Megrez Peak 6th level Origin Core stage outer court disciple to ascend the Megrez Peak's life and death arena for a battle tomorrow. Hu Li went silent when he heard this, and his brows creased. At this moment, the worry in his heart instead slightly dispersed. Could it be that Duan Ling Tian had the confidence to deal with a 6th level Origin Core stage martial artist? Even though he wasn't together with Duan Lingtian for a long time, but the feeling Duan Lingtian gave him wasn't the type of person who didn't know the seriousness of a matter. A trace of hope arose within his heart. I, Duan Lingtian, a disciple of Megrez Peak, challenge the Fekta Peak's disciple, Xiao Ying, to a battle on the Fekta Peak's life and death arena. A battle that only ceases on death of one party. This sentence was the source of the Sur in Fekta Peak. In a short amount of time, it spread throughout the entire Fekta Peak. Fekta Peak, in a spacious gorge. Brother, that Duan Lingtian couldn't restrain himself as expected, your move is really too brilliant. The originally gloomy expression on Xiao Fei, whose leg was severed, had dispersed, and a trace of a smile from the plot being successful appeared on his face. So long as he really took Xilan and Hu Li as friends, he naturally wouldn't stand idly by. However, I never imagined that he actually dared to directly invite me to a battle in the life and death arena. The young man that spoke now had a slight similarity to Xiao Fei between his brows. It was precisely Xiao Fei's older brother, Xiao Ying. 289 Chapter 290, Battling Xiao Ying. Brother, that Duan Lingtian isn't at the 4th level of the Origin Core stage like the rumors says. I can confirm that he was at the 5th level of the Origin Core stage 2 months ago. Moreover, he has a grade 7 spirit sword in his possession. Xiao Fei's heart couldn't help but tremble when he recalled the scene of Duan Lingtian killing the savage leopard. The savage leopard was killed by him with a single sword strike. Now, he dares invite brother to battle on the life and death arena. Could he have broken through? As he finished speaking, Xiao Fei was slightly afraid. Broken through? Xiao Ying didn't take it seriously. I only lack the last step to break through to the 7th level of the Origin Core stage. Within the Fekta Peak, no 6th level Origin Core stage outer court disciple didn't dare say they could firmly defeat me, not to mention an outer court disciple that had only just broken through to the 6th level of the Origin Core stage. Even if he's broken through, I'm still not afraid. The corners of Xiao Ying's mouth curled into a sneer, and his eyes had piercingly cold lights within. Today, I will wrench his head off in the life and death arena, and give it to you to kick like a ball. Thank you, brother. Xiao Fei's eyes lit up abruptly, as Xiao Ying's confidence allowed him to be at ease. Little Fei, it's difficult for you to move around, so don't go. Wait for brother to bring home Duan Lingtian's head for you. Xiao Ying stood up and spoke to Xiao Fei. His eyes revealed a trace of killing intent as he turned around and left the gorge. Meanwhile, Xiao Fei glanced at his severed leg, and his eyes flickered with traces of cold light. Duan Lingtian, I'm crippled all because of you. Today, my brother will take revenge for me and kill you. Ha 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 ha. After he muttered, Xiao Fei burst out into wild and arrogant laughter, as if he'd already seen the scene of Xiao Fei bringing Duan Lingtian's head back. The Fekta Peak's life and death arena was similar to the life and death arena on Megrez Peak, both situated halfway down the mountain. After Duan Lingtian spread word of his challenge to Xiao Fei at the Fekta Peak's trade hall, he arrived here under the lead of the crowd of Fekta Peak disciples. Duan Lingtian quietly stood there on the spacious life and death arena, his eyes calm and dim. Compared to the calmness on the surface, raging waves had arose within Duan Lingtian's heart. At this moment, he couldn't help but recall Xilan's lovely voice and happy countenance in his mind. He could still remember that when he first met Xilan had made a move to help him kill a fierce beast. That warm girl caused Duan Lingtian to have quite a good impression of her. Later on, as a woman, Xilan was willing to die in order to pave a path of survival for him, causing his heart to shake because of this. This was a heroine with exceptional ability. A heroine that caused Duan Lingtian to admire her. But now, Xilan was dead. Xilan. Duan Lingtian took a deep breath, and his eyes were slightly wet. Xilan was in her prime, and would have a great future. However, now, all of it was destroyed. Outside the life and death arena, a Fekta Peak disciple had sharp eyes and noticed the young man that walked over swiftly from afar, then exclaimed. Senior brother Xiao Ying has arrived. Instantly, the Fekta Peak disciples that surrounded the life and death arena shot their gazes onto Xiao Ying. Duan Lingtian noticed the commotion, his gaze then descended onto the young man in the distance who had an appearance that was slightly similar to Xiao Fei. The age of this young man was older than Xiao Fei, around the age of 25. Xiao Ying. Duan Lingtian calmly gazed at Xiao Ying ascending the life and death arena, and a wisp of coldness appeared on the corners of his mouth. You're Duan Lingtian. Even though Xiao Ying had heard of Duan Lingtian before, but he couldn't help but be surprised when he saw Duan Lingtian today, as he never imagined Duan Lingtian would be so young. Duan Lingtian's eyes stared fixedly at Xiaoying, as if he was deeply afraid that Xiaoying would disappear from before his eyes. You ought to be a little over 20, right? I heard from my younger brother that you were a 5th level origin core stage martial artist 2 months ago. Now, since you have the courage to fight me, I presume you've already broken through to the 6th level of the origin core stage. Xiaoying looked at Duan Lingtian and slowly spoke. Needless to say, your natural talent shocked me. But, today, you're bound to die here, to die by my hands. I, Xiaoying, can be considered to have not lived my life in vain since I can kill a monstrous genius in the martial Dao like you in my lifetime. Even though Xiao Fei's voice wasn't loud, but practically all the Fecta Peak disciples present heard it clearly. Instantly, the surrounding of the life and death arena was in an uproar. Isn't Duan Lingtian a 4th level origin core stage martial artist? Why would senior brother Xiaoying say he's a 5th level origin core stage martial artist? Moreover, Duan Lingtian might have broken through to the 6th level of the origin core stage. How can this be possible? How old is this Duan Lingtian? A young man that looks to be a little over 20 at most being able to cultivate to the 4th level of the origin core stage has already caused us to be shocked. If he's at the 5th level of the origin core stage, or even the 6th level of the origin core stage, how can we live on like this? Could senior brother Xiaoying be mistaken? No matter what, the crowd of Fecta Peak disciples weren't willing to believe that Duan Lingtian was a 5th level origin core stage martial artist or a 6th level origin core stage martial artist. Behind the crowd, He Chun supported Hu Li as they gazed at Duan Lingtian, who was on the life and death arena from afar. Hu Li, is Duan Lingtian really a 6th level origin core stage martial artist? He Chun was shocked as well when he heard Xiaoying, and asked with slight disbelief. 2 months ago, the strength he exerted was at the 5th level of the origin core stage. As for the 6th level of the origin core stage, you saw earlier when we were still within the gorge, Duan Lingtian denied having broken through to the 6th level of the origin core stage. Hu Li shook his head, and his gaze that looked at Duan Lingtian was filled with worry. Now, if Duan Lingtian was killed by that Xiaoying, he wouldn't be able to forgive himself in his entire life. After all, if it wasn't for him telling Duan Lingtian of he and Shilan's experience, Duan Lingtian wouldn't go look for Xiaoying. In the life and death arena, Duan Lingtian paid no attention when faced with Xiaoying's continuous chatter, and his hand trembled. Then a grade 7 spirit sword appeared out of thin air. Now, he only had one thought in his heart: kill Xiaoying, and take revenge for Shilan and Hu Li. Looks like you're already impatient to court death. A trace of a smile appeared on the corners of Xiaoying's mouth when he saw Duan Lingtian's actions, and with a raise of his hand, a 3-foot-long blade appeared in his hand, a grade 7 spirit sword as well. Swoosh! Instantly, origin energy jumped about and raged on the grade 7 spirit sword in Xiaoying's hands. Above him, 102 ancient mammoth silhouettes condensed into form, ready to dash out at any moment. 6th level origin core stage, grade 7 spirit sword. Duan Lingtian. There was still a smile on Xiaoying's face, as if everything before him was controlled within his hands. I've already promised my younger brother, that after I kill you, I'll wrench off your head and give it to him as a ball to kick around. As he finished speaking, Xiaoying's tone had a dense killing intent mixed within. Swoosh! At almost the exact same time that Xiaoying spoke, origin energy jumped about on the grade 7 spirit sword in Duan Lingtian's hand. Instantly, 90 ancient mammoth silhouettes condensed into form above Duan Lingtian. He's really at the 5th level of the origin core stage. Unbelievable. A little over 20 and at the 5th level of the origin core stage, such natural talent can probably be compared with the most outstanding in our Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom's younger generation, the 5 great young masters. In the current younger generation, it wasn't easy for our 7-star sword sect to possess a figure whose natural talent can compare to the 5 great young masters, but unfortunately, he's going to lose his life here today. Even if a 5th level origin core stage martial artist utilizes a grade 7 spirit sword, the difference from Xiaoying was still another 12 ancient mammoths. The difference is too great. This battle is without suspense. Duan Lingtian will undoubtedly die. Many Fecta Peak disciples couldn't help but sigh. Duan Lingtian's natural talent in the martial Dao caused them to be shocked. However, as far as they were concerned, Duan Lingtian was bound to die in the life and death arena today. In the life and death arena, the coldness on the corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth grew colder when he heard Xiaoying, and spoke to Xiaoying for the first time. Kick is a ball. Are you sure that cripple can still kick a ball? Cripple. Xiao Ying's calm expression instantly went grim when Duan Lingtian finished speaking. Xiao Ying's eyes transformed into a crimson-red color. Duan Lingtian, if it wasn't for you refusing to help, how could my young brother become crippled? Today, I'll let your life repay the loss of my younger brother's leg. Then it would depend if you have the capability or not. It just so happens that I want to take your and Xiao Fei's lives, to console Shilan's spirit in heaven. Duan Lingtian's eyes went cold, and his flames of rage that were suppressed to the utmost limit completely exploded out. Shilan, you mean that little virgin? Haha, she was rather good-looking. I originally wanted to give her some love, but who would have thought that she would actually be so unyielding, and would rather drop down a bottomless abyss than be willing to let me touch her. What a waste. Xiao Ying suddenly laughed. He laughed arrogantly and wildly, without restraint. Meanwhile, the crowd of Fecta Peak disciples came to a sudden understanding. So it turned out that there was such a deep enmity between Duan Lingtian and Xiao Ying. Duan Lingtian. Hu Li's expression stiffened, and stared fixedly at Duan Lingtian with a face full of worry. I originally thought you ought to have broken through to the 6th level of the Origin Core stage, but who would have known that you actually didn't break through, truly boring. Since it's like this, then I'll send you off right now, and let you to gather together with that little virgin. Xiao Ying looked at Duan Lingtian as he spoke with a voice filled with disdain, and the origin energy on the grade 7 spirit sword in his hand increased explosively. Are you done? Duan Lingtian looked at Xiao Ying with a calm gaze and a carefree expression on his face, but the rage in his head was instead at the limit. Since you're so anxious to go to hell, then I'll send you off. Xiao Ying sneered, his body flashed as if transforming into a gust of wind that flashed straight towards Duan Lingtian, and in the blink of an eye he'd arrived nearby before Duan Lingtian. Whoosh! The grade 7 spirit sword in Xiao Ying's hand swiftly flashed out, as if transforming into a bolt of lightning that went straight for Duan Lingtian's throat. Cutthroat sword. At the instant that Xiao Ying attacked, someone exclaimed in surprise as the person had recognized the sword skill Xiao Ying executed. So fast. Duan Lingtian's eyes squinted, and the grade 7 spirit sword in his hand flashed out to intercept. Sword drawing arts. The sword light that flashed before vanishing, causing one to barely be able to catch a glimpse of it. In terms of speed, it wasn't inferior to Xiao Ying's cutthroat sword in the slightest. Clang! Xiao Ying's sword was blocked by Duan Lingtian's sword. Xiao Ying never imagined that Duan Lingtian would be able to block his sword strike, and shock appeared on his face. I never imagined that your sword skill was so formidable, executed with a strength of a mere 90 ancient mammoths, but the speed of the sword is able to compare with my cutthroat sword that I executed with the strength of 102 ancient mammoths. 290 Chapter 291, The Death of Xiao Ying. The sword drawing arts stressed upon a single word, speed. Perhaps, the might of the sword drawing arts was inferior to most high-grade profound rank sword skills. But in terms of speed, high-grade profound rank sword skills could only fall far behind. Your sword skill is pretty good, but your strength is completely not on the same level as mine. Before formidable strength, you are unable to stop me. A wisp of disdain appeared on the corners of Xiao Ying's mouth, and coldness leapt up within his eyes. The hand that held his grade 7 spirit sword trembled and he was about to use his entire strength to directly knock away the grade 7 spirit sword in Duan Lingtian's hand, and penetrate Duan Lingtian's throat. Is that so? Right at this instant, Duan Lingtian moved, his other hand instantly flashed out, and he pointed out a finger that bore through clouds and gave birth to mist. The finishing touch of the dragon's finishing touch. Whoosh! His finger pointed out, and piercing whistling sounds deafened the ears, as it pointed out towards Xiao Ying's eyes. The speed of this point wasn't much slower than the sword drawing arts. Do you think that only you know martial skills other than sword skills? Xiao Ying sneered, his other hand moved as well, abruptly changing into a claw that tore through the sky and grabbed toward Duan Lingtian's left hand that Duan Lingtian used to point out a finger with. Duan Lingtian started laughing. Although Xiao Ying was slightly astonished when he saw the smile that suddenly appeared on Duan Lingtian's face, but his claw strike still fiercely descended, grabbing out at Duan Lingtian, wanting to hold onto Duan Lingtian's left hand, then use the sword in his right hand to exert force and penetrate Duan Lingtian's throat. He wasn't able to do two things at once after all. Whoosh! At the instant that a smile appeared on Duan Lingtian's face, the finger that Duan Lingtian pointed out instantly turned to intercept Xiao Ying's claw strike. You're overestimating yourself. Xiao Ying sneered when he saw this scene. As far as he was concerned, even if the claw he executed with a martial skill didn't utilize the strength of his spirit weapon, it was still powered by the strength of 80 ancient mammoths. Whereas the finger Duan Lingtian pointed out didn't have a spirit weapon to rely on as well, and only had the strength of 70 ancient mammoths. Duan Lingtian could only be trampled on by him. Only when the finger Duan Lingtian pointed out and his claw descended down to collide with each other, did Xiao Ying's expression change. First it was astonishment, then it was disbelief. Ah! Subsequently, Xiao Ying's shrill cry sounded out from deep within Xiao Ying's throat, as if he'd suffered utmost pain. Under the gazes of everyone present, Duan Lingtian's finger penetrated into Xiao Ying's palm, and fresh blood splattered everywhere. Not to mention this, everyone quickly noticed that at the same time that Xiao Ying's emitted shrill cries, his entire body vibrated, even the hand that held the sword was now powerless, and the Grade 7 spirit sword slipped from his hand and dropped to the ground. What's going on? All the Fecta Peak disciples had bewildered expressions as they looked at Xiao Ying, who was emitting shrill cries as he danced on the life and death arena, and completely didn't know what had happened. Crackle crackle, before long, a burst of clear sounds of bones fracturing sounded in their ears. The sound is coming from senior brother Xiao Ying's body. Oh my god, what did Duan Lingtian do to him? The expressions of all the Fecta Peak disciples went pale. And now, Duan Lingtian, who was on the life and death arena, had a cold smile on the corners of his mouth. This Xiao Ying really thought he was overestimating himself. Earlier, when his dragon finishing touch's finger pointed onto Xiao Ying's palm, he's used the quake energy to directly penetrate Xiao Ying's carpal bone. The terrifying quake energy used Xiao Ying's carpal bone as the starting point to spread onto the bones in Xiao Ying's entire body within a blink of an eye, instantly quaking Xiao Ying's bones to the point they shattered. Xiao Ying's body was penetrated by countless shattered bones, and after emitting shrill cry for some time, his voice stopped. Dead. When Xiao Ying died, his eyes were wide like saucers, and even until death he didn't know what had happened. Perhaps, even till death he couldn't wrap his head around it. Even if not using a spirit weapon, why would Duan Lingtian, whose strength was far inferior to him, be able to execute a martial skill and kill him with bare hands? Bang! Along with Duan Lingtian withdrawing his attacks, Xiao Ying's body was unable to hold on any longer, and crashed onto the floor, completely without any signs of life. The surrounding of the life and death arena was deathly silent. Xiao Ying died just like that. Killed by Duan Lingtian just like that. Too bizarre. I and Xiao Ying both didn't use origin energy. The might of his claw strike was comparable to the strength of 80 ancient mammoths, whereas the might of my finger strike was comparable to the strength of 71 ancient mammoths. It just happens to be within the scope of effect of the quake energy. Duan Lingtian coldly swept Xiao Ying's corpse with his gaze, and thought in his heart as he thought about the scene from before. If he and Xiao Ying used grade 7 spirit swords, the difference in strength between the two of them was too huge, and had exceeded the scope of effect of the quake energy, and even as he utilized the quake energy, it wouldn't be able to have any effect. So, he could only choose to use his wits. Make Xiao Ying give up the amplification of strength from the grade 7 spirit sword, and fight with him bare-handed. Of course, in the eyes of Xiao Ying, even if he didn't use a spirit weapon, he would similarly be able to easily trample on Duan Lingtian, who didn't use a spirit weapon as well. Unexpectedly, Duan Lingtian instead had a monstrous thing like the quake energy to rely on. So long as the difference between the opponent's strength and Duan Lingtian's strength was within the strength of 10 ancient mammoths, he would be able to rely on the quake energy to overcome the strong with a weaker strength. Of course, there was a risk in Duan Lingtian doing this. If Xiao Ying chose to execute the cutthroat sword and swing his sword to block Duan Lingtian's finger strike, then he would be unable to use the quake energy as well. Once it was at that time, he could only use an offense inscription if he wanted to kill Xiao Ying. It could be said that Xiao Ying's choice earlier caused him to be bound to die. Of course, even if Xiao Ying chose differently, he was still bound to die, only in a different way. I still have to thank you for saving an offense inscription for me. Duan Lingtian glanced at Xiao Ying, and a wisp of a sneer appeared on the corners of his mouth. The dense killing intent that condensed deep within his gaze had dispersed slightly. Shilan, I've taken revenge for you. Duan Lingtian secretly sighed, and silently said in his heart. Ha ha, ha 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 ha. Suddenly, a wave of loud laughter broke the silence in the surrounding of the life and death arena. It was Hu Li who'd recovered from his shock, and laughed cheerfully, then said in a sonorous voice. Duan Lingtian, thank you. If Shi-Lan is aware in hell, she would be able to rest in peace. Duan Lingtian nodded, then casually put away Xiao Ying's grade 7 spirit sword and spatial ring, and then came to Hu Li's side before leaving the vast platform the life and death arena is located on with Hu Li and He Chun. The crowd of Fecta Peak disciples gazed from afar at Duan Lingtian's group of 3 until they left, and only then did the crowd go into an uproar. Oh my god, this Duan Lingtian actually killed Xiao Ying. Xiao Ying is a 6th level origin core stage martial artist, and is able to exert the strength of 102 ancient mammoths when relying on his grade 7 spirit sword. So what, even though Duan Lingtian is only at the 5th level of the origin core stage, and is only able to exert the strength of 90 ancient mammoths when relying on his grade 7 spirit sword, but he still killed Xiao Ying. Truly beyond belief. How the heck did this Duan Lingtian kill Xiao Ying? Too terrifying. Today, Fecta Peak was bound to not be at peace. Xiao Ying, the outstanding outer court disciple of Fecta Peak who had a cultivation at the 6th level of the origin core stage, a figure that was known even within the entire 7-star sword sect's outer court. However, he was killed just like that. Moreover, he was killed by a 5th level origin core stage outer court disciple. Duan Lingtian, you're too strong. You pointed a finger and killed Xiao Ying. On the way back, the gloominess that had accumulated between Hu Li's brows for many days had completely dispersed, and he was extremely excited and cheerful. Duan Lingtian lightly smiled. He Chun supported Hu Li, and a tremendous change had occurred in his gaze when he looked at Duan Lingtian. He never imagined that Duan Lingtian's strength was so terrifying. Duan Lingtian being a 5th level origin core stage martial artist already caused him to feel incomparably shocked. When he saw Duan Lingtian kill Xiao Ying, his heart shook, and even now it still hadn't completely calmed. Hu Li, do you know where that Xiao Fei's residence is? A trace of icy cold killing intent flashed within Duan Lingtian's eyes as he slowly asked. In a spacious gorge, Xiao Fei's mood was elated as he whistled and lay on the grass, bathing in the sun to his heart's content. Suddenly, a burst of sounds fell into his ears, causing his gaze to suddenly shine. Brother, you've returned. Xiao Fei's hands propped onto the ground, and he said joyously as he sat up. But, when he saw the young man that appeared before him, his expression went completely pale. Duan Lingtian, aren't you deciding life and death with my brother on the life and death arena? Why are you here? Why do you think I'm here? Duan Lingtian gazed calmly at Xiao Fei as he spoke indifferently, with a tone that didn't contain any feelings. Moreover, the more he was like this, the more scary it was to Xiao Fei, and Xiao Fei's face was ghastly pale as he unceasingly swayed his head. No, impossible, it's impossible. How could you possibly defeat my brother? Impossible, impossible, impossible. A trace of ridicule appeared on the corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth. What's impossible about it? In the primeval forest 2 months ago, didn't you think it would be impossible for me to survive when you made me battle the elephant rhino? Xiao Fei's body trembled, although he still wasn't willing to believe all this was true, but he'd realized that milk was already spilt, and even if he wasn't willing, the facts were like this and he was unable to change it. Bang! Xiao Fei instantly fell to the ground and lay before Duan Lingtian with a ghastly pale face. Duan Lingtian, I'm already a cripple. Let me off, let me off. I beg you, I beg you. How familiar was this scene before Duan Lingtian to him? 2 months ago, Xiao Fei similarly lay before Shi-Lan, and asked Shi-Lan to plead for mercy on his behalf. And Shi-Lan gave in because of this. But the result? Shi-Lan, met with a tragic death. Hu Li, crippled. Xiao Fei's actions and voice when pleading for mercy causing the hatred concealed deep within Duan Lingtian's heart to once again leap up. His eyes transformed into a crimson-red color as he stared at Xiao Fei. Xiao Fei, do you remember what I told you 2 months ago? Xiao Fei's face was deathly pale when he heard this, and his body trembled. Duan Lingtian started laughing when he saw Xiao Fei's reaction. He laughed extremely coldly. Looks like you still clearly remember. I told you that if you were to get any ideas, then I'll make you die a graveless death. Duan Lingtian, spare me. I beg you, I beg you. Xiao Fei fiercely knocked his head onto the ground, knocking to the point his head was bruised and bled, as if wanting to arouse Duan Lingtian's sympathy. 291 Chapter 292, Breakthrough. But, would Duan Lingtian have sympathy to Xiao Fei? Duan Lingtian's gaze was cold and indifferent as he looked at Xiao Fei who kowtowed and pleaded for mercy before him, and his heart was cold as ice. Suddenly, Duan Lingtian raised his hand. Whoosh! A sword strike flashed by, killing Xiao Fei. Hiss. Pill flame lit up and burnt Xiao Fei's body into ash, dying a graveless death. Duan Lingtian didn't feel happy in the slightest after kill Xiao Fei and his brother one after the other, his mood was incomparably heavy. He couldn't get rid of Shilan's figure in his mind. The girl who was full of yearning to the future, that girl that was filled with confidence, was gone just like that. In his eyes, even if Xiao Fei and his brother died 100 times, they wouldn't be able to atone for Shilan's life. Duan Lingtian took a deep breath and eased up his mood, then left the gorge and Fekta Peak. On the way, he didn't encounter anyone. Practically all the Fekta Peak outer court disciples were gathered at the life and death arena halfway down the mountain. After leaving Fekta Peak, Duan Lingtian stepped onto the chain bridge and once again arrived at the main peak, Dubi Peak, then directly headed to Alcade Peak. He traveled familiarly to the place of cultivation of the two little girls, but noticed that it was silent within the vast gorge, and the gorge was overgrown with weeds. The wooden house was tainted with a layer of dust, obviously it had been a long time since someone stayed here. Looks like Kair and Li Fei ought to have moved out. Duan Lingtian left the gorge and asked for the location of Elder Bai's residence from the Alcade Peak disciples, then went over. Duan Lingtian met Elder Bai as he wished. Elder Bai. Elder Bai shook her head and smiled when she saw Duan Lingtian. If it wasn't for Li Fei telling me, I still wouldn't know that the Megrez Peak's little freak that gave rise to much discussion 2 months ago, is actually you. Duan Lingtian laughed embarrassedly, and as he thought about the reason he came to Alcade Peak, he hurriedly asked. Elder Bai, I went to the place little Fei and Kair cultivated before, but noticed they weren't there. Fei is here with me, but she's now in closed-door cultivation. As for that girl Kair, she's now in Alcade Hall on Dubi Peak. Elder Bai lightly smiled and said. Alcade Hall. Duan Lingtian was stunned. Alcade Hall is the place of cultivation for the Peak Master of Alcade Peak, and is situated on a spirit point on Dubi Peak. That place is the best place of cultivation of our 7-star sword sect. The cultivation location of the other Peak Masters are also there. Elder Bai slowly explained. Just like your Megrez Peak's Peak Master, he also has a Megrez Hall there. Duan Lingtian came to a sudden understanding and nodded. As for what best place of cultivation, Duan Lingtian neither agreed nor disagreed. The cultivation environment of that so-called spirit point was impossible to compare to the stalactite cave he lived in now. Is Kair well? Duan Lingtian looked at Elder Bai and asked concernedly. Don't worry, the Peak Master is extremely fond of this closed-door disciple. There's one thing that you were right on. 1 month ago, Kair broke through to the 4th level of the Origin Core stage. As Elder Bai spoke to this point, she glanced deeply at Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian shook his head and smiled. Elder Bai, little Fei ought to have broken through as well, right? Yes. Elder Bai's face revealed a gratified smile. She was more and more satisfied toward her disciple. Fei went into closed-door cultivation this time precisely to prepare for charging towards the 4th level of the Origin Core stage, if there's no urgent matter. Even though Elder Bai didn't finish speaking, but Duan Lingtian still understood what Elder Bai meant. Don't worry Elder Bai, I don't have any urgent matter. Since little Fei at the critical juncture for breaking through, I won't disturb her, and I'll come see her next time. Elder Bai nodded in satisfaction when she saw Duan Lingtian be so sensible. Elder Bai. Suddenly, Duan Lingtian seemed to have thought of something, and asked under Elder Bai's wondering gaze. Do you know of the matter of a female disciple of your Alcade Peak was forced by someone to fall down the cliff and die? Elder Bai nodded. Yes, Alcade Peak isn't taking any action towards this matter. Duan Lingtian frowned. After that Xiao Ying forced Shilan to death, he seems to live unrestrainedly and wasn't affected in the slightest. I'm furious on that matter as well, but she jumped off the cliff herself, after all. Moreover, that Fekta Peak disciple didn't succeed. Coupled with the fact that Fekta Peak disciple is a 6th-level Origin Core stage martial artist, the Fekta Peak is extremely protective of him, Elder Bai sighed. In this world, strength represents the worth of one's life. If the female disciple that jumped off the cliff was a 6th-level Origin Core stage martial artist as well, then our Alcade Peak would surely follow up this matter until the end. Just because she was dispensable to Alcade Peak, so Alcade Peak gave up on her like this. Traces of coldness arose suddenly within Duan Lingtian's heart. His heart was cold like ice. This is the general trend, although I personally pity her, but I have the heart but not the strength. What? You know her? As she finished speaking, Elder Bai asked. Yes. Duan Lingtian nodded. If she's a friend of yours, and you and Kair have that layer of relationship, if you ask Kair to ask the Peak Master to step forwards, then you can punish that Fecta Peak disciple. Elder Bai looked at Duan Lingtian and slowly said. It isn't necessary anymore. Duan Lingtian shook his head, as he knew that even if the Alcade Peak's Peak Master stepped forwards, they still might not sentence Xiaoying to death, and at most would be sentence him to heavy punishment. Now, he's already killed Xiaoying and took revenge for Shilan, it wasn't necessary to rely on anyone. It isn't necessary. Elder Bai didn't understand what Duan Lingtian meant. You'll know very soon. Elder Bai, since little Fei is cultivating, then I'll leave first. Duan Lingtian bid his farewells then turned and left. Only leaving behind Elder Bai who was a bewildered expression as she stood on the spot. This little fellow, what did he mean by what he said earlier? After an hour, a piece of news spread throughout Alcade Peak, causing Elder Bai to be dumbstruck. The Megrez Peak's outer court disciple, Duan Lingtian, used a cultivation at the 5th level of the Origin Core stage to kill the Fecta Peak's 6th level Origin Core stage outer court disciple, Xiaoying, on the Fecta Peak's life and death arena. Now, Elder Bai finally understood why Duan Lingtian would say it wasn't necessary anymore. He'd already taken revenge for that Alcade Peak female disciple by himself. She remembered that the Fecta Peak disciple that caused the death of the female disciple was precisely Xiaoying. Xiaoying was dead just like this. As expected of the Megrez Peak's little freak. A wisp of a bitter smile appeared on the corners of Elder Bai's mouth, then she shook her head and muttered. Fei, you found an extraordinary man. Possessing a cultivation at the 5th level of the Origin Core stage at the mere age of 20. Shocking. At the same time that the news of Duan Lingtian killing Xiaoying spread to Alcade Peak, it also spread to Megrez Peak. FK. Duan Lingtian killed the Fecta Peak's Xiaoying. It can't be, this is too exaggerated. Unbelievable. No wonder he dared invite senior brother Tang Bai to battle on the life and death arena. I wonder if senior brother Tang Bai will still dare ascend to the life and death arena tomorrow. I think it's slightly dangerous, senior brother Tang Bai's strength might not be stronger than that Xiaoying. We'll naturally know tomorrow whether senior brother Tang Bai dares to ascend the life and death arena or not. The entire Megrez Peak was in an uproar because of this piece of news. All the Megrez Peak disciples were brimming with energy. Duan Lingtian's actions could be considered as bringing honor to Megrez Peak, and they as Megrez Peak disciples all felt honored. At least, when standing before Fecta Peak disciples in the future, the Fecta Peak disciples were bound to be once lower than them, once they mentioned this matter. Within the stalactite cave on the mountain peak of Megrez Peak, Duan Lingtian sat cross-legged on the stone platform and calmed his heart to cultivate. The 9 Dragons War Sovereign Technique's Worm Python form. The origin energy within Duan Lingtian's body roiled, and ceaselessly charged at the 4th level Origin Core stage bottleneck, time after time, as if not knowing exhaustion. After an unknown amount of time. Bang! Finally, the roiling origin energy charged through the bottleneck, and completed a new transformation. Meanwhile at this time, Duan Lingtian opened his eyes as well. His eyes were dazzling like an array of stars, and he was entirely brimming with vigor and vitality. I've broken through. A joyful smile appeared on Duan Lingtian's face. Lightly clenching his hand into a fist. Above Duan Lingtian, the energy of heaven and earth roiled, and 81 ancient mammoth silhouettes condensed into form. Similar to before, after he broke through to the 5th level of the Origin Core stage, his strength was an entire 10 ancient mammoths more than ordinary 5th level Origin Core stage martial artists. My current strength is stronger even if compared with a 6th level Origin Core stage martial artist. I possesses an extra strength of 1 ancient mammoth more than a 6th level Origin Core stage martial artist. A wisp of a smile appeared on the corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth. Right, I've invited the Tang Bai to the life and death arena today. In next to no time, Duan Lingtian finally recalled his proper business and hurriedly left the stalactite cave, then jumped onto the mountain peak. He glanced at the sky and noticed that there was still a period of time before noon. Duan Lingtian let out a breath of air. I can still make it. Duan Lingtian left the peak of Megrez Peak then flashed towards the life and death arena halfway down the mountain as if he'd transformed into a gust of wind. Now that I've broken through to the 5th level of the Origin Core stage, the quake energy ought to have advanced, but I wonder how much stronger it's become. On the way, Duan Lingtian's mood surged. Just nice, so long as that Tang Bai ascends the life and death arena, I'll only use the strength of an ordinary 5th level origin core stage martial artist, then use the quake energy to properly play with him. As he thought up to here, Duan Lingtian's eyes suddenly lit up. Before long, Duan Lingtian arrived at the vast platform that the life and death arena was situated on. Now, it was nearly noon. Duan Lingtian noticed that incomparably vast streams of people flowed around the life and death arena. Even to the extent there were many unfamiliar faces. There's so many people in Megrez Peak. Duan Lingtian was startled when he saw so many people, as these people practically filled the entire platform, a dense dark mass of people. Why haven't Duan Lingtian and senior brother Tang Bai come yet? Yeah, it's about to be noon, and they actually haven't come. He'd just come close to the crowd when Duan Lingtian heard a burst of discussion. It's Duan Lingtian. In next to no time, someone noticed Duan Lingtian. Meanwhile, the packed crowd automatically opened up a path for Duan Lingtian, a path that headed to the life and death arena. After Duan Lingtian ascended to the life and death arena, he closed his eyes and started resting. Silently waiting for the arrival of Tang Bai. 292 Chapter 293, Zhao Lin's Greed. The blazing sun hung high in the sky, and noon came as scheduled. The vast platform that the life and death arena was located on was silent. Tang Bai still hasn't come. Duan Lingtian opened his eyes that were bright like an array of stars, and his gaze descended onto the area outside of the vast platform, but he didn't notice any traces of Tang Bai. It's already noon now, and Tang Bai still hasn't come. He probably doesn't dare come. I guessed it, Tang Bai is frightened as expected. Duan Lingtian had only just killed the Fekta Peak's Xiaoying yesterday, and Xiaoying's strength wasn't inferior to Tang Bai. So it's normal for him to not dare to come. Yesterday, he was still putting on airs before Duan Lingtian, and said that at that time, he hoped Duan Lingtian would dare to come. Now, he himself didn't dare come. It's virtually slapping his own face. What a shame. The surroundings of the life and death arena were in a complete uproar. There's even female disciples. Duan Lingtian's gaze flashed past the surroundings of the life and death arena, and only now did he notice that there were quite a few female outer court disciples within the crowd of spectators. They were all Alcade Peak disciples. Looks like disciples from the other peaks have come to Megrez Peak to join in the excitement as well. Duan Lingtian's thought inwardly. But unfortunately, they were bound to be disappointed. After waiting for a while more, Tang Bai still didn't appear. Duan Lingtian's brows knit and didn't wait any longer as he directly leapt off the life and death arena, then left. He wasn't surprised that Tang Bai didn't show up. After all, once one ascended the life and death arena, it would mean the battle wouldn't end until a party died. That Tang Bai didn't have any deep enmity with him. Tang Bai agreeing to ascend the life and death arena yesterday was because Tang Bai was confident of himself, and he felt he was able to seize the fictitious muscle meridian rebirth scroll cultivation method from Duan Lingtian. Now that the news of him killing the Fekta Peak's 6th level origin core stage outer court disciple, Xiaoying, had spread out, Tang Bai showing caution and not daring to show up was within Duan Lingtian's expectations. Duan Lingtian's mood didn't have any large fluctuations, as from the beginning, he didn't take Tang Bai to heart. Moreover, Duan Lingtian was clear that after today's matter, that Tang Bai was bound to be infamous, and be held in contempt by all 7-star sword sect disciples. A person that agreed to a life and death invitation but didn't dare show up was undoubtedly a coward, and on the martial Dao, it would be difficult for such a person to have any great accomplishments. When Duan Lingtian left, he could hear the burst of discussions that sounded out from behind him. They were without a doubt condemning Tang Bai. In a spacious gorge, the burning sunlight scattered downwards, causing everything inside the gorge to seem as if being paved by a layer of gold. Elder Zhao Lin, you didn't tell me that he's even able to kill 6th level origin core stage martial artists. The young man around 25 years of age with handsome and refined features had an extremely unsightly expression, and his figure lightly trembled as he looked at the middle-aged man before him and asked in a low voice. He knew that after today, he would have no reputation to speak of in 7-star sword sect. He was bound to become the target of everyone's disdain. This caused him to feel resentment and feel aggrieved in his heart. And all this was because of the middle-aged man before him. If it wasn't for this middle-aged man, his current situation wouldn't be so embarrassing. Tang Bai, do you think that I, Zhao Lin, would intentionally cause harm to you? Zhao Lin's face sank, cold lights flickered in his eyes, and they were suffused with traces of killing intent. Even he didn't expect the incident from yesterday. That Duan Lingtian actually was able to kill even a 6th-level Origin Core Stage Outer Court disciple, such strength caused one's heart to tremble. He suddenly realized that it wouldn't be so easy for him to obtain that miraculous cultivation technique in Duan Lingtian's possession. "I'm sorry, Elder Zhao Lin, I was too agitated earlier." Tang Bai took a deep breath when he saw Zhao Lin get enraged and even have killing intent to him, and he hurriedly changed his way of speaking. Only now did he realize that the person that stood before him was the Megrez Peak's Outer Court disciple, an existence at the void prying stage. Wanting to kill him was even easier than cutting grass. He didn't dare bear a grudge against Zhao Lin. So, he turned his belly full of hate to somewhere else. Duan Lingtian. After Tang Bai left, Zhao Lin's eyes flickered with an awe-inspiring luster, and his voice was low and suppressed. "Duan Lingtian, I really never imagined that a mere young man that's a little over 20 like you actually possesses such formidable strength. It looks like my guess is correct. The muscle meridian rebirth scroll that Duan Lingtian cultivated had a worth not lower than 10,000 year stalactite milk." The desire in Zhao Lin's heart was even more difficult to suppress. As far as he was concerned, it was all because of the muscle meridian rebirth scroll that Duan Lingtian possessed such a cultivation at such an age. "Since all of the outer court disciples are helpless against you, then I can only personally make a move. I don't believe that I'll be unable to find an opportunity to kill you. So long as I burn the corpse to destroy the evidence, who would know that it was I who killed you?" Zhao Lin muttered, and his eyes emitted utmost greed and dense killing intent. After Duan Lingtian left the Megrez Peak's life and death arena, he didn't return to the stalactite cave, and instead once again went to Fekta Peak to look for Hu Li. "Hu Li, what plans do you have for the future?" Duan Lingtian looked at Hu Li and asked in a low voice. Hu Li wasn't dejected like before now, and was brimming with vigor and vitality, not dejected in the slightest because one of his legs was crippled. "I'm a cripple now, even if the 7-star sword sect would temporarily not expel me, but once I'm 30, I'm bound to be unable to become an inner court disciple, and will be expelled all the same, so, I've decided to return home." "You'll return like this," although he knew that Hu Li's choice was wise, but now when he looked at Hu Li's severed leg, Duan Lingtian couldn't help but sigh. He could imagine how Hu Li's family members would surely have been very happy when Hu Li became a 7-star sword sect disciple, and they thought that Hu Li would soar up into the sky. But now, Hu Li would return with a crippled body, and would surely have to endure extremely huge pressure. "Don't worry," Hu Li smiled brightly when he perceived Duan Lingtian's worries. "Isn't it only a leg? Unless it's a martial artist with the same cultivation as me, or perhaps someone abnormal like you, otherwise, it isn't so easy to defeat me." Duan Lingtian nodded, as he was at ease when he saw Hu Li being so optimistic. "I'll send you home," Duan Lingtian pondered for a moment, then said. "There's no need, I've already written a letter home a while back, and my family members ought to arrive in another few days. Duan Lingtian, cultivate properly, as the 7-star sword sect outer court martial competition is in another 3 months. At that time, take the first place so I can boast at home." As Hu Li finished speaking, he laughed heartily, and wasn't like a person who'd lost a leg at all. Even though he knew that what Hu Li said was partially a joke, but Duan Lingtian still had a serious expression as he nodded. "Don't worry, I'll surely obtain first place in the outer court martial competition. No one can stop my footsteps." As he finished speaking, Duan Lingtian's eyes flickered with a steadfast sheen. This was his promise to Hu Li. "Why are you so serious for?" "Don't worry, so long as the 7-star sword sect doesn't change the rules of the outer court martial competition, the outer court disciples that participated in the outer court martial competition would at most be at the 6th level of the origin core stage. You're even able to kill Xiaoying. Could it be that you're still afraid of other 6th level origin core stage disciples?" Hu Li was extremely confident of Duan Lingtian. "Therefore, the first place in the outer court martial competition is something you'll surely take." Duan Lingtian nodded, then accompanied Hu Li for a while longer. Before he left, he withdrew a pill bottle and passed it to Hu Li. "Hu Li, take this." "What medicinal pill is this?" Hu Li received the pill bottle with a curious expression. "This isn't a medicinal pill but a drop of wine." Duan Lingtian shook his head and slowly said. "A drop of wine." Hu Li was first stunned when he heard Duan Lingtian, then laughed as he scolded. "You're really stingy. How do I drink a drop of wine?" Hu Li opened the pill bottle as he spoke. Along with the strong wine fragrance floating out, Hu Li's body trembled, and he didn't finish speaking when he looked at Duan Lingtian with an astonished expression. Duan Lingtian, what wine is this? Earlier, when he smelt the wine fragrance, Hu Li felt the origin energy within his body roil, and nearly allowed him to charge through the bottleneck of the third level of the origin core stage to break through to the fourth level of the origin core stage. Even though he didn't break through, but Hu Li had the feeling that if he consumed this drop of wine within the pill bottle, he would absolutely be able to break through instantly. Monkey King Wine. Duan Lingtian light smiled as he said. Monkey King Wine. Hu Li was dazed. Duan Lingtian was able to discern that Hu Li hadn't heard of the Monkey King wine, and instantly explained. Then have you heard of monkey wine? Of course I have, that's a great thing. Could it be that the monkey wine and Monkey King wine are related? Hu Li's eyes shone as was slightly excited. The monkey wine was an existence of legend, and he'd only seen record of it in some ancient books. Didn't you say I'm stingy earlier? This jug of wine is for you to drink until you're satisfied. Duan Lingtian withdrew a jug of wine and passed it to Hu Li. This wine fragrance, Hu Li's gaze shone, although the wine fragrance from this jug of wine was far inferior to the Monkey King wine, but it was able to cause the origin energy within his body to be restless. This is monkey wine. Duan Lingtian smiled. Drink and try it. This is monkey wine. Hu Li's eyes sprang wide open, but he didn't directly drink the monkey wine, and instead looked at the pill bottle in his hand. Even though he'd never heard of Monkey King wine, but he was extremely sure that this drop of Monkey King wine was absolutely more precious than this jug of monkey wine. Duan Lingtian guessed his thoughts the moment he saw Hu Li's reaction, and lightly smiled. Hu Li, you can directly drink the monkey wine and cultivate, and if everything goes as planned, it ought to be able to help you break through to the fourth level of the origin core stage. As for the Monkey King wine, properly store it. Duan Lingtian, don't beat around the bush, what the heck is the use of this Monkey King wine? Hu Li rolled his eyes as Duan Lingtian and asked impatiently. The Monkey King wine has a similar medicinal effect as the Void Advancement Pill, but better than the Void Advancement Pill. The Monkey King wine doesn't have the side effect of the Void Advancement Pill. Duan Lingtian didn't waste time when he saw Hu Li becoming impatient, and directly spoke. Once one consumed the Void Advancement Pill, one would have no fate with the Void Initiation stage in this lifetime, and at most could cultivate to the 9th level of the Void Prying stage. Whereas consuming the Monkey King wine wouldn't have this side effect. What? When he heard what Duan Lingtian said, Hu Li's pupils constricted as his figure trembled, and he had a face of inexplicable astonishment. 293 Chapter 294, Advancement of Quake Energy. Although Hu Li hadn't seen a Void Advancement Pill before, but he'd heard of it. The Void Advancement Pill, a precious grade medicinal pill that's able to allow a half-step Void stage martial artist to directly step into the Void Prying stage. And possessed extraordinary value. Now, the drop of Monkey King wine in his hand actually had the medicinal effect of a Void Advancement Pill, and it's the effect of a Void Advancement Pill without side effects. Wouldn't that mean that this drop of Monkey King wine is even more valuable than a Void Advancement Pill? Hu Li's breathing became hurried, and in the end he gritted his teeth before passing the pill bottle that contained the drop of Monkey King wine back to Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian, this Monkey King wine is too valuable, I can't keep it. I'm perfectly satisfied and content that I'm being able to drink this monkey wine in this lifetime. As he finished speaking, Hu Li laughed slyly, and had a simple and honest expression as he looked at his other hand that held the jug of wine. You really don't want it? Duan Lingtian received the pill bottle, and a wisp of a smile appeared on the corners of his mouth. No, Hu Li shook his head, and with a raise of his hand, he put the spout of the jug of wine against his mouth, then drank the monkey wine. Hu Li only drank a mouthful when his eyes couldn't help but spring open wide, then he put down the wine jug and closed his eyes. Duan Lingtian was able to discern that Hu Li was cultivating and dissolving the medicinal strength of the monkey wine. When Hu Li opened his eyes once again, a strand of bright light flashed within. You broke through just like that. Duan Lingtian was stunned as he looked at Hu Li, as relying on his sharp spiritual force, he perceived that minute changes that had occurred on Hu Li's body. I was originally only one last step away from breaking through to the 4th level of the origin core stage, now that I've drank the monkey wine, I directly broke through in one go. Hu Li laughed, and looked fixedly at the jug of monkey wine in his hand as if he'd obtained a treasure, as if deeply afraid the monkey wine would vanish from his hands. You really don't want this drop of Monkey King wine? With it, and relying on your natural talent, so long as you step into the half-step void stage in the future, you'll be able to break through to the void prying stage in one go. Duan Lingtian shook the pill bottle in his hand that contained the Monkey King wine, and the smile on the corners of his mouth grew even wider. Hu Li glances at the pill bottle with reluctance when he heard Duan Lingtian, but in the end he shook his head. Keep it for yourself, I presume you don't have much of this Monkey King wine. In the future, you'll be able to use it eventually. Duan Lingtian never expected that when faced with such great temptation, Hu Li would actually think for his sake, and his heart was slightly warm. Hu Li was worthy of being taken as a life-and-death friend by him. Alright, I won't tease you anymore, keep it. Even though the Monkey King wine in my possession isn't many, but it's still enough. Duan Lingtian didn't care about Hu Li's refusal as he shoved the pill bottle in Hu Li's hand, then turned around and left in an unrestrained manner. I'm leaving, I have some things to do. I won't send you off when you're leaving, right? Tell He-chun your house address later, and ask him to tell it to me. I'll go see you when I'm free in the future. At the same time that Duan Lingtian left, he raised his hand and waved it, bidding his farewell to Hu Li. Even though he had a slight sense of loss in his heart, but he understood that all good things in this world must come to an end. Duan Lingtian, thank you. Hu Li took a deep breath as he gazed at Duan Lingtian's restrained figure vanishing into the distance and was slightly excited. He glanced at the Monkey King wine and monkey wine his hand, and his mood was slightly heavy. Duan Lingtian's gift was too valuable. When he saw Duan Lingtian's figure completely disappeared before him, Hu Li's eyes squinted and lit up with traces of bright light, then muttered. Duan Lingtian, don't worry. Even if one of my legs is crippled, I won't die down just like this, I'll surely make you look at me in a different light the next time we meet. At this moment, Hu Li's will in the martial Tao was firm like a sharp sword, as if it could destroy everything. And it was precisely because of this determination that caused Duan Lingtian to have a face full of shock and disbelief when he met Hu Li again many years from then. Duan Lingtian let out a long breath of air after he left the gorge Hu Li was in. Even after experiencing 2 lifetimes, when faced with farewells, Duan Lingtian's heart still had an inexplicable feeling of sadness. Time to once again go look for those 2 little fellows that make me worry. After Duan Lingtian left Fekta Peak, he didn't return to Megrez Peak, and directly walked down Dubi Peak, then walked out of the sect to head towards the primeval forest that fierce beasts and demon beasts roamed unrestrainedly in. After Duan Lingtian entered the primeval forest, he sped up. All the fierce beasts that he encountered on the way were practically killed with a single fist from him. Even to the extent he didn't use martial skills or quake energy. Finally, along with him continuously entering deeper into the primeval forest, the fierce beasts he encountered became stronger, and there were even many 6th-level origin core stage fierce beasts. Practically all these fierce beasts had their throats slit with a single sword strike. With the strength that Duan Lingtian controlled now, when he executed the sword-drawing arts, the speed of his sword was something that even 6th-level origin core stage fierce beasts wouldn't be able to react to. I should test some quake energy. Duan Lingtian's gaze looked around, then his figure flashed out. Spirit Serpent movement technique. Continue going deeper in. Roar. A loud roar that deafened the ears entered into Duan Lingtian's ears, causing Duan Lingtian's eardrums to hurt, as if a thunderclap piercing his ears. Bang. An enormous fierce beast came over from afar, as if transforming into a gust of wind that descended before Duan Lingtian in the blink of an eye. When the fierce beast dashed, the ground shook as if the earth quaked and the hills swayed. In the air, 100 ancient mammoth silhouettes appeared. 7-level origin core stage fierce beast. Duan Lingtian was shocked in his heart, and he seriously sized up the fierce beast before him. This was an enormous tiger that was covered in jet black and shiny fur, and spots of sunlight passed through the shroud of the forest to descend onto its body, causing its fur to flicker with a dazzling sheen. Relying on the erudite memories of rebirth martial emperor, Duan Lingtian recognized this tiger-type fierce beast with a single glance. Black Tiger. 7th-level origin core stage fierce beast. This black tiger was most adept at speed and strength, and its defense was slightly weak. Of course, saying its defense was weak was only comparatively weaker to other 7th-level origin core stage fierce beasts. Roar. The dark gray-colored eyes of the black tiger stared at Duan Lingtian, and it opened its bloody mouth to emit a threatening low roar, as if warning Duan Lingtian to leave its domain. Interesting. A smile appeared on the corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth, and his eyes sized up the black tiger before him with interest. The black tiger saw Duan Lingtian smiling and thought Duan Lingtian was provoking it, then roared in rage before pouncing towards Duan Lingtian. It opened its bloody mouth, and fiercely bit at him. The fangs of the black tiger flickered with a sharp and icy cold sheen. If Duan Lingtian were to be bitten, it would be impossible for him to survive. So fast, the black tiger's speed relied on the strength of 100 ancient mammoths to power, and was far from something Duan Lingtian's current speed could compare to. At the instant that the black tiger pounced over, Duan Lingtian didn't dodge and instead leapt on the spot, perfectly dodging the black tiger's bloody mouth and those sharp fangs. Bang! The black tiger's pounce hit nothing, and a sense of rage arose within its dark gray eyes. Roar! The black tiger roared lowly, then it turned its head to once again bite at Duan Lingtian. And just at this moment, Duan Lingtian made his move. The strength of 81 ancient mammoths fully exploded out. Without holding back. Dragon's finishing touch. Duan Lingtian pointed out his finger with the profundity of a dragon's finishing touch, and brought about a burst of piercing sounds as it pointed onto the forehead of the black tiger. Suddenly, Duan Lingtian's gaze went cold. Quake energy. Instantly, the origin energy on the tip of Duan Lingtian's finger violently jumped about, and the frequency grew higher and higher. Pooh! Under the assistance of the quake energy, Duan Lingtian's finger seemed to transform into a sharp sword that easily penetrated the black tiger between the brows, and fresh blood scattered into the air as his finger continued to point onto the black tiger's skull. Roar! The black tiger emitted a miserable low roar, then its enormous figure abruptly trembled, wanting to resist. But unfortunately, his resistance was too late. Along with Duan Lingtian's finger descending down and pointing onto the black tiger's skull, the terrifying quake energy instantly shattered the black tiger's skull, and continued to spread onto the bones in the black tiger's entire body. Crackle crackle, ear-piercing sounds of bones fracturing slowly suppressed the low roars of the black tiger that slowly became dispirited. Bang! It wasn't long before the enormous body of the black tiger crashed onto the ground, and was completely devoid of any signs of life. Duan Lingtian's gaze abruptly shone as he looked at the black tiger's corpse that collapsed, and was slightly excited. I never imagined that the quake energy advanced so much. The finger strike Duan Lingtian pointed out earlier relied upon all the strength in him, the strength of 81 ancient mammoths. Whereas the black tiger instead possessed a strength of 100 ancient mammoths. Compared to it, Duan Lingtian's strength was an entire 19 ancient mammoths lesser. If it was the quake energy from before, it would be impossible to affect the black tiger. Now, it instead killed the black tiger like cutting through dry leaves. In other words, the scope of effect of the quake energy had increased significantly. In the past, the effect of the quake energy was only able to materialize on opponents who weren't more than 10 ancient mammoths stronger than Duan Lingtian. In other words, the past quake energy's scope of effect was within the strength of 10 ancient mammoths. Now, based on the present circumstances, even if Duan Lingtian and the black tiger had a difference of strength of 19 ancient mammoths between them, but the effects of the quake energy still manifested. In other words, the scope of effect of the quake energy had already extended to the strength of 19 ancient mammoths. Specific details would still require Duan Lingtian to test it by himself. Duan Lingtian put away the black tiger's beast core, then continued to head deeper into the primeval forest. Subsequently, he successively encountered 3 7th-level origin core stage fierce beasts, and completely tested and found out the scope of effect of the quake energy he now controlled. The scope of effect of the quake energy was within the strength of 20 ancient mammoths currently. In other words, when Duan Lingtian killed the black tiger with quake energy before, it just happened to be within the limit of the scope of effect of the quake energy. With my current strength, and relying on quake energy, I'm practically invincible at the 7th level of the origin core stage and below. If a 7th level origin core stage martial artist didn't use a spirit weapon, or perhaps their spirit weapon is inferior to mine, then they're all not a match for me. Duan Lingtian slightly pondered and speculated in his heart. Of course, he knew that the latter circumstances might be possible in any other place, but if within the 7-star sword sect, it was practically impossible. Practically all 7-star sword sect disciples at the 7th level of the origin core stage or above possessed a grade 7 spirit sword. In terms of spirit weapons, he didn't have any advantages. Now, when he faced 7th level origin core stage disciples of the 7-star sword sect, it was similar to when he faced the Fekta Peaks Xiaoying when his cultivation was at the 4th level of the origin core stage. Unless he can make his opponent abandon the sword. Otherwise, if he didn't use an inscription, it would be extremely difficult to defeat his opponent. 294 Chapter 295, The Great Treasure in the Foreign Lands. No matter what, Duan Lingtian was extremely satisfied towards his current strength. Even in the foreign lands, having such accomplishments at his age could be considered to be not bad. Of course, it could only be considered to be not bad. According to the memories of Rebirth Martial Emperor, the number of experts in the foreign lands were like the clouds in the sky, and some powers had even been around for 10,000 years. The future generations that those powers had fostered were all extremely formidable. Some geniuses amongst geniuses had even already broken through to the nascent soul stage at Duan Lingtian's current age. Of course, the reason that these people's cultivations advanced so quickly was because they possessed the best cultivation resource. Even though they didn't have the assistance of the medicinal pills with over 90% purity that Duan Lingtian refined, they instead had the various spirit fruits that the powers they belonged to had gathered. Those spirit fruits were all treasures of heaven and earth that could only be chanced upon by luck and not sought for, and were extremely difficult to come by. It could be said that the strength of those geniuses all relied on being piled up by treasures of heaven and earth that was difficult to imagine for ordinary people. Even in the entire cloud continent, my current natural talent can be considered top-notch, so long as my strength is sufficient in the future, and can leave the darkened dynasty to head to the foreign lands, then I can obtain the great treasures the Rebirth Martial Emperor left behind for his third lifetime. Duan Lingtian couldn't help but be slightly excited in his heart when he thought up to this point. The 3 lives rebirth technique that the Rebirth Martial Emperor cultivated required experiencing 3 lifetimes in order to attain perfection. So, during the first lifetime of the Rebirth Martial Emperor, he'd left behind numerous treasures for his second lifetime, and during his second lifetime, the Rebirth Martial Emperor relied on the treasures he left behind in his first lifetime to once again cultivate to the peak of the Martial Emperor stage in the shortest amount of time. During his second lifetime, when the Rebirth Martial Emperor planned to carry out the cultivation of the third lifetime for his 3 lives rebirth technique, he'd left behind a large amount of treasures. Those treasures encompassed a myriad of things. There were countless valuable materials and spirit fruit. He even left behind many royal-grade medicinal pills, royal-grade spirit weapons, and even formidable inscriptions that could be called heaven-defying, that ordinary people found difficult to imagine. Besides these, there were many other things. Countless things. These treasures were all kept within a royal-grade spirit weapon spatial ring by the Rebirth Martial Emperor. According to the memories of the Rebirth Martial Emperor, the space within that spatial ring was even larger than the courtyard house he had in the Crimson Sky Kingdom's imperial city inner city. Unknowingly, Duan Lingtian's breathing became hurried. Every time he went through this portion of the Rebirth Martial Emperor's memories, he couldn't help but feel a burst of excitement. Because these things would all be his in the future. Perhaps the Rebirth Martial Emperor never imagined that all he prepared for his third lifetime would benefit me. Slowly, Duan Lingtian suppressed the restless mood in his heart. To him, the things that the Rebirth Martial Emperor left behind were truly too shocking. Those things were practically all top-notch things in the Cloud Continent. Royal-grade medicinal pills and royal-grade spirit weapons, these things were something that only the Rebirth Martial Emperor could refine in the 2 lifetimes he experienced. Even now, there might not be a royal-grade alchemist and royal-grade weapons craftsman in Cloud Continent. Duan Lingtian thought inwardly. During the 2 age that Rebirth Martial Emperor experiences, not to mention a royal-grade alchemist and royal-grade weapons craftsman, there wasn't even a quasi-royal-grade alchemist or quasi-royal-grade weapons craftsman. Below the Rebirth Martial Emperor, the strongest alchemist and weapons craftsman was only a grade 1 alchemist and grade 1 weapons craftsman. I, Duan Lingtian, will surely once again stand at the Rebirth Martial Emperor's peak all those years ago. No. I'll surpass the former Rebirth Martial Emperor. Duan Lingtian's gaze slowly became firm, and deep within his heart, he'd pledged a resolution that no one and nothing could sway. What am I thinking off to? Returning to his sense, Duan Lingtian withdrew his thoughts that had drifted off. I wonder where those 2 little fellow are now. Even if I rely upon a grade 7 spirit sword and quake energy, I would at most be able to kill a 9th level origin core stage fierce beast. There'll surely be nascent soul stage fierce beasts if I go slightly deeper in. With my current strength, nascent soul stage fierce beasts are difficult to deal with. Duan Lingtian had a plan in his heart. He would go only slightly deeper, then start to search in the surroundings to see if he can notice the tracks left behind by the 2 little pythons. As for deeper in the primeval forest, Duan Lingtian abandoned any thoughts of going deeper for now. Although he could rely on the bone corrosion inscription to kill nascent soul stage fierce beasts, but one bone corrosion inscription cost a few million silver, thus he couldn't use the bone corrosion inscription to kill all the way in. Even though the wealth in his possession wasn't little, but it couldn't withstand such expenditures. Moreover, there was plenty of money in his spatial ring, but materials to inscribe the bone corrosion inscription weren't plenty. At most it would be enough to inscribe 50 or 60 bone corrosion inscriptions. Two little fellows that make me worry. Once I find the two of you, I'll surely properly teach you two a lesson. With feelings of helplessness, Duan Lingtian continued to go deeper into the primeval forest, then started to search around the primeval forest. On the way, he'd encountered many 9th level origin core stage fierce beasts. These 9th level origin core stage fierce beasts had strength equivalent to the strength of 120 ancient mammoths. However, Duan Lingtian used his strength of 81 ancient mammoths and relied on the amplification of the grade 7 spirit sword to execute attacks which attained the strength of over 100 ancient mammoths. By relying on the quake energy, it was difficult for even a 9th level origin core stage fierce beast to withstand a sword strike from him. Of course, once he encountered some 9th level origin core stage fierce beasts that were adept in speed and concealment, Duan Lingtian would be in an extremely sorry state. Needless to say, the primeval forest was extremely large. Duan Lingtian took a circle around the outer area of the primeval forest, and spent 10 days and 10 nights. For 10 days and 10 nights, he slept in the open in the primeval forest. After 10 days, Duan Lingtian practically turned the entire outer area of the primeval forest upside down, and in the end he still didn't notice even a shred of tracks that the two little pythons left behind. Forget it, I'll wait for those two little fellows to return by themselves. They ought to have entered the inner area of the primeval forest. Duan Lingtian shook his head slightly helplessly, then turned around and walked towards the outside of the primeval forest, and intended to return to 7-Star Sword Sect. On the way to leaving the primeval forest, he occasionally saw some people hunting fierce beasts, and when he saw the attire of these people, they were all 7-Star Sword Sect outer court disciples. In next to no time, Duan Lingtian returned to the 7-Star Sword Sect and arrived at the entrance to the mountain. After entering, Duan Lingtian ascended Dubi Peak. Whoosh! A burst of piercing wind sounded out from ahead, causing Duan Lingtian, who was walking on the mountain path, to frown, and at the moment he raised his head, he saw a figure that was swift like a bolt of lightning flashing down the mountain. Even though this person's speed was extremely swift, but Duan Lingtian still saw his appearance. This was a young man, with slightly hideous and distorted features, and his pair of triangular eyes caused Duan Lingtian to have a familiar feeling. Duan Lingtian saw the symbol of the young man's attire. Similar to Duan Lingtian, he was an outer court disciple as well. But, when this outer court disciple dashed out, 100 ancient mammoths condensed into form above him. 7th level origin core stage martial artist. Duan Lingtian moved aside when he discerned that this outer court disciple seemed to be in a hurry. But even then, when the outer court disciple flashed past Duan Lingtian, he brought about a strong wind that still caused Duan Lingtian's outer court disciple's attire to flutter and whistle in the wind. Duan Lingtian frowned and continued up the mountain, then passed through the chain bridge and returned to Megrez Peak. When Duan Lingtian had just stepped onto the platform on Megrez Peak, he noticed a burning gaze descending onto him. Duan Lingtian looked over and saw a Megrez Peak disciple with an ordinary expression, and when this Megrez Peak disciple saw Duan Lingtian's gaze sweep over, he hurriedly lowered his head. Relying on his sharp spiritual force, and the experiences of rebirth martial emperor, Duan Lingtian was able to deduce that the cultivation of this Megrez Peak disciple was at most at the 3rd level of the origin core stage. When he intended to return to the peak of Megrez Peak, Duan Lingtian noticed that Megrez Peak disciple actually quietly following him from behind. HMPH. Duan Lingtian's sharp spiritual force noticed this Megrez Peak disciple following him at the first possible moment, and the corner of his mouth curled into a sneer. So long as it wasn't an existence at the void prying stage or above that was following him, he could rely on his sharp spiritual force and his counter-tracking methods to easily notice the Megrez Peak disciple. Duan Lingtian intentionally walked into a remote path, then turned into the back of some bushes. As expected, that Megrez Peak disciple followed over. Where's he? Before long, the Megrez Peak disciple noticed that after his target turned here, his target actually vanished into thin air, and instantly, his face revealed a trace of confusion. Are you looking for me? Meanwhile, Duan Lingtian, who was concealed nearby, walked out from the bushes, and looked at the Megre's peak disciple that had a panicked expression and said with a terrifyingly calm tone. No, no, I'm not. At the same time that this Megre's peak disciple was panicked, he hurriedly denied it. Are you kidding? Even though the young man before him was younger than him, the young man's strength wasn't something he could compare to. Even an existence at the 6th level of the Origin Core stage was killed at the hands of this young man, not to mention him who was a mere 3rd level Origin Core stage. So, before this young man, he even didn't dare have the thought of fleeing. Because he knew that even if he wanted to flee, he wouldn't be able to. No, Duan Lingtian's face sank when he heard this Megre's peak disciple, and a dense killing intent spread out from his body, as if transforming into a heaven-encompassing net that enveloped the Megre's peak disciple before him. Instantly, the face of the Megre's peak disciple went ghastly pale, and he felt himself seeming to be in an Asura battlefield. The icy coldness that directly entered his heart caused his body to be unable to refrain from trembling, and he hurriedly circulated his origin energy to withstand it, only then did he slightly ease up. Who asked you to follow me? Duan Lingtian looked at the Megre's peak disciple and asked once more, with a tone that was slightly cold. I didn't follow you. The Megre's peak disciple gritted his teeth to forcefully endure the killing intent, and said with a trembling voice. Thick-headed. Duan Lingtian's gaze went cold when he saw this Megre's peak disciple didn't want to speak, and his leg flashed out like a bolt of lightning, transforming into a string of afterimages. Bang! His leg hit directly on the Megre's peak disciple's chest, kicking him flying, then fiercely falling into the nearby bushes. 295 Chapter 296, Shi Hao. After he kicked the Megre's peak disciple flying, Duan Lingtian's body flashed out to follow up. When this Megre's peak disciple wanted to crawl up, Duan Lingtian raised his leg then fiercely stomped upon his chest, stomping him back to the ground. Bang! The body of the Megre's peak disciple collapsed on the ground once again, and was shocked by the force to the point his face went deathly pale, then looked at Duan Lingtian with a pair of eyes that were filled with fear and dread. Who sent you? Duan Lingtian's tone was still calm, but his gaze that became even icy colder, undoubtedly told this Megre's peak disciple that he already didn't have too much patience left. There's really no one who sent me, really. The Megre's peak disciple's gaze focused and he hesitated for a moment before seeming to have some apprehensions as he said with a panicked expression. Very good. Duan Lingtian's gaze went slightly cold when he saw the Megre's peak disciple still being thick-headed even at such a time, and with a raise of his hand, a 3-foot-long blade that flickered with an icy cold light appeared out of thin air in his hand. No, don't. The Megre's peak disciple's pupils constricted when he saw Duan Lingtian withdraw a sword, and his face went deathly pale. I'll give you the time of 10 breaths to consider. After 10 breaths, if you don't speak, then I'll kill you. You ought to know that even though the 7-star sword sect prohibits fellow disciples from killing each other, but so long as no one sees me kill you, nothing will happen to me. Duan Lingtian weighed the 3-foot-long blade in his hand, then lightly extended his hand to stroke the blade of the sword, as if he was gently caressing his lover. When Duan Lingtian's words that didn't contain the slightest emotion entered into the ears of the Megre's peak disciple, it caused his face to go even paler, and traces of fear was mixed within his eyes. He naturally knew what Duan Lingtian said was true. If he really died here, with the remoteness of this place, even if someone found his corpse, it would probably a matter of another few days from now. At that time, even if the resources of the 7-star sword sect were any greater, and the strength of the 7-star sword sect high-ups any stronger, it would still be impossible to investigate who killed him. So, even if he really was killed by Duan Lingtian here today, he would have died for nothing. You still have 5 breaths worth of time. Duan Lingtian's gaze descended onto the eyes of the Megre's peak disciple that were struck with panic, and a bloodthirsty coldness appeared on the corners of his mouth. The sword in his hand matched him to draw a pattern with his sword, a pattern that was dazzling and magnificent. 3 more breaths. After another time of 2 breaths, Duan Lingtian's voice went slightly colder. The sword in his hand slightly rose up, as if he would attack at any moment. I'll speak. I'll speak. Finally, the Megre's peak disciple was unable to endure the mental pressure imposed on him by Duan Lingtian, and had a face full of terror as he said with an incomparably panicked tone, deeply afraid that Duan Lingtian's sword would ruthlessly descend upon him if he was slow. Speak. Duan Lingtian looked at the Megre's peak disciple and said in a cold voice. If I notice you lying, then don't blame me for being merciless. I don't dare, I absolutely don't dare lie. The Megres Peak disciple was shocked to the point he was slightly unable to speak properly, and after he caught his breath, he continued. It's Elder Jiaolin who asked me to monitor your tracks, and so long as I saw you appear in Megres Peak, I should report to him at the first possible moment. Besides that, he also said that if I'm able to find out about your place of cultivation, then he'll bestow an extra 10,000 gold to me. Jiaolin. Duan Lingtian's face sank. He never expected that it was Jiaolin who was behind this again. That Jiaolin had repeatedly sent people to deal with him for the sake of a fictitious cultivation method, but in the end went for wool but came home shorn. Now, Jiaolin actually hadn't given up yet. Duan Lingtian, I've spoken of everything you wanted to know, let me go. The Megres Peak disciple looked at Duan Lingtian's hesitant expression, and was slightly struck with panic, deeply afraid that Duan Lingtian would go back on his word. Duan Lingtian raised his leg and swept the Megres Peak disciple with his cold and indifferent gaze. You better not tell that Jiaolin of what happened today. Or else. I won't, I surely won't. The Megres Peak disciple swore solemnly. Scram. Duan Lingtian's tone was calm as he said cold and indifferently. Yes, yes. The Megres Peak disciple hurriedly nodded, then crawled up before fleeing in a sorry state, and before long he disappeared before Duan Lingtian's eyes. After seeing the Megres Peak disciple leaving, Duan Lingtian moved back and forth between the small mountain paths, then finally ascended the peak of the mountain before returning to the stalactite cave. Duan Lingtian's gaze was cold and indifferent as he sat cross-legged on the stone platform. That Jiaolin actually still hasn't given up on the thoughts of seizing my cultivation method, now that I've revealed a strength capable of annihilating a 6th-level origin core stage martial artist. Even 6th-level origin core stage outer court disciples ought to not dare help him. Looks like he intends to investigate my tracks then make a move himself. Duan Lingtian guessed Jiaolin's intentions. At the same time he had a slight lingering fear in his heart. Luckily there was that Megres Peak disciple today, otherwise, he wouldn't know that Jiaolin was still targeting him. He could imagine how under the circumstances that he wasn't on guard in the slightest, if Jiaolin secretly followed him, once he entered a place that was devoid of people, he would surely be unable to flee death. He was convinced that facing the temptation of the fictitious muscle meridian rebirth scroll, Jiaolin would be ruthless towards him without a doubt. Unfortunately, Shang Quan isn't by my side. The strongest method in my possession, the Blaze Inscription, is unable to deal with him. Duan Lingtian's face slightly sank as he took a deep breath. Looks like I have to be extremely careful when I move about within the 7-star sword sect in the future, otherwise, once I allow that Jiaolin to find an opportunity, I would die without a doubt. Under his serious mood, Duan Lingtian withdrew and consumed an origin strengthening pill, then closed his eyes to start cultivating. 9 Dragons War Sovereign Technique, Worm Python Form. Duan Lingtian knew very well that the true way of kings was to have his own strength being sufficiently strong. If he was a void-prying stage martial artist as well now, why would he have to be afraid of Jiaolin? Cultivate, cultivate. The hot blood in Duan Lingtian's body completely boiled, and the origin energy in his body violently roiled as well. His cultivation was advancing with an extremely swift pace. With this speed of cultivation, he was convinced that it wouldn't be long before he could smoothly break through to the 6th level of the origin core stage. Megres Peak, in a gorge that was adequately brightened by ray of sunlight. What? He's appeared? Jiaolin asked indifferently as he looked at the Megres Peak disciple that entered with haste. Yes, Elder Jiaolin, he returned from Dubi Peak. The Megres Peak disciple hurriedly nodded. What? You didn't follow him? If you can investigate his place of cultivation, I will bestow 10,000 gold to you. Jiaolin glanced deeply at the Megres Peak disciple, seeming to be tempting him. 10,000 gold. The Megres Peak disciple couldn't refrain from cursing in his heart when he heard Jiaolin. Just for the sake of you 10,000 gold, I nearly lost my life. Luckily that Duan Lingtian didn't take further action, otherwise, I would have been killed because of you. However, this Megres Peak disciple was still calm on the surface, and laughed bitterly. Elder Jiaolin, I want your 10,000 gold as well, but, I'm completely unable to follow him. Jiaolin nodded and didn't think it to be strange. As far as he was concerned, even he was once thrown off while following Duan Lingtian, let alone a 3rd-level origin core stage outer court disciple. Are you sure he returned to Megres Peak? Jiaolin confirmed a step further. I'm sure. The Megres Peak disciple hurriedly nodded, and said in affirmation. You continue helping me keep an eye out for him, come report to me right away if he leaves Megres Peak. This is what you deserve. Zhao Lin nodded, then raised his hand to pass 1,000 gold to the Megrez Peak disciple. Thank you, Elder Zhao Lin. The Megrez Peak disciple hurriedly expressed his gratitude, and didn't mention a word of Duan Lingtian catching him. Because he knew that once he mentioned it, not only would he offend Duan Lingtian, but he wouldn't even be able to obtain this 1,000 gold. Do things for me in the future and I won't treat you unfairly. Zhao Lin nodded, then waved his hand. Leave. Yes. The Megrez Peak disciple hurriedly left, and secretly wiped off some cold sweat and heaved a sigh of relief. There were two great clans within Black Bamboo City, and they balanced each other out to control a third of all businesses within Black Bamboo City. As for the other 2/3 of businesses, they were instead controlled by the 7-Star Sword sect. The Shi clan was one of the two great clans of Black Bamboo City. Outside the Shi clan estate, a figure that was like wind flashed swiftly, desiring to enter the Shi clan gate. The faces of the two guards at the Shi clan gate went grim, and hurriedly obstructed the figure. Bang, bang, two loud sounds echoed out, and the two guards were kicked flying to knock on the gate. Right when they stood up in panic and intended to call for help, they inadvertently clearly saw the appearance of the young man with a frosty expression that stood at gate, and the panic and rage on their faces vanished, replacing it was respect. Eldest young master. The two guards bowed and addressed him respectfully. You two are really competent, even daring to obstruct this young master. The young man's features were distorted and hideous, and his triangular eyes revealed traces of a gloomy aura. If Duan Lingtian was here, he would surely recognize him with a glance. This young man was precisely the young man who dashed like the wind, and Duan Lingtian encountered on the road to Dubi Peak after returning to the 7-Star Sword sect from the primeval forest. Elder young master, spare us, we didn't know it was you. The two guards hurriedly kneeled on the floor and begged for mercy in panic, their faces were filled with anxiety, as if this young man was a dreadful monster. Enough, I don't have the time to fuss about it with the two of you today, let me ask you too, has the young miss returned? After I returned to the 7-Star Sword sect, I didn't see her, and the gorge she usually lives in has been vacant for a long time, even the azure stone tablet outside the gorge was shattered. As he finished speaking, the young man frowned, and was vaguely worried. Unexpectedly, the two guards had bitter smiles on their faces when they heard the young man. Has something happened to the young miss? Speak. The young man's face went grim, and a bad premonition arose in his heart. Elder young master, young miss has, her dantian was crippled by someone. One of the guards smiled bitterly as he spoke. What? The young man's body trembled and his triangular eyes emitted a gloomy cold light. Who did it? Who the heck was it? Actually daring to cripple my, Shi Hao's, sister. No matter who it is, I will make him die, I will make him die a graveless death. 296 Chapter 297, Returning to Alcade Peak. Duan Lingtian didn't know how long he'd cultivated, and only until the medicinal effect of the origin strengthening pill was completely absorbed did he slowly open his eyes and wake up. Duan Lingtian spat out a mouthful of foul air, and glanced at the cold stalactite cave, then shook his head before walking out with large strides. I wonder how those two little fellows are now. Duan Lingtian stood atop the tilted tree and enjoyed the baptism of morning dew, and his gaze passed through the mist and cloud in the sky to gaze at the direction of the primeval forest. His heart was always slightly not at ease due to the two little pythons. I'll go see Little Fei and Kair, Little Fei ought to have broken through. After returning to his sense, the corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth curled into a smile, and after he used his sharp spiritual force to sense the mountain peak for a while, he leapt up, then walked down the Megrez Peak. In next to no time, he once again arrived at the vast platform that the trade hall was located on. He'd only just arrived nearby the trade hall when he noticed a few gazes descending onto him, seeming to intentionally focus on him. HMPH. A cold smile appeared on the corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth. If he didn't guess wrongly, these people ought to be people that outer court elder, Zhao Lin, ordered to monitor him. However, he didn't mind, as all these people posed no threat to him. Suddenly, seeming to have noticed something, Duan Lingtian gazed ascended into the distance. Now, a young man stood there, and was looking at Duan Lingtian with a complicated gaze. Lu Yu. Duan Lingtian recognized this young man with a glance. It was precisely the outer court disciple that obstructed him nearby the trade hall and desired to help Zhao Lin forcefully seize that fictitious muscle meridian rebirth scroll in his possession. This Lu Yu was a 5th level origin core stage outer court disciple. He still remembered that at that time, he straightforwardly asked to battle Lu Yu on the life and death arena when he was faced with Lu Yu who obstructed his way, and in the end, Lu Yu chose to shrink back. Duan Lingtian glanced deeply at Lu Yu, then turned around to walk towards the chain bridge and left with large strides. Since the beginning till the end, he didn't have the intention to pay any attention to Lu Yu. Lu Yu stood on the spot and gazed at Duan Lingtian who slowly went off into the distance. A bitter smile appeared on the corners of his mouth, and his legs were like they were filled with lead, unable to move for an extremely long time. Luckily I didn't agree to his life and death arena invitation that day, otherwise, I would die for sure. In these few days, he'd dreamt back to that day many times, and in those dreams, Lu Yu would dream the scene of Duan Lingtian inviting him to battle on the life and death arena. Every time, he would be scared awake. Then his body would be covered in cold sweat. When he recalled his choice that day, only now did he realize how wise his choice was. Duan Lingtian was even able to kill a 6th level Origin Core Stage Outer Court disciple, let alone he who is only a 5th level Origin Core Stage Outer Court disciple. He could imagine how if he had ascended to the life and death arena with Duan Lingtian that day, he would surely die without a doubt. Duan Lingtian was too terrifying. The few Megrez Peak disciples that watched Duan Lingtian leave gathered together. That Duan Lingtian had gone on the chain bridge, who's going to follow him? One of the Megrez Peak disciples asked in a low voice. For a moment, besides one of them being able to maintain his composure, the other few Megrez Peak disciples all lowered their heads. Duan Lingtian was an existence that was capable of killing a 6th level Origin Core Stage Outer Court disciple. They didn't dare take the risk to follow him. I'll go. Before long, the Megrez Peak disciple with a composed expression spoke out to offer his service. Duan Lingtian had only just passed the chain bridge when he noticed a tail behind him. It's him again. Duan Lingtian's sharp spiritual force allowed him to notice this person at the first possible moment, and it was precisely that Megrez Peak disciple that followed him the last time and was uncovered by him. Duan Lingtian's eyes became cold and fierce. This Megrez Peak disciple was actually still working for Zhao Lin. Moreover, he still dares follow me. Duan Lingtian arrived at Dubi Peak in next to no time, and wound around Dubi Peak before quickly entering into a remote place. Right when Duan Lingtian prepared to conceal himself nearby and intended to play the same trick again to draw the Megrez Peak disciple out. Duan Lingtian, I know you noticed me. The Megrez Peak disciple walked forward a few steps, then said in a low voice. I don't have any other intentions for following you. I just want to warn you that Elder Zhao Lin has found another few people, and wants us to cooperate to track you. The other few people have gone to notify Elder Zhao Lin. Before long, Elder Zhao Lin will come to Dubi Peak, take care. Duan Lingtian walked out slightly surprised, then looked at the Megrez Peak disciple. Why are you helping me? The Megrez Peak disciple was slightly embarrassed. You could have killed me yesterday, but you didn't. I owe you my life. Duan Lingtian glanced deeply at the Megrez Peak disciple. What's your name? Huangji. The Megrez Peak disciple hurriedly replied. He didn't dare be slow. Whoosh. Duan Lingtian raised his hand, and 10,000 gold appeared on his hand. Huangji, I presume you're helping Zhao Lin do things for the sake of money. Now, I'll give you 10,000 gold. In the future, if that Zhao Lin wants to follow me, then bring him to take a good circle around 7-star sword sect. Give him a line of hope, then make him come back empty-handed. As he spoke to this point, a trace of an evil smile appeared on the corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth. Huangji happily received the 10,000 gold, and hurriedly agreed. Since he'd gotten back his life from under the hands of Duan Lingtian, resentment towards Zhao Lin had arose in his heart. Now, he had an opportunity to make Zhao Lin suffer, and he even can obtain so much gold, so he naturally wouldn't miss the opportunity. I hope you don't disappoint me. Or else, now, Duan Lingtian was akin to giving Huangji a piece of candy to eat, then giving Huangji a slap, and his tone was filled with a threatening intention. Don't worry, I'll surely do this thing well, and won't disappoint you. Huangji swore with all sincerity. Go. Duan Lingtian waved his head, and he left after Huangji left. In next to no time, he'd arrived at the chain bridge that led to Alcade Peak, and then arrived at Alcade Peak. When Duan Lingtian once again arrived at Elder Bai's residence, he saw a young woman with a delicate and pretty appearance. He'd met this young woman twice. The first time was before the Outer Court Disciples test. He'd seen this woman following behind Elder Bai. The second time was at Alcade Peak. At that time, she was following behind Elder Bai as well, and seemed to be a disciple of Elder Bai's called Zuo Qing. She could be considered to be Li Fei's senior sister. Senior sister Zuo Qing. Duan Lingtian lightly smiled as he greeted the woman. Since she was Little Fei's senior sister, then she was naturally his senior sister as well. Duan Lingtian. A smile appeared on Zuo Qing's face when she saw Duan Lingtian. You came to look for junior sister, right? Yes. Duan Lingtian nodded with a light smile. I'll go get her. Zuo Qing turned around and left, and it wasn't long before she once again returned, this time with a young woman that had an extremely beautiful appearance that could be called peerless. The woman had a face like an angel, body like a demon, and caused anyone who glanced over to be unable to refrain from having their imaginations go wild, having a desire to push her down and ravage her. Scoundrel! The woman saw Duan Lingtian, and her watery beautiful eyes lit up, then threw herself towards Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian only felt a fragrant wind assail his nostrils, and softness entered his embrace. He slightly smiled as he took the woman that threw herself at him into his arms. Little Fei, it has been nearly 3 months since we've seen each other. Li Fei lightly nodded, and buried her head in Duan Lingtian's strong chest, unwilling to raise her head for a long time. Duan Lingtian stretched out his hand to stroke Li Fei's smooth back, and traces of a warm smile appeared on his face. Zuo Qing glanced at Li Fei with admiration when she saw this scene, then turned and left. She knew that this moment only belonged to this pair of little lovers. She felt happy for her junior sister, as if a woman was able to find a man like Duan Lingtian in their lifetime, then they wouldn't have lived in vain. For a moment, only Duan Lingtian and Li Fei who quietly embraced each other remained within the entire vast gorge. Little Fei, Elder Bai isn't here, right? Duan Lingtian's mouth nestled up to Li Fei's earlobe, and lightly blew upon them. Li Fei's delicate figure trembled, and seeming to have realized something, she lightly shook her head. Master had something to do and went out. Duan Lingtian's lower regions went hot when he heard Li Fei, and he breathed heavily as he extended his hand to hold Li Fei up in his arms, then directly rushed into the wooden house that Li Fei stayed in. The young man and woman who hadn't seen each other a long time, claimed each other to their heart's content. After the storm stopped, Duan Lingtian embraced Li Fei who had a satisfied expression and lay on his shoulder. Little Fei, when I came the last time, Elder Bai said you were at the critical juncture of breaking through, you seem to have broken through. The angelic face of Li Fei who had a face full of happiness now went rosy, and she lightly nodded. Yes, I've broken through. Have you seen Kair lately? Duan Lingtian thought of the delicate and touching woman that always stayed by his side, and his voice was gentle like water. Little sister Kair followed the Peak Master and went for a distant travel. She came to look for me, and we both went to Megres Peak, but no Megres Peak disciple knows where you live. So, she left with her disappointment. Li Fei extended her jade-like hand and placed her slender and smooth finger on Duan Lingtian's chest, then lightly moved her finger around. Duan Lingtian nodded. Kair had the protection of the Alcade Peak's Peak Master by her side, so he wasn't worried of Kair's safety. Li Fei looked curiously at Duan Lingtian. Scoundrel, where do you actually live? I and Kair asked tens of Megres Peak disciples, but there actually isn't a single person who knows where you ordinarily stay. Duan Lingtian shook his head and smiled. Not to mention Megres Peak disciples, even the Peak Master of Megres Peak or the Sect Master of the 7-Star Sword Sect, it would be impossible for them to know the place I'm staying at. Li Fei's beautiful face had a sense of curiosity when she heard Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian naturally didn't hide anything from Li Fei, and slowly spoke of the matter of discovering the stalactite cave that day. So it turns out that the 10,000-year stalactite milk you gave me and little sister Kair comes from there. Scoundrel, your luck is really too good, right? Even that sort of place could be found by you. If the 7-Star Sword Sect higher-ups were to know of this matter, wouldn't they be angered to death by you? Li Fei couldn't refrain from sighing with emotion, and as she finished, her peerlessly beautiful face had a slight smile. Yeah, my luck isn't bad. Duan Lingtian nodded, and when he spoke of the stalactite cave, he couldn't help but think of the 2 little pythons. He wondered where they were now, and what they were doing. 297 Chapter 298, The #1 Disciple in the Outer Court. Scoundrel, what are you thinking of? So deeply absorbed in it? Li Fei noticed Duan Lingtian's unnatural expression and asked with a wondering expression. Her tone seemed to have concern mixed within. It's nothing, I just suddenly thought of something. Duan Lingtian shook his head, and didn't tell Li Fei about the disappearance of the 2 little pythons. He didn't want Li Fei to be worried like him. Duan Lingtian and Li Fei chatted, and unknowingly, they chatted about the outer court martial competition 3 months from now. Scoundrel, I heard the outer court martial competition's rules have been changed. Li Fei suddenly said to Duan Lingtian. Rules have been changed? What rules have been changed? Duan Lingtian was stupefied, and asked. I heard from Master that when all is said and done, the change of the rules this time is because of you. As she spoke up to hear, Li Fei rolled her eyes at Duan Lingtian, although she knew her man's ability was great, but when she heard her man was able to kill even a 6th level origin core stage outer court disciple, she couldn't help but be shocked in her heart. If Duan Lingtian used an offense inscription, she wouldn't feel it to be strange. But the problem was, Duan Lingtian didn't use an offense inscription from the beginning until the end, and completely used his true strength to kill his opponent. Because of me, what Li Fei said caused Duan Lingtian to be extremely puzzled. What has the 7-star sword sect outer court martial competition changing rules have to do with him? Yes. Li Fei nodded, then looked at Duan Lingtian with a wondering gaze, and didn't continue beating around the bush and directly said. I heard from Master that since the news of you killing the Fecta Peak's 6th level origin core stage outer court disciple, Xiao Ying, was spread out, besides out Alcade Peaks and your Megrez Peaks Peak Masters, the Peak Masters of the other 4 Great Sword Peaks specially started a meeting of the 6 peaks last month. The content of the meeting was targeted towards the outer court martial competition 3 months from now. In the past outer court martial competitions, outer court disciples must have entered the 7-star sword sect for less than 3 years to participate, but this time, the peak masters of the 6 peaks instead decided to remove this limitation. This time, so long as one is an outer court disciple, anyone from the 6 peaks of the 7-star sword sect are able to participate in the outer court martial competition. Li Fei finished in a single breath. Duan Lingtian's brows knit. He'd never imagined that killing Xiao Ying would cause such a chain reaction. Is there any need to go to such lengths? Duan Lingtian shook his head and smiled. He never imagined that he had such great faith as to be able to make the peak masters of the 6 peaks of 7-star sword sect to specially hold a meeting for him. Of course, Duan Lingtian was able to guess the intentions of the peak masters of the 6 great sword peaks in doing this. It was none other than thinking if they didn't change the rules, the outer court martial competition this time would be without suspense, as he, Duan Lingtian, would surely become the first place in the outer court martial competition. They're precisely afraid of you obtaining the first place, so they intentionally tried to obstruct you. Li Fei grunted in a low voice, and had a displeased expression. All right, this is nothing to be unhappy about. They did this because they don't hope for the first place of the outer court martial competition to be known already before the martial competition has even begun. If it's really like this, then the confidence of the other outer court disciples would surely take a blow. Duan Lingtian laughed. He was completely able to understand the intentions of the peak masters of the 6 great sword peaks. Still laughing. If it's really like this, then at that time, there will surely be some 7th level origin core stage outer court disciples that would be participating. During the outer court martial competition, you can't use any external sources of strength besides spirit weapons. In other words, your inscriptions can't be used. Li Fei looked at Duan Lingtian seeming to be slightly unhappy. In that way, you'll be unable to obtain first place. Li Fei was extremely unhappy in her heart towards the first place that originally ought to be Duan Lingtian's being deprived from him like this. In her heart, the man of her, Li Fei, was always the most outstanding. Can't use inscriptions. Duan Lingtian was slightly surprised, but with a quick thought, he came to an understanding. Inscriptions were after all not similar to spirit weapons, as to a certain extent, the existence of inscriptions did indeed affect the fairness of the outer court martial competition. What, little Fei, you're so not confident of your man? Duan Lingtian's mischievously placed his hand on the little girl's delicate body that didn't have a bit of excess flesh, and felt her up. The little girl's delicate body trembled, and her cheeks blushed rosy. Duan Lingtian's breathing became hurried when he saw this, and once again turned over on top of her, and galloped to his heart's content. Duan Lingtian only left after being intimate with her for an entire day. A house of pleasures, a tomb of heroes, our forefathers didn't lie. Duan Lingtian sighed emotionally in his heart when he left the Alcade Peak, as although he'd been intimate with Li Fei for the entire day, but as far as he was concerned, it only seemed like an instant. Duan Lingtian shook his head and his mind cleared slightly, then he stepped onto the chain bridge to return to the main peak, Dubi Peak. The sun had already set in the west when Duan Lingtian arrived at the stone platform which the chain bridge that led to Megrez Peak was located, and he noticed that many Megrez Peak disciples were stepping onto the chain bridge to head towards Megrez Peak. HMPH. A cold snort sounded out nearby. Duan Lingtian turned over to gaze over, and only now did he notice the Megrez Peak outer court elder, Zhao Lin, on the stone platform, staring at him with a gloomy expression. Meanwhile, Duan Lingtian also noticed Huangji standing nearby, and was winking at him. Duan Lingtian snickered in his heart. Looks like Huangji really did take Zhao Lin to go around the 7-star sword sect the entire day. Seeing Zhao Lin's exasperated appearance, Duan Lingtian suddenly felt that spending that 10,000 gold was worth it. Elder Zhao Lin, it's been a long time. Duan Lingtian stood in the stream of people that flowed ceaselessly, and looked at Zhao Lin as he greeted him with a light smile, as if he was greeting an old friend. Zhao Lin paid no attention to Duan Lingtian, and his expression was as unsightly could be. Perhaps, as far as he was concerned, the only reason he came back empty-handed today was because of Duan Lingtian being too cunning, causing him to have no tracks to find. He didn't suspect Huangji who led the way. Duan Lingtian shrugged when he saw Zhao Lin having no intention of responding to him, and the corners of his mouth curled into a provoking smile as he deeply glanced at Zhao Lin before stepping onto the chain bridge and heading towards Megrez Peak. There were too many people here currently, so he wasn't worried that Zhao Lin would make a move against him. In next to no time, Duan Lingtian noticed Zhao Lin following him from behind. He didn't pay any attention. Relying on his counter-tracking methods, it would be extremely easy if he wanted to escape Zhao Lin's pursuit. After Duan Lingtian returned to Megrez Peak, he wound a few circles around the trade hall that streams of people surged through, and successfully threw off Zhao Lin, then swaggered off back to the peak of Megrez Peak and returned to the stalactite cave. Within the trade hall, after noticing Duan Lingtian's tracks vanishing and searching for another half an hour without gain, Zhao Lin's face was incomparably gloomy. Duan Lingtian, I'll find a chance sooner or later, you just wait. His wait was a wait of an entire 3 months. Alioth Peak. On the chain bridge, a young man with a gloomy expression walked swiftly into the Alioth Peak platform. This young man had an extremely special appearance, his features were distorted and hideous, and his pair of triangular eyes seemed to be always flickering with a gloomy sheen. He stood there and his entire person seemed like a venomous snake that was waiting for a chance to swallow one up. However, when the young man passed them, the groups of Alioth Peak disciples all respectfully greeted him. Senior Brother Shi Hao. Senior Brother Shi Hao. Senior Brother Shi Hao. At the same time that these Alioth Peak disciples greeted him, expressions of respect and fear appeared on their faces. They were clear in their hearts that this young man with an appearance that was intolerable to the eye, was in existence with an extremely formidable strength. He was also a famous person of their Alioth Peak, and even was the disciple that was publicly acknowledged by most disciples as the #1 disciple in the outer court of the 7-star sword sect. Shi Hao, Senior Brother Shi Hao's expression seems to be slightly unsightly. Isn't his expression always like this? I don't see any difference. Take a careful look again, also, looks at his eyes, don't they have rage mixed within? I wonder who offended him. It really is so, 2 Alioth Peak disciples stood at the side and looked at Shi Hao walk to Alioth Peak from afar as they whispered in discussion. Shi Hao. Outside the Alioth Peak trade hall, a figure walked like the wind, and arrived near the chain bridge in the blink of an eye to stand before Shi Hao. This was a robust middle-aged man with a thick build, and his eyes were radiating vigor. Elder Zhang Bing. Shi Hao lowered his arrogant head before this robust middle-aged man. Shi Hao, there's something I want to tell you. The outer court martial competition 3 months from now doesn't impose the restriction of only allowing outer court disciples who have entered the 7-star sword sect for less than 3 years to participate. So long as one is an outer court disciple, one can participate. You can also participate. Zhang Bing, the outer court elder of Alioth Peak, smiled as he said to Shi Hao. This time, my Alioth Peak will be relying on you. As far as he was concerned, with Shi Hao's strength, taking the first place in the outer court martial competition 3 months from now was something that was without any suspense if nothing unexpected happened. What's going on? Shi Hao was slightly absent-minded earlier, but now when he heard Zhang Bing, his spirit was roused. The rules of the outer court martial competition always had restrictions, why were changes made suddenly this time? It was difficult for him to understand. This has to be told starting from an outer court disciple of Megrez Peak. When Zhang Bing spoke up to hear, a trace of envy flashed within his eyes. 3 months ago, a black horse appeared within the batch of new outer court disciples that our 7-star sword sect recruited. That's a young man around the age of 20, and he later went to Megres Peak. He hadn't come to Megres Peak for long when he killed 2 4th-level Origin Core Stage Outer Court disciples in the Megres Peak's life and death arena. The 2 Outer Court disciples were both Megres Peak disciples. They both joined forces to deal with that young man, but the result was they were killed by the young man in a single move. The natural talent of this young man is simply shocking. The luck of the Megres Peak is really good, actually able to obtain such a monstrous outer court disciple. Shi Hao, what's wrong? Why's your expression so unsightly? Zhang Bing talked for a long time, and in the end he noticed Shi Hao's face sank suddenly. Shi Hao's originally distorted and hideous features now seemed to have completely entangled together. It looked extremely terrifying. Elder Zhang Bing, you said that young man entered the 7-star sword sect 3 months ago. Finally, Shi Hao spoke with a voice that had a sense of coldness mixed within. 298 Chapter 299, 3 months later. Yeah, what's wrong? Zhang Bing noticed that Shi Hao's expression was off, and asked slightly curiously. Around 20, and killed 2 4th-level Origin Core Stage disciples. How's his cultivation? Shi Hao took a deep breath and asked. Seems to be at the 5th level of the Origin Core Stage. Zhang Bing sighed. He didn't only kill 2 4th-level Origin Core Stage Outer Court disciples, even a 6th-level Origin Core Stage disciple of the Fecta Peak was killed by him. What? Shi Hao pupils constricted and has an astonished expression. Elder Zhang Bing, didn't you say he's only at the 5th level of the Origin Core Stage? He is at the 5th level of the Origin Core Stage, but he did indeed kill a 6th-level Origin Core Stage Outer Court disciple. You ought to have heard of that 6th-level Origin Core Stage Outer Court disciple. It's the Fecta Peak's Xiaoying. Zhang Bing slowly said. Even now when he mentioned this matter, his heart couldn't help but surge. He even felt that he might be dreaming. Xiaoying. Shi Hao had naturally heard of Xiaoying, and knew that Xiaoying could be considered as outstanding amongst the Fecta Peak Outer Court disciples. Moreover, he was supposedly about to break through to the 7th level of the Origin Core Stage soon. And would become a 7-star sword sect inner court disciple sooner or later. Could it be that Xiaoying didn't use a spirit sword? Whereas that 5th level Origin Core Stage Outer Court disciple used a spirit sword? Shi Hao asked in a low voice. It was difficult for him to imagine that if it wasn't like this, how could a 5th-level Origin Core Stage martial artist be able to kill a 6th-level Origin Core Stage martial artist? No, Xiaoying used a grade 7 spirit sword, and fought with his full strength. As for that 5th-level Origin Core Stage Outer Court disciple, he used a grade 7 spirit sword as well. Allegedly, the disparity of strength between the two of them was extremely large during that battle, a difference of the strength of over 10 ancient mammoths. But at the critical juncture, that 5th-level Origin Core Stage Outer Court disciple instead shattered the bones of Xiaoying's entire body with a single finger strike. I wonder what martial skill he used. As he spoke up to hear, Zhang Bing, this existence at the void-prying stage couldn't help but feel a chill run down his spine. As far as he was concerned, that 5th-level Origin Core Stage Outer Court disciple of Megres Peak was too strange. Could he have used an offensive inscription to kill Xiaoying? Shi Hao frowned and was slightly not daring to believe it. A mere martial skill was so heaven-defying. Even if it was an Earth-rank martial skill, it still might not be so heaven-defying, right? Moreover, unless it was a void-prying stage martial artist that had comprehended force, otherwise, it was utterly impossible to cultivate Earth-rank martial skills. As for the heaven-rank martial skills of legend, the required conditions are even harsher. So, the martial skills that an Origin Core Stage martial artist was able to cultivate was at most a profound rank martial skill. But would there be such a strange and terrifying martial skill amongst the high-grade profound rank martial skills? He was extremely doubtful in his heart. Absolutely not. Zhang Bing shook his head. After the incident, some Fecta Peak Outer Court elders had inspected Xiaoying's corpse, and confirmed that Xiaoying's injuries were absolutely not caused from offensive inscriptions. The bones of that Xiaoying's body were completely shattered by origin energy. It's difficult to imagine what martial skill that was. Around 20, even able to kill a 6th-level Origin Core Stage martial artist. Shi Hao took a deep breath, his triangular eyes flickered with an awe-inspiring cold light, and his heart trembled. It ought to be him. What? Shi Hao, you know him? Zhang Bing felt the killing intent emitted from Shi Hao's body, and had a bewildered expression. Elder Zhang Bing, besides him, among the outer court disciples that had just entered 7-star sword sect 3 months ago, are there any other existences that are around 20 and have stepped into the 4th level of the origin core stage or above? Shi Hao wanted to confirm a step further. I've never heard of it. Moreover, this is practically impossible. Our 7-star sword sect being able to recruit such a genius martial artist can already be considered as luck. A genius martial artist like this isn't like cabbage sold in markets. Zhang Bing shook his head, and he felt Shi Hao was thinking too wishfully. Elder Zhang Bing, what's the name of this Megrez Peak outer court disciple? Shi Hao looked at Zhang Bing and asked. Duan Ling Tian, Zhang Bing said, as he deeply remembered this name the first time he heard it. Only because this was the name of a monstrous martial artist. Thank you, Elder Zhang Bing. Shi Hao nodded to Zhang Bing, then turned around and left, once again stepping onto the chain bridge, heading towards Dubi Peak. Why does Shi Hao feel slightly strange after returning from his trip to train and gain experience? Zhang Bing gazed at Shi Hao's figure that disappeared into the distance, and frowned. It's him. It's surely him. On the chain bridge, Shi Hao walked like the wind, and his triangular eyes flickered with dense killing intent. Duan Ling Tian, you actually dared cripple my sister's Dantian. I won't let you off, you will surely die. Under his extreme rage, Shi Hao's distorted and hideous face completely entangled together, causing some of the Alioth Peak disciples that passed by on the chain bridge to feel coldness arise from deep within their hearts from just a single glance at him, and they felt a chill run down their spines. Senior brother Shi Hao. When they greeted Shi Hao now, they were afraid to the point their voices trembled. Shi Hao didn't stop after he arrived at Dubi Peak, and stepped onto the chain bridge that headed to Megrez Peak. He wanted to go to Megrez Peak, to drag out the person that crippled his sister, Xian's Dantian. He wanted to take revenge. He wanted to take revenge for the sister he doted on the most. Duan Ling Tian didn't know that not long after he returned from Alcade Peak, the entire Megrez Peak was in an uproar. The Alioth Peak outer court disciple, Shi Hao, the #1 disciple in the 7-star sword sect's outer court, spread word of wanting to battle Duan Ling Tian in the life and death arena, until only one party remained. Duan Ling Tian naturally didn't know all this. But, on the Megrez Peak, after not seeing a trace of Duan Ling Tian for a long time, even more people thought Duan Ling Tian was afraid of Shi Hao and didn't dare reveal himself. Actually, it's normal that Duan Ling Tian is afraid, as senior brother Shi Hao is the #1 disciple in our 7-star sword sect's outer court, and there's practically no outer court disciples that are capable of rivaling him. You're right, if I'm Duan Ling Tian, I wouldn't reveal myself as well. Even though Duan Ling Tian was able to kill the 6th level origin core stage Xiaoying, but senior brother Shi Hao is in existence at the 7th level of the origin core stage. The 6th level of the origin core stage and the 7th level of the origin core stage is a divide, and there's a difference of an entire 20 ancient mammoths worth of strength amongst the two. Once it's amplified by a spirit sword, the difference is even larger. Could it be that Duan Ling Tian is able to hide forever, and not participate in the outer court martial competition 3 months from now? The prizes of the outer court martial competition are extremely generous. Allegedly this time there's even an extremely valuable spirit fruit as the reward for the first place in the outer court martial competition. How do you know? I know a senior brother from the inner court. He had some relationship with an inner court elder, and it was he who told me. Along with the arrival of Shi Hao, and the upcoming outer court martial competition, the entire Megrez Peak was completely bustling. But, even though Shi Hao had waited in Megrez Peak for many days, but from beginning till the end, Duan Ling Tian didn't appear, and in the end he temporarily left. However, before he left, he put down some harsh words. Duan Ling Tian, I, Shi Hao, the brother of Shi Yan, swear to not stop until you die. Within the 7-star sword sect, if there's you then there's no me, and if there's me then there's no you. When Duan Ling Tian received these words, it was already 3 months later. At the peak of Megrez Peak, on the tilted tree that's concealed within the clouds and mist. A figure that was swift like the wind seemed to transform into an agile spirit serpent as it flashed out of the cave passage behind the tilted tree, and firmly stood on the tilted tree. The tilted tree didn't even sway a bit. It's been 3 months. Duan Ling Tian gazed past through the clouds and mist to gaze at the direction where the primeval forest was located. After a long time, he sighed. Those 2 little fellows actually still haven't returned. After returning from Alcade Peak the other time, Duan Ling Tian had been cultivating within the stalactite cave ever since, and time slipped by. In the blink of an eye, it was already 3 months later. Swoosh! Duan Lingtian's figure moved, using the tilted tree to leap up to the peak of Megre's Peak. That outer court martial competition ought to be starting soon, right? Duan Lingtian came down from the peak, and quickly arrived at the vast platform that the trade hall was located on. As far as he was concerned, it would be easiest to obtain information of how the outer court martial competition's rules had changed in the trade hall that streams of people flowed through. But he'd only arrived nearby the trade hall when he noticed odd gazes coming from the crowd of Megre's Peak disciples, all descending onto him in unison. Is there something on my face? Duan Lingtian couldn't help but be dazed when he saw this scene. Right when his heart was filled with questions, a figure walked towards him from afar. Duan Lingtian. He Chun. Duan Lingtian recognized this Megre's Peel disciple. It was precisely Hu Li's friend, He Chun. Duan Lingtian, you've finally appeared. I even thought that you'd hidden yourself and didn't intend to participate in the outer court martial competition this time. He Chun sized up Duan Lingtian for a while, then shook his head and smiled. Hide. Duan Lingtian was puzzled when he heard He Chun. What does He Chun mean by this? Hide from what? Huh? He Chun asked when he saw Duan Lingtian's stunned expression. Could it be that it wasn't because of hiding from that Shi Hao that you didn't reveal yourself for 3 months? Shi Hao. Duan Lingtian frowned. Who's that? I don't know him at all. He Chun was speechless. Are you sure you don't know him? It can't be. If you don't know him, then why did he spread word that he wanted to invite you to battle in the life and death arena? Invite me to battle in the life and death arena? Duan Lingtian's frown grew deeper. His heart lightly sank. Could it be something that outer court elder, Zhao Lin, did? Exactly. He came 3 months ago, and even stayed on our Megre's Peak for some time. In the end he left after being unable to wait for your arrival. After that, he successively came another few more times, and still you didn't arrive. All of us thought that you didn't appear because you were hiding from him. He Chun nodded, then slowly said. Wait, you said earlier that he came. He isn't from our Megre's Peak. Duan Lingtian discerned some clues from He Chun's words. Could it be that he's an inner court disciple that Zhao Lin found? Duan Lingtian, you've really never heard of him? He's Shi Hao. He Chun's gaze was slightly strange, and he felt that Duan Lingtian had entered the 7-star sword sect for nearly half a year in any case, but actually hasn't even heard of the number 1 disciple in the 7-star sword sect's outer court, Shi Hao. It was truly inconceivable. 299 Chapter 300. Outer Court Martial Competition. Is he very famous? Duan Lingtian noticed He Chun's surprised expression, and asked with a bewildered and dazed expression. Shi Hao. Not right. This name seemed like he'd heard it somewhere, but, for a moment he was unable to recall it. Of course he's famous. He Chun discerned that Duan Lingtian really hadn't heard of Shi Hao before and couldn't help but explain. Shi Hao, it's the disciple that's publicly acknowledged by most disciples as the number 1 disciple in our 7-star sword sect's outer court. There's practically no one in the outer court disciples that is his match. Number 1 in the outer court? Duan Lingtian's pupils constricted. He'd finally recalled it. He remembered that Shi Yan had once bawled before him when he crippled her Dantian that day. She said something about having a brother who was the number 1 in the outer court. Moreover, her brother was an existence that was about to become an inner court disciple, a quasi-inner court disciple. Later on, Elder Bai had warned him that he should be careful of Shi Yan's brother Shi Hao. So it turned out to be that the person He Chun mentioned who wanted to ascend the life and death arena to battle him, was precisely that Shi Hao. Shi Yan's brother. He Chun thought Duan Lingtian was afraid when he saw Duan Lingtian's expression that was ceaselessly changed, and hurriedly warned. Duan Lingtian, if you don't have any urgent matters, then continue hiding. It probably wouldn't be long before that Shi Hao will know of the news that you appeared here, and at that time he will surely come find you at the first possible moment. Then let him come. Duan Lingtian shrugged and had an indifferent expression, then looked at He Chun and asked with a light smile. He Chun, Hu Li ought to have returned already, right? Huh. He Chun saw Duan Lingtian's indifferent expression and laughed bitterly. His only thought was that Duan Lingtian was like a newborn calf that didn't fear a tiger. He asked me to tell you that in the future, he will let you see anew him. Besides that, the Hu clan he's from is at Clarity City. Duan Lingtian nodded, and remembered it in his heart. He was happy for Hu Li as Hu Li was able to be so optimistic. At least, Hu Li didn't sink into the shadows of the past. Duan Lingtian, I think you should hide for a while. He Chun felt his scalp go slightly numb when he thought of Shi Hao. As far as he was concerned, the strength of Shi Hao was too formidable, and was far from something Duan Lingtian could go against. You can hide at the beginning, but you can't hide forever, some things have to be faced. Duan Lingtian shrugged and shook his head as he smiled. He Chun went silent. Right, He Chun, when is the outer court martial competition starting? Besides that, what do I have to do if I want to participate? Since He Chun happened to be here, Duan Lingtian took the opportunity to ask. He left the stalactite cave this time precisely for the sake of the outer court martial competition this time. Not only did he want to participate in the outer court martial competition, he wanted to obtain the first place. This was the promise he made to Hu Li. A man's promise. The first round of the outer court martial competition is 3 days from now. So long as you're a Megrez Peak disciples, you can participate in the first round of the outer court martial competition, and you don't have to do anything. At that time, people who want to participate can all gather at the Megrez platform to receive their number token, then undergo elimination battles to decide on the strongest 10. He Chun said to Duan Lingtian. But, the outer court martial competition this time is different from the previous years, as if doesn't have restrictions like before. This time, many 7th level origin core stage outer court disciples will participate. Duan Lingtian nodded. This was something he'd already heard from Li Fei earlier, and was mentally prepared. 7th level origin core stage. So what? Since he'd promised Hu Li that he would seize the first place in the outer court martial competition, then he would surely do it. Duan Lingtian's gaze was incomparably firm. He Chun, then I'll be returning first, see you in 3 days. Duan Lingtian bid his farewells to He Chun, then turned around and left, disappearing before the eyes of all the Megrez Peak disciples. Coming and going without a trace, elusive. It wasn't long before a figure that dashed like the wind arrived at Megrez Peak, and under the guidance of some Megrez Peak disciples, he found He Chun. You know Duan Lingtian? The young man with a distorted and hideous expression, sprung his triangular eyes wide open as he stared fixedly at He Chun. He Chun never imagined that Shi Hao would actually find his place of cultivation, and the corners of his mouth curled into a bitter smile as he nodded. Take me to him. Shi Hao's eyes flickered with a gloomy sheen, and his voice was cold as ice. I don't know where he cultivates. He Chun shook his head. Shi Hao's face sank, and his triangular eyes stared at He Chun, and in the end noticed that He Chun seemed to not be lying. What did he look for you for? It was only a chance meeting. He asked me some things about the outer court martial competition, then left. He Chun didn't conceal anything. As far as he was concerned, there was no need to conceal this, as all the Megrez Peak disciples would know 3 days from now. In other words, he will participate in the outer court martial competition this time. Shi Hao's triangular eyes shone, and the corner of his mouth curled into a cold smile that had a trace of gloominess, as if Duan Lingtian was already within his grasp. Yes, He Chun nodded. This time he could be sure. He was able to discern that Duan Lingtian appeared nearby the trade hall today precisely to obtain information about the outer court martial competition. That's good. Shi Hao's triangular eyes flickered with a cold light. He raised his hand to directly hit He Chun flying, and he only coldly snorted and left after he saw He Chun crash onto the ground. Pooh! He Chun won injured and spat out a mouthful of blood, and the corners of his mouth curled into a bitter smile. This Shi Hao was as overbearing as the rumors said after all. 3 days later, the first round of the 7-star sword sect's outer court martial competition started. The outer courts of the 6 great sword peaks would decide on the 10 strongest outer court disciples today, then they would participate in the second round of the outer court martial competition tomorrow. The second round of the outer court martial competition was the true outer court martial competition. Disciples that are outstanding in the second round of the outer court martial competition will be able to obtain generous prizes that was bestowed by the 7-star sword sect. This was the reason that caused all the outer court disciples to flock towards the outer court martial competition. Whoosh! On the peak of Megrez Peak, a figure dashed like the wind, and in the blink of an eye, the figure flashed down to arrive nearby the trade hall. Where's the Megrez platform? The person that come down from the peak was precisely Duan Lingtian. Follow them. Duan Lingtian, who didn't know the location of the first round of the outer court martial competition, merged into the stream of people that were on the Megrez Peak mountain path. Instantly, some of the nearby Megrez Peak disciples recognized Duan Lingtian. It's Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian, you actually still dare to appear. Could it be that you aren't afraid of senior brother Shi Hao? Yeah, Duan Lingtian, if senior brother Shi Hao knows that you've appeared, he would surely not let you off. A burst of similar words entered into Duan Lingtian's ears. Duan Lingtian only smiled indifferently towards this and paid no attention to it. His figure flashed, dashing like the wind as he flashed down the mountain while following along the stream of people. Before long, Duan Lingtian passed the vast platform that the life and death arena was located on. Continue down. Finally, Duan Lingtian arrived at the Megrez platform. Duan Lingtian's gaze flickered as he looked at this Megrez platform that occupied an area far larger than the platform the life and death arena was on. This Megrez platform is rather huge. The Megrez platform was extremely large, and on it stood 10 spacious stone arenas. Any one of these stone arenas weren't inferior to the life and death arena. Based on Duan Lingtian's guess, these stone arenas ought to be the combat rings that were used to carry out the elimination battles for the first round of the outer court martial competition. Before long, many outer court disciples had gathered on the Megrez platform. These outer court disciples were brimming with vigor, and rubbed their fists and palms together, wanting to become one of the 10 people that advance in the end today. Only in this way would they have a chance to obtain the prizes bestowed by the 7-star sword sect. Duan Lingtian stood there, and naturally attracted many gazes. In Megrez Peak, Duan Lingtian was absolutely considered as a famous person currently. But amongst the people that looked at Duan Lingtian, some of them had a trace of pleasure in Duan Lingtian's misfortune mixed in their eyes. This Duan Lingtian actually dares participate in the outer court martial competition. Even if he successfully advances, he would surely encounter senior brother Shihao in the end. Based on the hatred senior brother Shihao has towards him, even if he doesn't die, he will be crippled. If I was him, I'd surely not participate in the outer court martial competition this time. Yeah, what he should do now is hide and cultivate, and come out when his cultivation breaks through to the 7th level of the origin core stage. With his natural talent, it ought to not take him too long. At that time, senior brother Shihao might not be able to do anything to him. I really don't know what he is thinking. The crowd of Megrez Peak disciples whispered amongst themselves. Duan Lingtian could vaguely hear some of it, but he didn't pay any attention. Hide, if he did that, then he wasn't Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian. Before long, Duan Lingtian saw He Chun had arrived. But, he noticed that there was an injury on the corner of He Chun's mouth, and he frowned. He Chun, who injured you? It was Shihao. It's not a big deal, it's only a flesh injury. He Chun shook his head and smiled, with an indifferent expression. Shihao. Duan Lingtian frowned, and felt it to be slightly strange. Why did he injure you? Do you have a dispute with him? He Chun shook his head. No, 3 days ago, some people saw me talking to you nearby the trade hall, and they told Shihao. Shihao found my place of cultivation and asked me about you. I told him about you participating in the outer court martial competition. I'm sorry. As he finished speaking, He Chun had a face full of an apologetic expression. It's only a small matter. Even if you didn't say so, he would know today. Duan Lingtian lightly smiled and didn't mind. How about it? Do you have any confidence in advancing today? Don't kid around. I never had the intention of participating when I came here today, and I only came to cheer you on, but, wanting to advance with your strength is extremely easy. He Chun's words were filled with confidence to Duan Lingtian. It's senior brother He Dong. Right at this moment, a surprised voice sounded out, causing many Megrez Peak disciples to turn and look. Duan Lingtian looked over as well. He saw a young man around the age of 25 walking over swiftly from a side of the mountain path. All the Megrez Peak disciples fervently greeted him everywhere he passed. Senior brother He Dong, senior brother He Dong, senior brother He Dong, After the young man walked into the Megrez platform, he stood at the side and closed his eyes to rest his mind, ignoring everything in his surroundings.